We've all heard the classic underdog tale: some loser bites the dust, gets reincarnated, and grabs a second shot at glory. But flip the script. What if that lucky soul wasn't a person at all, but the very last dragon on Earth? Slaughtered by human hands, fate decides to play a cruel joke, rebirthing him as a human brat named Day in the Sticks, forcing him to grind his way back to power. Before long, he's enrolling in the academy. Predictable, maybe. But before we get to the chaos, let's rewind to where it all began. Dragons were once terrified titans of raw power, which naturally put a massive target on their backs. Humans hunted them to near extinction. Soon, only one remained. A solitary survivor consumed by a single purpose: absolute vengeance against the human race. He fought like a demon, but numbers don't lie. The sheer swarm of human warriors eventually overwhelmed him. Darkness took him. But then, voices. He cracked his eyes open, only to find himself cradled in the arms of a man. He was tiny, vulnerable. Total disorientation hit him. The mighty worm, once a calamity, was now squirming helplessly in the grasp of a fragile human. The dad beamed, thinking his son was bonding with him. Meanwhile, the kid was actively trying to summon a blast of dragon fire to incinerate the lowly ape holding him. He charged up a legendary breath attack, but instead of an inferno, he projectile vomited milk all over his father's face. The father recoiled in shock, sputtering as the warm liquid coated his mug. Absolutely gross. The baby just sat there, dumbfounded. Where was the fire? What happened to his magic? Then the mother reached out. The tiny former dragon panicked, terrified of what this human woman planned to do to him. To his shock, she didn't strike. She caressed his cheek, cooing his new name, Day. He fumed silently. What a ridiculous name. And why was she being so nice? Trapped in silence, he wondered if these humans had any clue they were holding their mortal enemy. As his mother gazed at him with pure adoration, the dragon's mind raced. If the heavens had granted him a do-over, even in this puny form, it was a second chance. He could finally execute his vengeance on the species that slaughtered his kin. The embers of hatred stoked into a roaring fire. It was payback time. He would use this human vessel to eradicate them, one by one, giving them a taste of their own medicine. While Day plotted genocide in his infant brain, his dad watched him squirm inside, sensing this kid was going to be a handful growing up. Safe in his mother's arms, Day scowled, his little face twisted in rage as he fantasized about the slaughter. But then, the ultimate enemy struck nap time. Exhausted from the sheer effort of trying to talk, he drifted off, cursing the pathetic frailty of human biology. Time flew. Day grew a bit and started figuring out how this strange human world operated. He eventually learned their names. Calling them short hair and long hair was getting old. His captors' parents were Jack and Scarlet. He had to admit, they were better looking than the average peasant. Scarlet had a radiance about her, a gentle beauty that matched her soft heart. Jack was a tank, more muscle than man, looking like he could bench press a horse. The locals treated them like royalty. Apparently, being adventurers was a big deal around here. One neighbor dropped by to thank Jack for saving his wife. Apparently, she'd almost been monster chow in the Black Forest until Jack's sword skills bailed her out. Another villager couldn't stop praising Scarlet. Turns out she's a high-tier mage, the kind you don't find within a 100-mile radius of this backwater. Basically, this village would be toast without them. The locals heaped praise on the Talon family, but the couple just shrugged it off with humble anyone would have done it smiles. All's well that ends well. Just then, Scarlet spotted little Day scuttling across the floorboards. Maternal instinct kicked in. She knew he was hungry and went to grab food. A neighbor squinted at the boy, muttering about his red hair before dismissing it as a trick of the light. Jack corrected him casually, mentioning that the crimson locks had started sprouting a few days prior. The neighbors eventually took off, reminding Jack they were counting on him to keep the local beasts away from their livestock. The dragon toddler smirked internally. Red hair. That wasn't genetics. That was proof his draconic power was leaking through. Once outside, the villagers' tone shifted. Whispers circulated that the Talons might be cursed. It wasn't a stretch. Adventuring is a dangerous gig, and who knows what kind of dark mojo sticks to you after slaying monsters all day. Day gloated. He could smell their fear. They weren't superstitious. They were intuitively terrified of his majestic aura. But his parents, they were the real puzzle. Scarlet scooped him up, oblivious to his aura, and tried to feed him. Day wasn't about to act civilized. He dove face first into the bowl, creating a disaster zone of food. Yet, She didn't get mad. It drove him crazy no matter how much he acted out. These humans just wouldn't snap at him. He even relieved himself right into his dad's open mouth while the man was napping. But instead of flying into a rage, they just beamed at him like idiots. After Ray relieved himself right into his old man's mouth, Jack actually looked proud. Convinced his son was a prodigy just for knowing how to take a leak on his own. Living among humans like this? Ray decided if hell was real, he was definitely in it. Turns out, adventurers are a dying breed in this world. And his mom, being a mage, that's even rarer. The dragon-turned-toddler figured once he regained the ultimate magic, his dragon force exacting revenge would be a walk in the park. Time flew. Ray hit the terrible twos. At this age, every kid gets a shot at the mage evaluation. Today was Judgment Day. Did he have mana or not? Jack waved them off with a good luck. While Ray clung to his mom's arm as the carriage rolled out, he told himself there was no way he'd fail. Reincarnated red dragon avatar plus a mage lineage. It was in the bag. Once his magic was back online, nobody could stop his climb back to the apex. They hit town, and the redhead stretched his limbs after the nap. Only one thing bugged him, this frail human vessel. As Scarlet carted him around the bustling central plaza, Ray scanned the scene. Adventurers were hawking high-grade beast crystals left and right. A beggar approached an adventurer for a scrap of food, only to get booted away with a warning to stop blocking business. The crowd just pitied the guy's bad luck. But Ray, watching from his perch, saw the ugly truth. Humans might be the same species, but they still trampled on the weak and mocked the poor. He flashed back to his dragon life. He'd made it his duty to shield the defenseless, worked himself to the bone, and still failed. Snapping out of memory lane, they finally reached Roland Academy. The line for the magic assessment stretched around the block. Ray was buzzing with anticipation. Looking around, at the kids bawling their eyes out because they flunked, one brat threw a tantrum, screaming about unfairness. The dragon kid scoffed, "Idiot. The world has never been fair." He chilled in his mom's arms until the call finally came. Ray Talon. The examiner beckoned them over, guiding Scarlet to place her son's hand on the crystal sphere. Simple rules: if the kid had the spark, the crystal would glow. The color revealed their affinity. He reached out, ready to blow their minds. They were about to witness the power of a mighty red dragon, smug as hell. He waited for the blinding light. As a dragon, he'd mastered every form of magic there was. Suddenly, Scarlet started sobbing. Ray watched tears stream down her face. He blinked. Was she overwhelmed by his genius? Overjoyed? They shared an element. Then reality hit. The crystal ball was dark, dead silent. The old mage shattered his ego with a sigh. Ray had zero magical potential. Panic set in. His inner voice screamed he was the strongest red dragon in his past life. A dragon without magic, that's absurd. Desperate, Scarlet asked the mage to double-check. After all, she was an alum here. Ray, meanwhile, went ballistic. He slapped his tiny hand against the glass, convinced the old man was incompetent, and the stupid ball was busted. The mage snatched the orb away, shrugging helplessly. That was the last straw for the dragon's pride. Ray spat out his pacifier. Did this geezer know who he was dealing with? The ruler of magic, full of rage. The toddler grabbed the old man's long beard and yanked hard. In his frustration, he figured the fraud was lying, trying to hide his power to trick them. Scarlet panicked, trying to pry her son off. But Ray was in berserker mode, using the beard like a tug-of-war rope. He knew everything about magic. There was absolutely no way a dragon soul came up empty. A legendary dragon reincarnated with zero mana. It had to be some sick joke. On the carriage ride back, Ray brooded. Was this divine punishment for all the slaughter in his past life? But it made no sense. Why reincarnate him just to torture him? Then it clicked. A lightbulb moment. This wasn't punishment, it was a test. If he couldn't be a mage, he'd find another path to vengeance. Later at the dinner table, Ray locked eyes with his father. He stared Jack down, babbling in broken toddler speak, demanding to be taught how to fight. Jack just looked confused. The path of the sword was enough. The boy calculated that even without a shred of mana, he could walk the martial path and fulfill his ultimate goal: vengeance against the entire human race. The scene shifts to a training montage. Jack is drilling the fundamentals into his son, Ray, who looks to have grown a bit since we last saw him. However, the road to Retribution was proving far rockier than he anticipated. The boy lamented that despite 2 full years of grueling sword drills, he still hadn't managed to score a single win against his old man. Sparks didn't fly, but intent did. As Jack and his son squared off with wooden practice blades, Ray readied his stance. Dead set on finally claiming victory, he analyzed his father's rhythm with a predator's eye. The plan was simple: wait for the heavy downward slash, pivot at the last second, and strike the exposed flank. The moment arrived. He lunged, attempting to execute the maneuver exactly as he'd visualized, but reality was cruel. His clumsy feet got tangled up, and instead of a glorious counterattack, he ate a solid bonk to the noggin from his dad's bakken. Defeated yet again, Ray stared at the sky, wondering why the universe conspired to make every spar end in humiliation. It was this cursed vessel. His reflexes couldn't keep pace with his tactical mind. These tiny, fragile limbs were nothing but dead weight dragging him down. The poor kid eventually came to, finding himself tucked in bed after being knocked out cold. Jack, for his part, was just chuckling at the memory. Scarlett wasn't amused. She tore into her husband, demanding he dial back the intensity, reminding him that their son was literally 4 years old. Jack defended himself, dropping the bombshell that the night entrance exams were looming. He muttered that soft training wouldn't get the boy through the gates. Scarlett's temper flared. She insisted he was driving Ray too hard, arguing that the boy didn't have to walk their blood-soaked path. There were plenty of safe, respectable jobs out there besides adventuring, but Jack soothed his wife, assuring her he wasn't being a tyrant. Ray's clumsiness wasn't lack of talent, it was just biology. The kid simply hadn't grown into his body yet. He added that they still had a full year to prepare. They had to have faith that their son had what it took to crack the entrance trials for the prestigious Avery Academy. Listening from the bed, the boy processed the timeline. Only 1 year until the night trials. A seed of doubt sprouted. Was that really enough time? No. He shook off the hesitation. He was the incarnation of a red dragon. He refused to be limited by the pathetic standards of humanity. Ray's spirit ignited. He jumped up, assuring his parents with a fiery determination that he'd crush the exams and become the strongest warrior the world had ever seen. To escalate their training, Jack unveiled a surprise. No more wooden toys. He handed his son a genuine steel blade. From now on, they were playing for keeps. The boy marveled at the cold steel in his hands, though it felt comically oversized. Jack declared the weight would force his control to improve, then leaned in to whisper about a second surprise. While Ray wondered why his dad was being so dramatic, they headed to the storage shed. He stepped inside and was greeted by a bizarre sight: a magical training dummy. Ray sized up the contraption, skeptical. His father warned him not to get cocky. This puppet was powered by monocores, the same high-tech gear used to drill elite cadets at Avery Academy. The boy eyed the wooden construct with deep suspicion, wondering if his old man was just hyping it up to scare him. Then came the challenge. Jack told him to take a swing. Ray, brimming with unearned confidence, accepted without hesitation. After rolling his wrists, Ray channeled every ounce of his strength into a vicious slash. The puppet hummed to life at level 1. The instant steel met shield. The machine countered with blinding speed, sending Ray's sword flying across the room. The sequence ended as quickly as it began. The boy stood there empty-handed, utterly demoralized by the instant defeat, seeing his son's ego bruised. Jack offered a consolation prize if Ray could defeat the puppet even at level 1. He'd be guaranteed to breeze through the night exams. He added that he'd pulled every string he had and called in serious favors just to acquire the training bot. That was all Ray needed to hear. His motivation redlined. He didn't just want to pass. He wanted to destroy this wooden mockingbird right now. The boy threw himself into the grind with manic intensity, only stopping when he collapsed face first into the dirt, completely spent. Despite the sweat and effort, Ray let out a frustrated sigh. His technique was garbage because his limbs lagged behind his commands. He loathed this frail human shell. He brooded darkly. At this snail's pace, he wouldn't even scratch the puppet, let alone achieve his grand vengeance against humanity. Suddenly, a voice chimed in from behind, asking why he was so obsessed with beating a doll. The unexpected noise nearly made him jump out of his skin, instincts flaring. He gripped his hilt and spun around, trying to locate the intruder. He spotted a girl creeping up on him and paused, totally confused. The blonde intruder raised her hands in apology, claiming she didn't mean to spook him. She introduced herself as Amy, a local from the village down the road. She explained that he'd caught her eye while she was wandering the mountain. She'd come over to warn him that he needed to clear out before the sun went down. A bit on edge, Ray asked the obvious question: was this area actually a danger zone? Amy launched into a rapid-fire explanation. The mountain was safe enough by day, but since it bordered the deep forest, Magic beasts had a nasty habit of prowling around once twilight hit. Ray was intrigued by the intel. Surprised a village girl knew so much about monster ecology. Amy shrugged it off, saying she spent her days foraging for herbs and fruit. So she knew the lay of the land. Noticing the light fading, she suggested they hike back down the mountain together before things got hairy. They swapped names. Though it turned out to be a formality, Amy already knew exactly who he was. His reputation in this village preceded him. Ray didn't even blink. It wasn't a surprise. He was fully aware of why his name rang bells. And it certainly wasn't for anything heroic. The village practically worshipped the Thorn clan. Everyone adored Jack, always stopping him for a friendly chat whenever he took a stroll. But the vibe shifted the second Jack walked with his red-headed son. The friendly chatter turned into hushed whispers about curses and how the boy was a walking plague. Apparently, crimson hair was an anomaly, here a trait exclusive to Jack's unfortunate offspring. Listening to their venom, Ray mused on the contradiction they held his parents in high esteem, yet harbored a deep-seated, irrational terror of him. That baseless fear had turned him into a pariah, a foreign entity that the entire village collectively rejected. Tapping into memories of his past life as a dragon, he wondered if the local bedtime stories featured big, bad red dragons to traumatize the children. In his old world, red signified absolute power. To these humans, it was just the color of societal evil. The irony was suffocating. Greedy humans were the ones who slaughtered his dragon kin. Yet, in their fairy tales, the dragons were always the villains. He had always justified the dragon's violence as self-defense. Yet, humanity twisted that survival instinct into proof of their inherent brutality. He was spiraling deep into his disdain for the human race when Amy snapped him back to reality, asking what was weighing on his mind. Shaking off the dark thoughts, Ray silently followed her down the mountain path. Amy broke the ice, mentioning she'd seen him lurking around the peaks lately. Training, she asked. Ray kept it brief. I plan to master the sword. Her eyes lit up. That's awesome. Your dad is the only real blade master in town. After all, she pressed on, aiming for the Knight Academy. A silent nod was his only reply. My brother's taking the entrance exam too, she bragged. He's a beast. Claims no one in this village can even scratch him. He's totally jealous of you. Though, you get elite coaching from your dad while us commoners are left to figure it out ourselves. When Ray asked about him, the blonde girl practically begged. You guys should be friends, you could be sparring partners. The moment was crushed by heavy footsteps. Enter Gary, Amy's brother, barking orders immediately. Get the hell away from my sister. Freak. Amy jumped between them like a shield, snapping back that Ray hadn't done anything wrong. Gary ignored her defense, stepping up to grill her about hanging out with the red-haired omen. You want to catch his bad luck, he sneered, grabbing a lock of her hair to check if the infection had turned it red yet. While Amy swatted his hand away in disgust, Gary's two lackeys flanked Ray, ready to dispense some humiliation for the crime of breathing their air. Shameless trash. They spat, circling him like vultures. They jeered. Must be hell for your parents, raising a cursed mistake like you. Do us a favor and take your family out of here. One muttered. We're normal people. We don't need your hexes rubbing off on us. Another chimed in. High and mighty adventurers think they're too good to care about us lowly peasants. Huh, that was the trigger. Ray's fist clenched until his knuckles turned white, and he drove a solid punch right into the loudmouth's jaw. Done with talking, he swung for Gary next. But one of the goons played meat shield and took the blow. It didn't matter. The impact was heavy enough to send Gary stumbling backward too. Ray clarified he only wanted the guy who insulted his parents. But Gary wasn't listening. Well, Ray the prodigy, he mocked. Son of the great adventurer couple. Assuming Ray had elite training, Gary threw down the gauntlet. Let's dance. No weapons, though. I'd hate to accidentally kill you. Weapons hit the dirt. Ray glared at the trio. Just come at me all at once. I don't care. The brawl kicked off, fists flying in a chaotic blur. Reality check. Ray's technique was dragon tier, but his human vessel was garbage. He gasped out, and Gary landed a finisher that planted him face first into the dirt. Ray lay there, blood trickling down, while Gary stood over him gloating. Had enough yet, but the kid had grit. Against all logic, Ray wobbled back to his feet. Gary shook his head, launching into a colorful tirade. Your dad's a legend, yet here you are. Pathetic. All that training and you're still a waste of space. My old man just sells trinkets. Gary puffed up his chest. And I'm still 10 times the warrior you are. Take a hint. Kid, quit the blade. Go find something you don't suck at. The insults cut deeper than the punches. Ray collapsed again, the mockery echoing in his skull as darkness crept in. Back home, Amy tore into her brother. You were a complete jerk, totally uncalled for. Gary didn't back down. He had it coming. He grunted. Stay away from him. Amy. That red hair isn't just ugly, it's a warning label. The kid's dangerous. He broke it down simply. Ray's folks were top-tier adventurers, while their own parents were just regular nobodies. That set Amy off. She screamed at him to go forage for his own grub, muttering under her breath about how much she despised his guts. As he stormed off, Gary stared at his gauntlet. Looking at the massive dent, a cold realization hit him. Without that armor, his arm would have snapped like a twig on the first hit, handing Ray the victory. Cut to the next scene, Ray dragging himself back home. He looked like a total wreck, face covered in fresh cuts and bruises, his gear caked in mud. His mom, busy with dinner, spun around to ask about his tardiness but froze. One look at his battered, exhausted state told her everything she needed to know. He had been in a brawl. He tried to play it cool, claiming it was just intense training. She saw right through the lie, worry creeping in that the local kids were ganging up on him again. But our stubborn protagonist refused to crack, sticking to his story while Scarlet patched him up. Ray always had to put on a brave face. Even now, he was puffing his chest out, declaring he was a grown man who could handle himself. Jack overheard the boy's little speech and actually beamed, praising the kid for his dedication to the grind. Even with dinner right around the corner, Ray wasn't done. He decided to squeeze in another session. His parents tried to talk him out of it, but he smoothed things over, promising it would be a quick workout. Down in the storeroom, Ray booted up the training puppet. Set to level 1, he weaved through its strikes effortlessly, having memorized its attack patterns long ago. Spotting an opening, he lunged, but his blade bit too deep into a wooden pillar and jammed tight, catching him completely off guard. He yanked on the hilt, and cracked. The steel splintered in his hands. While he was wrestling with the broken weapon, the puppet clocked him from behind. The poor kid let out a yelp as he ate the floor. The next day, up on the mountain, Ray spotted Amy lurking in the distance. She looked flustered when he approached, asking if she was actually waiting for him. She immediately started apologizing for her brother's behavior. Ray waved it off, telling her it wasn't her fault, he just wasn't strong enough to win yet. Being the tender-hearted soul she was, Amy started tearing up at his words. Our red-haired hero was internally groaning about how complicated humans were, but he tried to comfort her anyway, noting that he really needed to work on his social stats. To smooth things over, he grabbed an apple from her basket. It was his way of accepting the apology. She wiped her eyes, promising that Gary would not be a nuisance anymore. From then on, the blonde girl became a fixture on the mountain. Before long, Ray actually got used to having her around. Cut to the Talon estate entrance. It was swarming with armored cavalry and soldiers. Jack and Scarlet were deep in conversation with the commander, who dropped the news nearby villages were being decimated by an unknown entity. Jack's face twisted in rage as the commander continued his report. 0 credible witnesses, just survivors infected by something nasty. Their minds too scrambled to give a coherent statement. That is why the brass decided it was time to call in the adventurers. Scarlet looked rattled. It did not make sense. Creatures like that did not usually wander into human settlements. Sensing something off, she demanded to join the mission. Jack shut that down immediately, insisting it was strictly a recon run. Besides, someone had to stay back and watch Ray. The kid had his big exam coming up. Scarlet clearly did not like it, but Jack pulled her close, promising he would be back before she even missed him. Reluctantly, she told him to stay safe. Meanwhile, back at the training grounds, Ray was gasping for air, lungs burning. He still did not trust his technique. This clumsy human body just could not keep up with his mind. Glancing back, he saw Amy lost in a book. Suddenly, his heart started hammering in his chest. Realizing what was happening, he slapped himself to snap out of it. He walked over to the blonde, telling her they needed to wrap it up. It was getting late. Amy, totally absorbed in her story, bad not noticed the sun dipping. They packed up and headed down the mountain together. On the trek down, Ray asked the hard question, was she catching heat in the village just for hanging out with him? Everyone always ran their mouths about his cursed red hair. Amy admitted her friends talked trash, but she shrugged it off. That was their problem, not hers. Besides, she argued, the red hair was not scary. She thought it looked cool. She said his name softly, looking him in the eye. You are special, Ray. The hair does not change that. Just be yourself. That last line triggered something in his brain. He flashed back to Gary's taunt about sticking to what he was actually good at. A grin spread across his face. He thanked Amy with genuine excitement and waved goodbye as they parted ways. The second he got home, he beelined for the storeroom and woke the puppet up. This time, he did not stand. He crouched, planting his hands on the floor, the sword clamped firmly between his teeth. If he was going to be himself, this was it. He moved on all fours, primal and explosive. Suddenly, his agility was off the charts, engaging every muscle in his limbs. He accelerated his movements, spotting a gap in the defense. He brought the blade down with everything he had, just like that. The first stage was cleared. The rush of victory surged through him as he stood there, panting but triumphant. But settling wasn't his style. Even though clearing level 1 secured his spot at the Knight Academy, he wanted to push his limits further. He triggered level 2. Cut to the next morning. Dawn was breaking as we see Jack gearing up for his mission. Jay, still groggy from sleep, watched his father packing and wondered where the old man was headed so early. Sorry, kiddo, Jack said. Noticing him, I've got to head out for a bit. But don't worry, I'll be back home before your big exam. Jack grinned, fully confident in his son. Keep hammering that training dummy while I'm gone. I know you can take it down. The redhead opened his mouth to share his latest triumph. But Jack's team was already outside, hollering for him to move out. Turning to his wife, Jack softened. Take care of yourself. Honey, I'm going to miss you. Jay stood back, a smirk playing on his lips. Asterisk, it's fine. Asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, beating one puppet isn't that big of a deal anyway. He decided to save the big reveal for a real surprise when his dad returned. With that, he grabbed his gear and headed for the mountains to train, trekking up the path. He pictured Jack's face. It was going to be priceless to see the old man's reaction to his true strength. That was when it hit him he had only cracked the code and solved his problem thanks to Amy's advice. A wave of gratitude washed over him, followed immediately by a chill. Was he becoming soft, becoming times, human asterisk? Asterisk, humans are trash. Asterisk, Jay reminded himself. Asterisk, Mom, Dad, and Amy are the only exceptions. So I won't crush them. Asterisk. As he climbed higher, he found himself He froze. Why was he acting like a puppy, waiting for its owner? Whatever, he muttered, feigning indifference to reassure himself. At least now I can train without any distractions. He had to remember his roots. He was a majestic red dragon, not some emotional human brat. He couldn't let their weakness infect him. Cut to later. Jay was snoozing against a rock, snoring away, until his eyes snapped open. Panic set and the sun was low. He was in for a serious lecture if he didn't get home fast. Sprinting down the mountain, a thought nagged him. He hadn't thanked Amy yet. Asterisk, I'll do it tomorrow. Asterisk, he decided. Night had fallen by the time he reached the village. A crowd had formed, buzzing with panic about a search party to the west. That was Gary and Amy's father at the center. The man was grilling the local blacksmith, looking ready to snap. The smith insisted he had seen the kids. They came in this morning, the blacksmith stammered. Bought weapons. I heard the blonde kid tell the others they were going to the forest to hunt magic beasts. Amy and Gary's parents went pale, terror gripping them at the thought of losing their children. The mother of the other two boys, Bob and Kai, lunged at the blacksmith, grabbing his collar. You let them go into the woods alone. I didn't know they meant it, the smith cried, trying to calm her down. The blonde kid's father took charge, barking orders to summon the guards. The forest at night was a death sentence. As the old man scrambled to obey, the red-headed boy watched from the shadows. Jay turned toward home, unbothered. Asterisk, Gary's group gone missing times, he mused. Asterisk, sounds like karma, finally caught up with them. Asterisk, if the magic beasts got them, that's just less annoying flies buzzing around me. Asterisk, he really didn't care. Until he remembered Amy. He shook his head, trying to dislodge the thought. She had been decent to him. He didn't actively hate her. Asterisk, but her brother is a moron. Asterisk, he argued with himself. Behind him, the villagers were gathering torches, preparing to march into the dark. Jay kept walking. Asterisk, human lives are barely a blink in time anyway. It's only a matter of time before they get themselves killed. But the image of Amy wouldn't fade from his mind. Asterisk, I have my own path to cultivate. Asterisk, he growled internally. So why did his feet feel so heavy? What was this nagging sensation making him second-guess himself? Without another second of logic, he spun around. Amy was innocent, and technically, he still owed her a thank you for the puppet advice. Deep in the woods, the situation was grim. 2 magic beasts lay dead. But Kai and Bob were out cold on the grass. Gary stood over his sobbing sister, shaking but determined. "Don't move." "Amy," he shouted. Raising his sword against the encroaching shadow, Jay tore through the underbrush toward the forest. He sniffed the air, metallic and sharp. He recognized the scent of blood. Just as he sensed danger, he skidded to a halt near a carcass. A demon wolf cub. Slashed open. He touched the wound still warm. Asterisk. They're close. Asterisk, he realized. But the tracks were a mess. Chaotic and overlapping in the dirt. He hesitated, trying to pick a direction, when a piercing scream cut through the silence. It was Amy, fighting for her life. In the clearing, an adult demon wolf swatted Gary aside like a rag doll. He slammed into a tree and slumped over. The beast turned its hunger toward Amy. She curled into a ball, covering her head and squeezing her eyes shut. Praying for a miracle. Asterisk CLA times, the sound of steel meeting fang. She opened her eyes to see Jay standing there, his blade wedged firmly in the wolf's gaping maw. He glanced back to check on her, but the situation was dire with Gary and the others down. Suddenly, the girl screamed a warning. Caution was necessary. But his reaction time was too slow. The beast's claws raked across his arm, shredding skin. Witnessing the spray of blood, Amy screamed his name in sheer terror. Jay grit his teeth, forcing a smile to reassure her that he wasn't dying today. But he needed a plan. So he decided to act as bait to draw the predator away. He vaulted onto a high tree branch to distance the fight from Amy. But the plan backfired immediately. The wolf's jaws snapped the branch like a twig, sending him plummeting. Panic set in. Asterisk. This vessel is trash. Asterisk. He thought bitterly. Asterisk. This body is too frail to go head-to-head with a mature demon wolf. It was a desperate struggle. Jay was fighting a losing battle alone. Realizing his current speed was pathetic compared to the monster, he couldn't even kite it effectively. In his past life, a demon wolf like this would have been an insect beneath his boot. But now he couldn't even scratch its hide. His eyes flashed with dominance as he hissed at the beast. "These humans are my property. You aren't allowed to touch them." Running on fumes, the boy braced himself for one final gambit. He couldn't hold out any longer. He had to strike a vital point now. Clamping the blade between his teeth, Jay channeled every ounce of strength into a slash that cut the beast's eye. Yet, he cursed himself internally. The damage was far too shallow. Memories of his prime flooded back, how a mere flick of his finger would have obliterated this creature instantly. But reality was cruel. He had to rely on dull human steel. The demon wolf lunged again, and the dragon in human skin waited, watching for a split-second gap in its defense. He struck, aiming low to sever the tendons in one of its legs. The wolf collapsed. But the moment Jay glanced at Amy, the beast launched a desperate sneak attack from his blind spot. He barely twisted away, gripping the sword in his mouth once more, unleashing every last drop of adrenaline. He drove the weapon home, finally silencing the beast for good. His legs gave out. As darkness crept into his vision, a holographic interface chimed. New ability unlocked. Item received medium-grade beast core. Bleeding out on the forest floor, he scoffed at the useless data floating before his eyes. He glanced over at the unconscious siblings, realizing he couldn't just leave them there. The scent of fresh blood would only summon more monsters. Trembling with pain, he hoisted Gary onto his shoulder and scooped Amy up in his arm. Gary woke briefly, seeing only a blur of crimson hair before passing out again. The boy calculated his odds. Carrying 2 people was his absolute physical limit. Bob and Ken had to be left behind on the forest floor. He had done what he could. The rest was in the hands of fate, gasping for air with every step. He staggered out of the shadowy tree line. The villagers, armed with torches and pitchforks, spotted the trio emerging from the gloom and immediately shouted to summon the parents. Someone recognized the silhouette. It's the Talon kid, Jay. The boy was soaked in blood, leaving a trail behind him. He didn't ask for help for himself. Get a healer for Gary and Amy, he rasped, his voice failing. They need treatment now. As the boy collapsed into the dirt, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire about the redhead returning with only 2 of the children. Confusion reigned. Why would children enter the beast forest at night? It was a known suicide zone crawling with monsters. Amidst the chatter, a frantic woman shoveled her way through the mob, freezing when she realized Bob and Ken were nowhere to be seen. hysteria taking over. She scanned the area, eyes locking on Gary and Amy. The father's voice was grim. They are the only ones who made it back, she screamed, trying to bolt into the dark woods. But the neighbors physically held her back. You can't go alone, they warned, calling them spineless cowards. The grief-stricken mother broke free and dashed into the trees. Her bravery vanished the second she saw the glowing yellow eyes of a beast in the shadows. Terror seized her heart, and she sprinted back to safety. As the crowd murmured about her quick return, the shaken woman tried to save face, claiming she wasn't afraid, needing a scapegoat. She grabbed Jay by the collar, shaking him violently. Where are my sons? You tricked them into going there. Didn't you? My boys are good children. They'd never do this. It had to be you. You little devil. You lured them in. She slapped him across the face. I knew that red hair was a curse. You're nothing but a jinx bringing misery to this village. The mob mentality set in. The villagers began to nod, whispering that the cursed boy must have tricked the kids, seeing as he was the only one walking out, turning on the exhausted child. They demanded answers, pressing him on where he had led their offspring. The mother, blinded by rage, continued to strike him repeatedly across the face, screaming, "Why did you only save those two? Where are my babies?" Barely conscious, the boy whispered the cold truth. They are still in the forest. She shoved him into the dirt, calling him a cold-blooded monster. They are just children. How could you leave them there to die? I will never forgive you for this, she shrieked. Never. She begged the crowd to form a search party, but they all looked away, muttering excuses about their own families waiting at home, lying in the dust, battered and bleeding. Jay had a dark thought times. Did they forget I'm just a child? 2 asterisk, or does the red hair make me subhuman to them, to these trash villagers? I'm not a kid. I'm just a monster. She snatched the torch from one of the men, stalking toward Day with venom in her eyes. I will never forgive you. She spat. The mob had reached their verdict. This red-haired abomination had to die. Staring back at them, Day realized something dark. These weren't people. They were far more terrifying than any beast. They were the true monsters here. His entire life flashed before his eyes as the woman raised the torch, ready to strike the killing blow. But instead of fear, a gentle smile graced our boy's lips, to meet his end by a mere torch. What a humiliating way for a red dragon to go. He closed his eyes, accepting his final moments. The flames plunged down, but they never reached him. A shadow threw itself between them at the last second. It was Gary. He'd taken the hit, his protective gear absorbing the brunt of the attack. The villagers gasped, seeing the blonde boy shield Day. He's lost his mind, they screamed. That monster must have bewitched him. As the mob clamored to slaughter the boy behind him, Gary shot them a look cold enough to freeze hell. You're the crazy ones, he roared, trying to kill him based on nothing but guesses, standing firm like a guardian deity. Gary shielded the red-haired boy. Back off, don't you dare lay a finger on my savior. In the aftermath of that horror, our boy was haunted by nightmares. He dreamt of the woman, her screaming face blaming him for everything, the sting of her slap, branding him a star of calamity. Then, the scene shifted to his past life mages lunging at him, demanding his life as a sacrifice for their rituals, surrounded by faces demanding his death. Day jolted awake in a cold sweat. His eyes darted around until they landed on his mother. She was holding his hand, tears streaming down her face even in sleep. Watching her, he mused on the duality of humanity, so breathtakingly beautiful, yet so utterly cruel. The moment he sat up, Scarlet stirred. Her eyes snapped open, and she burst into tears of pure relief. Terrified this was just another dream, she pulled him into a bone-crushing hug. She had truly believed he might never open his eyes again. Day yelped as the hug squeezed his injuries. Scarlet sniffled. You're still hurt, and you deserve it for acting so recklessly. How long was I out? He asked, rubbing his side. His mother sighed. A whole week. Sleepyhead. Tears welled up again. I was so scared. I didn't know how I'd ever face your father if you didn't wake up. Hearing that, Day's expression turned serious. The others. In the forest, Scarlet reassured him. The 2 children you saved escaped with only scratches. But... She hesitated. Bob and Kay are still missing. Everyone assumes the spirit beasts got them. We cut back to Scarlet's memory, arriving at the forest edge, only to find her son battered and surrounded by the mob. Gary was frantically trying to explain, telling them they went into the woods on their own, and that Day was the hero who saved them. But the mob wasn't listening. Seeing her boy lying unconscious in the dirt, something inside, Scarlet snapped. Her mana flared, exploding outward in a wave of pure fury. The villagers recoiled, trying to talk her down. He led them in there, they shouted. He's responsible for this mess. You're a mother. You understand our pain, someone pleaded. Scarlet, cradling her broken son, looked up with eyes that could kill a dragon. She looked ready to devour them whole. The woman who had struck Day earlier began to shake, the blood draining from her face. Then, the mother of the missing children collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably and begging the villagers to mount a rescue. The crowd murmured in sympathy, wondering how she'd survive the loss. But amidst the pity, Scarlet caught the venomous whispers about her own son. We should have known better. They hissed. We should have stayed far away from that cursed child. One man nudged the gossiper, warning him to keep his voice down about Talon's kid. The gossip just smirked, a nasty glint in his eye. What I was talking about, the forest, sickened by their cruelty. Scarlet didn't say a word. She simply scooped Day into her arms and turned her back on them. Back in the present, Scarlet gently patted his head. Don't blame yourself, sweetheart. It's all in the past now. She smiled softly. That boy, Gary, he told me everything. He said you were absolutely amazing out there. She slipped out to fetch him some food, leaving Day alone with his thoughts. His mind drifted back to the strange interface that had appeared in the woods. Does everyone see those screens, he wondered? Curious. He reached out to tap the skill labeled, Blessing of the Dragon Eye. Instantly, the power flared to life. He glanced at the door and nearly jumped out of his skin, seeing his mother's energy signature through the wood. It was familiar. He realized he possessed this sight in his past life as the Red Dragon, back when he commanded all sorts of magic, but after flunking the aptitude test in this life, he thought those days were gone forever. A thrill shot through him. He could use magic again. I'll unlock them all, he vowed. One by one, his gaze shifted to the loot he'd secured, a mid-tier spirit beast core. Must be a drop from that demon wolf, he mused. Suddenly, the air turned thick and acrid. Smoke, he started coughing violently. Throwing open the window, he saw the village engulfed in flames. People screaming in panic. The door burst open, Scarlet rushed in. Face pale. Fire Day. We have to move. Now, the inferno roared around them, consuming the house. But Scarlet was faster. Grabbing him just as the world turned to fire, she unleashed her mana, suffocating the inferno before it could spread. Clinging to her arm, Ray didn't just watch. He activated his Time's Dragon Eyes asterisk. He needed to identify the arsonist who tried to incinerate their home. Scanning the villagers with his enhanced vision, he locked onto the culprit instantly. It was the woman Bob and Kay's mother standing there, with magical residue still flickering in her palm. It was undeniable. She had fed their house to the flames. The crowd gasped, finally realizing the fire was at Talon's residence. The whispers started immediately, blaming the cursed child. Scarlet ignored them, manipulating the atmospheric mana to disperse the heat like a sudden gale. She snuffed out the last ember with impressive control, but the village murmured, their superstition fueled. They prophesied that if the red-headed calamity remained, doom was inevitable. The entire settlement would face destruction. Ray felt the weight of their hatred crushing his spirit. But his mother cut through his despair. Did the fire frighten you? She asked softly. Ray shoved the dark thoughts down, squeezing her hand. No way. You were amazing. Mom blew it out like a candle. He praised how she instantly neutralized the threat. But as they walked back, Ray's smile faded, replaced by the sting of the villagers' venomous words. He ruminated on the reality those people didn't just want to burn a house. They wanted to burn them times alive. The conclusion was clear, they wanted them dead. A cold, draconic rage ignited in his chest. He vowed revenge. Later, the boy headed out to train. Despite his mother's warning to take it easy, she was worried about his unhealed injuries. But Ray ignored the pain. He marched into the forest, unsheathed his blade, and flared his Time's Dragon Eyes asterisk. He smirked, spotting several low-tier magical beasts. Perfect fodder. His gaze landed on a monkey perched in the canopy. It was happily munching on an apple. Ray tracked the beast's vitals with his ocular ability and ghosted up behind it. He brought the sword down in a lethal arc. By the time he stopped, our boy had slaughtered 20 elementary magic beasts. Suddenly, the dragon system interface materialized, notifying him of a loot drop, one beast crystal. Ray scowled at the holographic screen. Talk about garbage RNG. 20 kills and only 2 crystals. That drop rate is abysmal. He pocketed them, wondering what kind of power boost absorbing them would yield. His attention shifted to a lone wolf pup whimpering near the corpses of its pack. Ray reached out to pet the little creature. His voice grim. You're alone now. You'll have to fight for me from this day forward. Suddenly, a system prompt flashed before his eyes. Opportunity, tame black devil wolf cub, confused but intrigued. He clicked yes to seize the chance. A rush of excitement hit him. Success flashed across his vision. But panic surged as the cub dissolved into light and shot straight into his chest. What the hell? He frantically queried the dragon system. Is this safe? Are there side effects to housing a beast in my soul? Can I even summon it back out? Ray glared at the little dragon avatar. If this thing eats me from the inside, I'm taking you down with me. The terrifying dragon avatar just nodded smugly. A new skill unlocked. But Ray dismissed the notification. He had bigger fish to fry tonight. He had work to do. Activating his times, Dragon Eyes *. He scanned the terrain for the missing village brats. His gaze locked onto a signal. They were up on a hill. He approached what looked like a beast's den. The stench of death heavy in the air. Skulls and gore littered the ground. Then he found them, or what was left of Bob and Kay. The magical beasts had torn them apart, devouring their organs. Nothing remained but gnawed bones and shreds of fabric. Ray stoically stripped the bloodied clothes from their remains. He needed them for identification. He tossed the garments into a basket. Later that night, Scarlet was on a warpath. She nagged him relentlessly for overexerting himself while injured. Stop scolding me, he protested. But she accused him of being rebellious. She continued to berate him for ruining his clothes with dirt and grime. Ray sighed, promising to rest and train properly tomorrow. Scarlet seemed to accept this. Dropping a bombshell, your father returns in a few days. You can do your sparring with him. Our boy literally jumped for joy. He couldn't wait to show the old man his cultivation progress. But his mom roared, cover up and go to sleep. Now, her command terrified him. He realized that a mother's wrath was the ultimate cultivation pressure. Even his human instincts screamed danger. At midnight, Ray's eyes snapped open. He crept to the storage room. Grabbing the clothes basket, he also retrieved a bucket he'd filled with fresh blood in the forest. Meanwhile, a sharp knock echoed through Bob and Kay's home. Their mother rushed down. She wondered who would visit at this ungodly hour. She swung the door open, desperate to see her children and shouting their names. Boys, are you back? Her eyes fell to the porch, and her heart stopped. She recognized the pile immediately. It was Kay's tunic. Trembling, she picked it up and noticed a trail of muddy footprints leading away. Beckoning her, she followed the tracks, screaming into the darkness that she was coming for them. The trail led her deep into the woods. Realizing it was pitch black, she grabbed a lantern, hesitating at the tree line before spotting something. Bob's clothes were dangling from a high branch. Bob Kay. She broke into a run, panic overriding her senses. She approached the tree where Ray was concealed in the shadows. He tipped the bucket, and a deluge of blood splashed down, drenching her instantly. The woman shrieked in hysteria. Who's there? Who did this? Ray dropped from the canopy, landing silently. You knew who it would be, he said coldly. The cursed red-headed monster, the mother snapped, lunging at him with pure hatred. Give me back my sons, you bringer of calamity. Deep within the forest, the group found themselves hemmed in by dangerous demonic beasts. While Jay watched from the shadows, completely untouchable, as the monsters closed in, he stepped back, leaving the woman trapped in the beast hide. His expression remained dead serious as he withdrew. He watched in silence as the beasts tore her apart, blood spraying across the clearing in a grisly display. By the next day, the town was buzzing. The curse was real, and everyone agreed on one thing: do not mess with the Talon clan. Jay emerged from the background, training sword in hand, casting a murderous glare at the gossiping villagers, terrified for their lives. The locals scrambled to act polite, awkwardly wishing him a good morning. They stammered out praises, telling him how hard he must be working on his cultivation. As the crowd sighed in relief at his departure, our boy realized there were new rumors floating around. And honestly, he kind of liked this reputation. Arriving home, Jay spotted several horses tied up outside. His heart raced. Father must be back. But stepping inside, he found his mother in tears, dreading the worst. He rushed to her side. Mom, what's wrong? What happened? Between sobs, Scarlet told him that his father had fallen ill, though she insisted he would recover soon. Looking at his bedridden father, Jay activated his dragon eyes. He was shocked he had never seen a living being with such intense readings. Not even back when he was a dragon. Suddenly, Jack struggled to speak, muttering deliriously that the darkness was going to kill everyone. That was when the mages dropped the truth. Jack was infected with the shadow plague. He had been attacked by a shadow beast while protecting a villager during a mission. Hearing this, the boy realized he had never encountered anything like this before. He was confused. When did these beasts appear? What exactly happened to the world after his death as the Red Dragon? While his mother thanked the mages for bringing Jack home, they apologized profusely for failing to protect him. Jay checked his dragon system, wondering if there was a spell that could save his father. He recalled a high-tier incantation from his past life, one capable of dispelling any form of dark magic curse, but unlocking it was the problem. He figured the system might grant it as a reward for slaying a magical beast, likely a high-ranking one. However, he knew the harsh reality, that he was currently too weak to go toe-to-toe with a magical beast of that caliber. The red-haired boy turned to his mother. "If I join the Abrian Knight Academy, will I get stronger?" Scarlet, still tearing up, told him that was exactly where his father had trained. He would surely become a mighty warrior just like him. Hearing that lit a fire in him. He was determined to pass the entrance exam, join the academy, and find a way to save Jack. With a heavy heart, his mother hugged him tight. "I believe in you," she whispered. "You can do this." The scene shifted to a cathedral-like structure, filled with hooded figures who appeared to be priests. Among them, the High Elder addressed the gathering, announcing that the ancient prophecy was in motion. A massive shift was about to descend upon the world. As the others whispered among themselves, it became clear the prophecy referred to Jay. The elder mused whether the boy would bring salvation or calamity. The future remained uncertain. Immediately, the elder issued a command: notify the knights to locate the boy, as soon as possible. If he was a savior, they would guide him. If he was a harbinger of doom, they were to eliminate him on sight. The story cut to the day of the Abrian Knight Academy entrance exam. A buzzing crowd lined up, eager to catch a glimpse of the knights. Cheers erupted as the knights arrived. Leading them was Sir Delbert, looking every bit as charming as the rumors suggested. The girls went absolutely wild over his looks, since it wasn't often they got to see the knights only once a year during the exams. Amidst thunderous applause, the group reached the arena. Winford stepped forward, introducing himself as a knight of Abrian Academy and welcoming the hopefuls. After introducing the famous Sir Delbert and Sir Bernard as the judges, Winford laid down the law: if they wanted in, they had to show their absolute best. Once the training sword puppet was moved into position, Winford ordered the candidates to step up one by one. The first test began immediately, and a confident kid walked to the stage. Underestimating the wooden construct, he charged in, planning to crush it with brute force while his parents cheered him on. The moment he attacked, the puppet countered with a heavy blow, sending him flying. Just like that, he failed. In a split second, his parents went from cheering to stunned silence, unable to process the shock. As the second candidate was called, Jay was deep in thought. He remembered Jack explaining exactly how the puppets worked and how to dismantle a level 1 construct. The red-haired boy looked up at the puppet, realizing it wasn't a threat at all. It moved with the defensive precision and counter-attacking speed of a fully grown warrior. He brushed those thoughts aside. However, as the voices of Delbert and Winford cut through, turns out, his hearing had sharpened enough to pick up their conversation from quite a distance. It had to be all those beast crystals he absorbed. They were honing his senses to a razor's edge. The knights seemed to be discussing that very topic. They called it a waste of time. But orders from the Knight Elder were absolute. Delbert didn't hold back. In his eyes, knights should be of noble blood, and he couldn't fathom why they were bothering with these filthy commoners. Winford, clearly the more decent of the two, felt his partner was crossing the line. That was a bit harsh. Even for him, Delbert's boredom was quickly turning into irritation. Round after round, not a single candidate had made the cut. Then Gary stepped up and breezed through the test. As he flashed a crowd-pleasing smile, and Sir Bernardo announced his victory, the villagers began whispering about his extraordinary potential. Ray just felt second-hand embarrassment. What the hell was that guy doing? But the spotlight shifted quickly. It was his turn to take the stage. Winford and Delbert locked eyes on him immediately. This was the kid the elder had specifically warned them about. The villagers, however, started their usual murmurs. The cursed child. They were convinced Jack's fate was all down to his bad juju. To them, that blood-red hair wasn't just a color, it was a terrifying omen. The chatter grew louder. They called him a monster. A magnet for misfortune. The idea of him becoming a knight. A complete joke. Ray ignored the noise. He simply pulled back his hood and stepped onto the platform. Unfazed, Bernardo barked out the order to get ready. The test would commence in 1 minute. That was when Delbert leaned in. "I don't buy into prophecies," he sneered. His logic was simple, if the legends were true. The redhead should survive anything. Right, to put that theory to the test. He cranked the puppet's difficulty straight to level 3. Ignoring Bernardo's protests, with a sharp tear through the air, the puppet blurred into motion, launching itself at Ray with lightning speed. "Move!" Bernardo and Winford screamed, desperate to warn him. One hit at that speed would be fatal, but before the words could fully leave their lips, it was over. Ray's blade flashed, and the puppet's head went flying. A suffocating silence descended on the square. The wooden head thudded against the dirt. The arrogant knight's jaw dropped, and Bernardo stood there, struck completely dumb. Winford, beaming with pride, nudged him. "Well, announce the result." The knight forced out a congratulation. Scarlet swelled with maternal pride, while Gary rubbed his eyes, unable to believe what he'd just witnessed. With the test behind him, Ray prepared to leave with the knights. He stopped to whisper a goodnight to his father, who lay unconscious. "Don't worry, Dad," he promised. "I'll find a cure." Emotions welled up as he looked at him. Just as Scarlet walked in, she was clutching something tightly in her hand. A pendant. She insisted he wear it, a family heirloom passed down for generations. Meant to bring luck. He accepted it, told her he was heading out, and urged her to look after herself. Scarlet's eyes were full of worry. She told him to stay safe, and reminded him that no matter what trouble he faced, she would always be in his corner. He gave her a reassuring look. "I'm a man now. Mom, I've got this." He walked away as Scarlet let the tears fall. Upon reaching the transport, he was directed into a carriage where another boy was already waiting. He wondered who his travel companion would be, only to realize it was Gary. They stared at each other, confused. Gary seemed to be calculating if they were really the only two who passed. The air between them grew thick with awkwardness. As the wheels started turning, Gary finally worked up the nerve to break the silence and apologize to the redhead. He admitted he'd been terrible, acknowledging the time he'd actually hit him. "I was an idiot," he confessed, bowing his head in shame. Ray was shocked at first, but accepted it. He figured, hey, Gary is just a 5-year-old kid. Plus, Gary had saved him once. So in his book, they were even. The blonde boy looked confused at the mention of being 5 years old. "Aren't you the same age?" he asked. Ray, realizing his slip-up, got nervous and quickly pivoted the conversation. He asked about Amy, wondering aloud why she hadn't shown up for the exam today. Gary looked puzzled. "Didn't she tell you? She's headed to Roland Magic Academy." It was the first Ray had heard of it. Why hadn't Amy mentioned she was gifted with magic while they were en route to the Knight Academy? The journey was abruptly interrupted by a knight shouting, "Stop the carriage!" The vehicle ground to a halt. Peeking through the curtains, they saw a dense fog swallowing the road. Winford bellowed out, "We are Knights of the Aryan Academy. Identify yourselves." Suddenly, a girl stumbled out of the mist. She looked battered and desperate, crying out for help. She introduced herself as Anne, an adventurer from the Traceless Guild. Bernard was in the middle of asking what happened when the girl suddenly collapsed into his arms, shocking everyone. She barely managed to whisper that her squad had been wiped out by shadow beasts. Bernard froze. Shadow beasts here? It didn't make any sense. They hadn't seen a single magical creature on the entire trip. Delbert, arrogant as ever, assumed the beasts were just smart enough to fear their overwhelming power. Winford told the girl they were headed to Renie, so she was welcome to hitch a ride if she needed one. She nodded, grateful. Gary, however, looked confused. "Why are we going to Renie? Shouldn't we be heading to the Knight Academy?" Delbert overheard him and sneered. "Use your head, Blondie. Don't be stupid. Sending kids straight to the front lines is a death sentence." The boys exchanged glances, puzzled by the term front lines. Knight Delbert sighed and explained, "The Avron Knight Academy is right on the border. It's a war zone waiting to happen." Winford cut in, clarifying, "That's why you need to train for a decade in Renie. You need to master the basics of combat before you even think about stepping foot in Avron." A decade day was stunned into silence. Asterisk, for a dragon, 10 years is nothing. Asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, but for a human, that's an eternity. He wondered if his father could wait that long. Nearby, Gary looked shaken. The huntress was the sole survivor. And his own father had been attacked by these things too. Even the knights looked rattled by the mention of shadow beasts. It made Day wonder if a fight broke out. Could these guys actually handle it? Asterisk, snap. Asterisk. The sound of a breaking twig put the boy instantly on guard. Brace yourselves, Winford shouted, sensing something massive approaching. And then it stepped out a koala king, corrupted by shadow. As the three knights drew their weapons, the shadow koala stalked them from the brush, ready to pounce. It lunged straight at Bernard. The knight was too slow, he wasn't going to dodge in time. But Day flashed in, delivering a killing blow and saving Bernard's life in a split second. He didn't pause, immediately shouting at the other kids to defend themselves. Winford was puzzled why the Koala King wasn't moving. But Day felt a chill. It wasn't frozen, it was waiting. Meanwhile, Gary was struggling to hold his ground, taking a nasty scratch from one of the smaller shadow beasts. The dragon boy swooped in, slashing the beast across its back. Watch out, Blondie, these things are way stronger than your average demon beast. The Koala King let out a roar that shook the very air, the sonic impact hitting them like a physical blow. The force sent the knight flying. While everyone else struggled just to stay on their feet, Gary stared in horror, wondering what that thing was. Day, however, realized the truth: this monster was in a league of its own. They couldn't win. The knight noticed the Koala King was just standing there, holding its position, rather than finishing them off. Suddenly, the massive shadow beast pointed a claw at Winford and spoke. You cannot win. Darkness will consume this entire continent. The other knights, still fending off the smaller monsters, froze. A talking beast. That shouldn't be possible. The shadow beast sneered. You are destined to fail, and everyone around you is destined to die. Day was stunned. The knights looked bewildered, as if the weight of the monster's warning was actually sinking in. They took it as a threat. But before they could react, the giant beast roared, leaped high into the air, and vanished. Once it was gone, Winford let out a shaky breath. We should be grateful it decided not to fight. If it had stayed, we wouldn't be leaving here alive. As Day's dragon system pinged with a crystal reward, he couldn't shake the feeling the beast had been speaking directly to him. Later, Winford reviewed how Day and Gary handled the crisis, praising their reactions and predicting they'd make fine knights. Day took the chance to ask, do beasts usually talk like that? Winford shook his head. Shadow beasts were unheard of at the border until now. And a talking one, that's a first for me. Glancing at the red-haired boy's stoic face, the knight marveled at his composure. No normal kid stays that calm after staring death in the face. While they talked, Delbert watched from the sidelines, glaring at the red-haired boy with pure disgust. When they finally rode into Renie, they were met by a heavy military presence, far more guards than usual. Worried, Winford flagged down a soldier. What's with the extra security? As the huntress thanked the knights for the escort, the soldier dropped the bomb. The Kingdom of Alo has issued an amber alert. Every town and city is under strict surveillance. The knight's face darkened. An amber alert meant the situation was critical. The continent was teetering on the edge of a massive crisis. He looked over at Day, a heavy thought crossing his mind. Asterisk, is he the one, the child of prophecy who will save us all? Asterisk. Unaware of the scrutiny, the boy stood with Gary, his thoughts drifting back to his father. Trust me, I'm definitely going to become a knight. This is just the beginning. Tell Dad he just has to hang in there until I make it. Fast forward 10 years. We're in Ranie Town, inside a classroom at the academy that looks about as exciting as watching paint dry. The professor scans the room. Since knights can't manipulate magic like mages, what is the power we control called? Gary raises his hand immediately. That's easy. Knights utilize chi. Correct. Through cultivation, one can reinforce the body and sharpen the senses. Some masters of chi can even shatter the limits of the human body for short bursts. The teacher nods, pleased with the answer. You've clearly done your homework. Now, tell me why chi cultivation is strictly forbidden until the age of 15. She gestures toward Ray for the answer. But when Gary looks over, Ray's desk is completely empty. While the kid is definitely playing hooky, Gary sweats nervously. Teacher, he had a bathroom emergency. She sighs and calls on Sylvia instead, a stunning girl with silver hair. Cultivating chi places immense strain on the vessel. Internal organs don't finish developing until 15. Therefore, training before that age minimizes the risk of permanent injury. As the teacher lectures them to memorize this, Sylvia stares at Ray's vacant seat. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to a massive black demon wolf, a beast Ray tamed ages ago. It's currently locking horns with a magic boar monster. With a clean slash, the boar goes down. Ray pockets a beast crystal as loot, and instantly absorbs the energy from the low-tier core. He pats the black wolf on the head. Good boy. Deciding he's farmed enough monsters for one day. Ray figures it's time to head back. He needs to return before anyone notices he's AWOL. Just then, Winford rides up on horseback. Well, this is a surprise. Was wondering who I'd run into out here. Winford glances down at the fresh kill. Impressive work piercing that thick hide. The knight nods in approval. As they walk back together, Winford comments, "You've shot up like a weed since I last saw you." Ray mutters, "Doesn't feel like I've changed at all." In 10 years. By the way, how old are you? That's classified. Winford chuckles. I heard from your instructor that you cut class again. Skipping school to hunt magic beasts. Looks like you scored quite the haul. Though, Ray shrugs. Hey. The Amber Alert got lifted recently. Figured the coast was clear. So, sneaking out was a piece of cake. Honestly, I'd rather be out here than rotting in that classroom. Winford shakes his head at Ray's reckless attitude. You're lucky you didn't wander any further. If the perimeter guards caught you, they wouldn't have been so nice. He pauses. Oh. I stopped by your house. I checked on Jack. His condition is stable, it hasn't gotten any worse. Your mother is taking great care of him. Winford pats Ray on the shoulder. She asked me to pass on a message. She says don't worry about your father. Ray's expression darkens. A look of sadness crossing his face. Thanks. He murmurs. Internally, he reflects on the last decade of non-stop grinding and training. Despite the effort, he hasn't unlocked a single new ability. Nothing has changed in years. He feels completely helpless about his father's illness. Winford senses the mood and gives him a firm pat on the back. He pulls the kid into a suffocating bear hug. Cheer up, we're heading into town. Tomorrow, we leave for Aryan Academy. You'll get to meet plenty of other prodigies there. Later, at the Renie town gate, we see the instructor screaming at a guard. You let my student walk right out. The guard tries to defend himself. Look, unless there's an Amber Alert, I can't stop people. Besides, he didn't leave the safe zone. Just then, Winford and Ray stroll up, witnessing Alan, the instructor, practically choking the guard. That redhead is a special case. I need to know where he is 24/7. Alan. Winford calls out. Alan, already fuming about Ray's disappearance, whips around and spots his delinquent student standing next to the knight. That's the final straw. Alan's blood boils, and he turns his rage on the boy. He explodes. I warned you never to leave my sight. And you sneak off campus without a permit. That's the 10th time this month. Are you brain dead? Ray flinches in panic. Winford nods from the background, thinking, yeah, kid deserves that. Asterisk whack times. The instructor lands a fist on Ray's head. Ray rubs the bump, grumbling. The alert's been gone for a month. I can do what I want. You're way too uptight. Teach. Ray dives behind Winford to use him as a human shield while Alan swings again. Anyway, you're heading out soon anyway. Which gets your instructor off the hook. Alan barked, making his stance crystal clear. But as long as you are my disciple, don't you dare think about skipping class. Meanwhile, Winford stepped in, trying to play peacemaker as their bickering started to escalate. The scene shifts to Renie Square, where the head honcho immediately herds the students together for what looks like an emergency assembly. Once everyone huddled up, Day stumbled in sporting a fresh lump on his noggin. Gary grilled him immediately. How'd you beat us here? Did you get busted again? While Day grumbled about his rotten luck, Sylvia snuck a peek at him, her cheeks turning a bright shade of pink. With the students assembled, an attendant named Lance stepped up to drop the news. He announced he was escorting the lot of them to Avrion Knight Academy, and the trek was going to take about 7 days. Lance's expression turned stone cold. He warned the brats that if they wanted to avoid a world of pain, they had better follow his orders to the letter. Then, a guard turned to Winford, asking if the route to the academy was set in stone. When the knight revealed they would be cutting through the swamp, the guard panicked. Through the marsh, it's way too dangerous for these kids. Winford scanned the crowd of students and stood his ground. They need to face some real danger if they ever hope to become knights. He added cryptically that the students weren't the only ones under the microscope. Come sunrise, everyone geared up for the trip to Avrion. As the carriages rolled out of Renie's gates, Day was already fast asleep, sawing logs in the back. A bald kid named Kai scratched his head, wondering aloud, "Why aren't we using the teleporter? We'd be there in a heartbeat." Another boy chimed in, "Yeah, teleporting would save us a ton of hassle." Hearing this nonsense, a boy named Jan snapped back, "Because Avrion Academy doesn't have a teleporter." "You moron," Kai scoffed. "I thought Avrion was on par with Zolan Academy. Can't they afford one?" Suddenly, a voice piped up from out of the blue. Looks like someone was dozing off during lectures, mocking Jan and Kai. It was the class genius. "Sylvia, Avrion is right on the border," she explained. "They aren't just fighting foreign invaders, they are holding back shadow beasts too." She continued, "If they put a teleporter in a hot zone like that, there is a high chance the enemy would hijack it to warp wherever they please. Once the Academy's defenses fell, that teleporter would basically be a red carpet for the invasion." The students were stunned, wondering if that was actually in the textbook. Meanwhile, Sylvia's gaze drifted back to Day, her face heating up again. She quickly looked away when she caught Gary staring. The whole time, Day was drooling on Gary's shoulder. Eventually, they reached some castle ruins bordering the swamp. The instructors ordered everyone to pitch tents as the light began to fade. While setting up, Gary nudged Day. "Hey, that silver-haired girl keeps checking you out. Wonder what she sees in you. Turn around and look." They both spun around. Sylvia, caught dead to rights, staring at her crush, panicked and completely wrecked her own tent. Gary grinned. Day shrugged. "Probably just looking at my red hair." Gary rolled his eyes. "Dude, half the class has red hair, Kai." "Ian." The Scott twins. Gary made a sly face, realizing Day was hopeless when it came to romance. "You gonna let that slide?" Gary whispered. "Sylvia is a total knockout." But Day looked about as interested as a brick wall. Meanwhile, Jan snuck off behind the castle ruins, whispering for his buddy Mon. Wandering behind the crumbling walls, a stench hit them hard, worse than rotting carcasses. What died back here?" Staring out at the murky swamp, Jan shuddered. "I can't even see where this slime pit ends." "That is because it is the swamp," Lance whispered right behind their ears, nearly scaring the souls out of their bodies. Lance glared at them. "Unless you want the spiked worms to gnaw your legs off. Get back to your tents and sleep." Now, night settled in and the campfires crackled. Day slipped out of the ruins, unnoticed by the guards. He had scoped out the perimeter during chow time and figured he could slip away without triggering the sentries. Just as he made his move, a hand grabbed his wrist. It was Sylvia. "Where are you going at this hour?" "Hunting magic beasts," he replied bluntly. Sylvia's eyes went wide. "Are you insane? We aren't in safe little Renie anymore." She kept pressing. "You could run into a mid-tier beast out there. If that happens, the knights won't be able to save you in time." Day yanked his arm free. "I'll be fine. A mid-tier beast is nothing I can't handle." Sylvia looked hurt by his coldness, but he ignored it and vanished into the darkness to hunt. At the crack of dawn, the knights tore open the tents. "Wake up. You lazy bums, last one up gets punished." Gary bolted upright, only to scream when he saw Day lying there, eyes wide and bloodshot. "Holy crap, did you even sleep?" The slacker finally hit the hay after pulling an all-nighter, mumbling some nonsense about having a great rest to prove he wasn't a total idiot. Gary wasn't buying it. He knew the kid hadn't slept a wink and bailed out of the carriage to avoid getting dragged into any disciplinary drama. Meanwhile, Ray smirked at his dragon system interface, calculating that if he kept grinding at this pace, he'd be swimming in basic tier beast crystals long before they reached Avrion Academy. And once he secured that stash, he would finally be strong enough to start devouring intermediate tier crystals. The convoy pressed on, carriages rattling as they followed the knights deeper into the wilderness. The vanguard halted abruptly. They had entered a twisted, ominous stretch of forest, and Wilfred's instincts were screaming that something was lurking ahead. Sensing the threat, Wilfred shot a knowing nod to Lenny to vanish. It was time to let the fresh meat handle their first real trial alone. Without warning, the earth beneath them erupted, the violent tremors sending the carriages reeling and nearly tipping them over. Gary had just been wondering why the forest was so dead silent, and Ray was dozing off when a horse let out a blood-curdling shriek. Thornworms, a whole swarm of them, burst from the soil, blocking the path and swarming the convoy in a frenzy. Panic seized the group as the ambush unfolded. But Gary and Ray didn't flinch, their blades hissing from their sheaths as they prepared to carve through the beasts. A worm lunged for a terrified girl, but Gary was faster, intercepting the strike and tearing the monster apart with his sword. As green blood splattered the ground, some students froze in terror. But Gary kept his cool. Realizing these things hunted in packs, there were more coming. He barked out orders, warning everyone to stay sharp and bail out of the carriages immediately, as the other capable fighters rallied to his side. Find open ground, form triangles. Back to back, Gary commanded, sealing their blind spots. Nearby, Kai looked disturbingly eager to start the slaughter. Ray thought they were making a big deal out of nothing and activated his dragon eyes, scanning the chaotic battlefield with a bored expression. Just as he suspected, every single one was a basic tier beast. Hardly worth the effort. His gaze shifted past the monsters, locking onto the cliff edge where the 6 knights were hiding. Observing the chaos, our hero decided this was the perfect time for a nap inside the carriage. But Ian caught him trying to slink away and grilled him about breaking formation. Ray let out a massive, exaggerated yawn. Relax. They're just basic trash mobs. You guys have the numbers to handle this without me. Up on the ridge? The knights scoffed, pegging Ray as a coward paralyzed by fear, definitely red sash material at best. Another knight gestured toward Gary, who was tearing through the enemy lines with impressive efficiency, and noted, "Look at that aggression. Zero hesitation. Every strike is a fatal blow. Excellent body control. 2. No wasted movement," the knight added, predicting the kid was a shoo-in for a white sash. Wilfred's eyes drifted to Sylvia. She's different. She's not rushing in. She's analyzing the battlefield. Perfect form. Another knight agreed. Just then, Sylvia effortlessly sidestepped a lunging worm and bisected it with a surgical counterstrike. She's a rock, Wilfred observed. She waits for the opening. And the moment she sees it, the enemy is already dead. Lenny whistled, clearly impressed. Clean kills only. Look. She hasn't got a speck of dirt on her uniform. Suddenly, the ground detonated as a massive shape erupted from the dirt. A giant thorn worm had joined the party. Terror washed over the students as they realized the smaller beasts had seemingly fused into a single, towering nightmare. A trembling student lost his footing, collapsing right as the behemoth loomed over him. Just as the monster prepared to strike, Ian, the redhead powerhouse, threw himself in the way, grabbing the beast's tentacle and ripping it off with sheer brute force. Roaring with adrenaline, Ian tore into the creature, bellowing, "Nobody touches my squad." The twins, Scott and Bart, joined the fray, slicing through the giant worm like it was butter. While Kai was obsessively keeping score, he drove his blade through a monster's skull, tallying his 45th kill. The knights watching from above were stunned. These kids didn't need rescuing after all. The redhead crew had completely dominated the battlefield well. Everyone except Ray, and the fight was wrapping up. Standing over the carcass of the giant worm, Ian wiped sweat from his brow and checked on his teammates to ensure everyone was in one piece. A collective sigh of relief swept through the group as the last of the monsters stopped moving. Wilfred analyzed the scene. Ian, strong, but he prioritizes his team. That boy is a diamond in the rough. Then there was Ray, snoozing in the carriage without a care in the world. As they boarded up, Gary cornered him. "Why didn't you step up back there? It's dangerous out here." "Man, if things went south, nobody could have saved you," Gary lectured. Our protagonist shrugged. "I was dead tired. Besides, the knights were watching us the whole time." Gary shook his head, marking Ray as a hopeless lone wolf. While high above, Wilfred frowned, pondering which of these students was the true child of prophecy. Continuing the trek to the academy, Jay was feeling pretty smug about taking down that monster, patting himself on the back for a job well done. He figured they'd be full-fledged knights before anyone even knew what hit them. Jean was rambling on about how they'd be lucky to snag a white sash. Since Jay didn't have a clue what that meant, he pressed for details. That's when Jean dropped some knowledge. Knights are ranked, and their current escorts, those are white sash guardians, the elite of the elite. He explained that earning a white sash meant your skills were certified through brutal exams and trials. Then he broke down the rest of the hierarchy, mentioning green and black sashes for different mastery levels. But the red sash, that was the bottom of the barrel, the lowest rank possible. That little tidbit woke our boy right up, especially when Jean mentioned the red sash goes to the washouts who bomb their exams. He went on to say the white sash elites get personal tutors, bonuses, and top-tier resources. Meanwhile, the red sash losers get the short end of the stick, basic training. Sure, but otherwise completely ignored by the faculty. They can basically do whatever they want, since the academy writes them off as hopeless. They have total freedom to roam. Jay's eyes practically sparkled at the mention of the red sash. Total freedom, that sounded like paradise. That meant he'd have all the time in the world to hunt magical beasts, harvest high-grade cores, and power up at warp speed, hype levels rising. He clenched his fist, absolutely convinced of his new goal. He had to try his absolute hardest to fail and get that red sash. The scene shifts to Aryan Knight Academy, the finish line of their long journey. As the carriages rolled to a stop, the students stepped out, their jaws hitting the floor at the sight of the campus. Sick, Gary muttered, while our protagonist just stared, stunned by the sheer scale and beauty of the place. Aryan Knight Academy wasn't just a school, it was a fortress with massive gates. The students were floored. It was exactly as epic as the legends said. Whispers floated through the crowd that this place was basically a sovereign city run entirely by knights. And the lighting, no torches here. The whole place hummed with energy from mana crystals scattered everywhere. Too fancy, Gary scoffed. Literal worlds apart from the backwater village I grew up in. Just then, Lance barked at Gary and Jay to glue themselves to his heels unless they wanted to get left behind, mentioning they'd have plenty of time to explore later. Lance, acting as their tour guide, showed them around the grounds. They breezed past the armory and headed for the library, with Lance ordering everyone to zip it before they stepped inside. While half the girls were busy swooning over Sir Lance's rugged looks, Jean piped up, asking if the librarians were knights too. The knight explained the deal: every Aryan graduate has to volunteer in the city for 2 years. After that, they can stay or pack their bags. Before hitting the dorms, Lance led them to the final stop, a solemn patch of land that looked suspiciously like a graveyard. That's when Lance revealed the truth. This place holds the remains of knights who fought and bled for the kingdom of Allure. He added that he brought them here to drive home a point. The war isn't history, it is reality. As knights, their sworn duty is to shield their homeland. While the students chanted about fighting for glory, Jay was shaking with rage. How dare these humans butcher dragons to make their shiny armor and weapons? Breaking the tension, Sylvia raised her hand. She pointed at the towering statues, asking who modeled for such imposing figures. Those, Lance replied, are the founders of the academy, the legendary Dragon Knights. As the chatter picked up and questions flew, Lance cut them off. They'd learn all the lore once they started history class. On the walk back to the dorms, Jay was losing his cool. Gary called him out on it, prompting Jay to activate his dragon eyes. He peered beneath the cemetery soil and froze. Something down there was alive, oblivious. Gary wondered aloud about their rooming situation, hoping they wouldn't get stuck with any weirdos. Jay barely heard him, his mind racing about the creature in the grave. It wasn't a beast's energy. It was something far stranger. But Gary snapped him out of his trance. "Hello, you hearing this?" Gary asked. "I'm talking about roommates here." Just then, they reached their assigned quarters. Looks like they were bunking together. The only mystery left was who else would be joining the party. Surprisingly, Sylvia strolled up. It looked like she was sharing the dorm with the guys. Gary looked confused. But Sylvia just spotted Jay and turned beet red. Seeing her awkwardness, Gary shrugged. "Don't sweat it. I heard the academy doesn't care about gender, everyone gets treated the same." He added that she should probably. Ray tried to see the glass as half full. They were decent guys. Right, Sylvia, however, was having a complete meltdown. She decked Gary, sending him to the floor before he stomped off in a rage. She made it crystal clear, no way in hell was she bunking with a bunch of dudes. Meanwhile, poor Gary was still kissing the dirt after that hit. The two bystanders watched the whole drama unfold, agreeing that this was definitely one for the books. Ray waved it off, assuring them it was just a young girl throwing a tantrum. Turns out, the spectators were their new roomies, Monk and Ian. Gary dusted himself off to give them a proper welcome and introduce himself. Ray clocked Ian's red hair, same shade as his own. Checking the roster, he figured 2 more roommates, Yan and Mara, would round out the squad nicely. Meanwhile, Sylvia was dragging her feet down the stairs, dreading the walk toward her sausage fest of a room. She shot the guys a death glare, warning them to stay the hell out unless they wanted trouble. She was changing, and the door was staying shut. Exiled from their own dorm, the boys hung around outside. Gary scoffed, mentioning he knew for a fact the administration wouldn't let her swap rooms. Right on cue, Yan showed up, looking confused as to why his new roommates were loitering in the hallway. Gary didn't miss a beat. He claimed they were camped out there because of a massive cockroach inside, adding that they were looking for a brave soul to handle the beast. Hearing this, Yan puffed out his chest, preaching about how future knights couldn't be scared of a tiny bug. He volunteered to show them how a real man handles business. He threw the door open with confidence. Behind him, the boys were shaking, trying to stifle their laughter at the dirty prank they'd just pulled on the newbie. The scene cuts to the mess hall, where everyone seemed to be shoveling food into their faces like there was no tomorrow. Yun, the victim of their little scheme, asked if they were proud of themselves. He was terrified the girl was going to assassinate him in his sleep now. He called her a walking powder keg, sporting a fresh, bright red handprint on his cheek to prove it. Gary grinned, arguing it was actually a badge of honor because most guys wouldn't even get the chance to speak to her. Just as Yun was rambling on about her, Sylvia caught wind of the conversation. She shot them a look that could kill, clearly unamused by their gossip. Yun and Gary started sweating bullets, stammering excuses. Ray, on the other hand, was living his best life, stuffing his face with every dish within reach. Sylvia glared at them, muttering under her breath about how they could possibly have such appetites at a time like this, when she was stressed out of her mind about the upcoming evaluations. Since our boy Ray was only focused on calories, Gary assumed she meant the black belt trials. He asked her what stuffing their faces had to do with martial arts rankings, while they ate like pigs at a trough. Ray pointed out the best part: it was all free. Sylvia looked at the duo with pure despair, deciding they were beyond saving. Meanwhile, a group of upperclassmen were eyeing their table with disdain. They sneered, saying they shouldn't expect any class from poor country bumpkins who were inhaling food like they'd never seen a decent meal before. Referring to Ray and Gary, cheeks still bulging with food, the two turned around. The seniors just kept jeering and cackling at them. The obnoxious seniors then strutted over to Ian's spot and started in on him. They mocked the muscular redhead for being too big, claiming his oversized carcass was taking up too much space and the poor chair was about to snap. They called him a dumb country ox. Poor Ian looked devastated, swallowing his pride along with his unshed tears. The bastard said just looking at red-headed freaks made them want to puke, spouting slurs about him being Renie spawn. Hearing that specific slur, Ray finally stopped chewing. Monk sipped his tea with eerie calm. Ian, his brother, looked ready to draw a blade and slice a throat, but the bullies just kept spewing nonsense, claiming the red hair curse was contagious. They demanded the Hicks sit still because they didn't want to catch the ugly infection. Monk had finally heard enough. He stood up, telling the two jackasses to knock it off. They were crossing a line. Ian tried to hold his friend back to protect him, but the upperclassmen turned on Monk, telling him to stay in his lane. They asked if he really wanted to throw hands over a red-headed freak. They concluded that a loser like him would peak at red belt anyway, so he better mind his own business unless he wanted a beating. The bullies turned back to Ian, calling him a monster. They praised him for knowing his place like a good dog and ordered him to walk the long way around if he ever saw them again. The second that trash left his mouth, a glob of food splattered against the bully's head. The senior went ballistic, demanding the bastard responsible show themselves. That's when our boy stepped into the spotlight. He didn't just talk, he slammed the senior's face into the table, twisting his arm and pinning him down. Ray leaned in, asking exactly who needed to take a detour. The pinned scumbag stuttered that he was talking about Ian, the disgusting red-headed monster. The commotion grabbed the attention of the station knights as students alerted them to the fight. Meanwhile, Ray looked ready to beat the living daylights out of the loudmouth. Ian rushed in to pull him off, ensuring no permanent damage was done, and hissed at him to chill out because the knights were watching. Gary jumped in to restrain him too, while Sylvia shouted that the exams were about to start. Fighting now would ruin his first impression. Ray didn't just hold the upperclassman, he had the guy in a vice grip, torquing the arm to a breaking point. The crowd went nuts, crying to the instructor about the red-haired demon assaulting a poor, innocent student. Knight Lancey stomped into the fray, barking at Ray to stand down while the senior shrieked like a banshee, begging for salvation. Instead of complying, Ray cranked the limb harder. Lancey's voice dropped an octave, demanding he stop immediately. You know, Ray said coolly, growing up taught me one universal truth. When someone tries to walk all over you, or treats you like garbage, you don't talk. You show them exactly what happens when they cross the line. Asterisk crack. Asterisk. The sickening sound of bone snapping silenced the room. The students stared in pure horror at the red-headed nightmare. Ray finally shoved the whimpering senior away. He looked Lancey dead in the eye. Pain is the only teacher some people respect. Lancey, their supervisor, looked ready to explode. I gave you a direct order. Cadet, why did you ignore it? A sly grin crept up Ray's face. My apologies, sir. I figured a teacher like you would understand sometimes you only hear what you want to hear. Selective hearing. Right. He shrugged, completely unbothered by the knight's murderous aura. Ray grabbed Gary by the shoulder. Come on. Let's finish eating. I'm not letting a piece of trash ruin my appetite. Knight Lancey stood there, trembling with rage at the sheer audacity. The mood shifted. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The seniors started it. They were bullies. And frankly, the redhead just gave them a much-needed reality check. Suddenly, the atmosphere grew heavy. The three commanders arrived, and the students stiffened. Sensing a major exam was imminent, Winford silenced the chatter instantly. Bowing respectfully to welcome the Academy's supreme leaders, the 6 elders, 6 figures swept into the hall, their faces hidden behind masks, their bodies shrouded in heavy cloaks. Panic set in. The 6 elders never supervised exams. This wasn't just a test anymore. It was a trial by fire. Ray watched them approach, the heavy thud of their footsteps echoing in his ears. He narrowed his eyes. Asterisk. Do they have the power? Are they like the humans who slaughtered my kind and took my life in the past? Asterisk. Shaking off the dark thoughts. Ray listened as Winford announced that the elders were there as witnesses. You will be judged, Winford declared. Your performance today determines the color of the sash you wear. It defines your rank and your future. Perform poorly, he warned, and you'll be branded with a red sash. In this academy, that is the mark of failure. But Winford's expression softened into a reassuring smile. But do not despair. Even with a red sash, the path to greatness is not closed. You could still stand where I am today. You were all chosen at 5 years old because you are special. You have gifts. Do not give up. The training ahead is designed to sharpen that steel within you. Ray studied Winford. Asterisk. Always the optimist. Asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, I wonder if he'll keep that sunny disposition when I inevitably get slapped with a red sash. Winford wrapped up his speech and handed the floor over to Lancey. Lancey promised to do his best. But as he spoke, his eyes locked onto Ray with a glare that screamed murder. Lancey barked out the details. The trial has 5 stages. We test everything. Strength stone. Burning hell. Undetected walk. Precision eye. And the will of truth. First up, the strength stone, Lancey announced, gesturing to the massive boulders. Simple task. Push the rock to the target line. Do that, and you pass. You get 2 shots. Fail the first, you can use the magic gauntlets for the second. They'll boost your strength. Sure. But your score takes a massive hit. Remember that before you reach for them. Looks easy enough, Gary whispered. Ray smirked. It wasn't just easy, it was child's play. Though, Ray muttered under his breath. I have a feeling someone isn't going to let me walk through this. Gary blinked. What are you talking about? Before the test could begin, Lancey dropped the bomb. As the presiding examiner, I am exercising my right to exclude Ray from this assessment. Ray didn't flinch, standing with arms crossed like he expected it. That's garbage, Gary and Sylvia shouted in unison. You can't just ban him, that's not fair, Lancey sneered. Consider it a lesson in discipline. Knights obey orders. He didn't. If you have a problem with my decision, Lancey challenged, his voice cold, go ahead and file a complaint with the commanders. If they overrule me, I'll comply. Until then, my word is law. He immediately called the first name on the list. Ignoring them, Gary leaned toward Ray, looking pale. Man, you are definitely on his blacklist. Sylvia urged him to take it up with the higher-ups, insisting he couldn't just let them disrespect him like that. But the kid didn't give a damn. He actually claimed the mix-up made things easier for him. He told them to just focus on the exam, he'd catch up with them in the next round anyway. That level of confidence convinced Ray he had the red sash in the bag. Turns out, both Gary and Sylvia passed with flying colors. Ray, on the other hand, decided to show off instead of pushing the boulder like instructed. He just picked the whole thing up with his bare hands. Everyone's jaws dropped when Gary stumbled back in, dripping with sweat but grinning like an idiot because he actually pulled it off. Ray gave him a pat on the back but dropped a warning the second trial wasn't going to be a walk in the park, so he better steel himself. While the blonde kid looked confused, Ray pointed out their next proctor, a mage looking straight out of Roland Academy. One look at the guy and Gary started freaking out. How were they supposed to pass a magic test when they hadn't learned a single spell? Ray shut that down immediately. The battlefield doesn't care what you know. He figured the test wasn't about casting magic, but surviving it. He added a little nugget of wisdom usually. The guys who are physically absolute monsters have the weakest resistance to the arcane arts. Ray deduced the Academy's game plan 5 tests to expose every weakness and highlight every strength. Figuring out the optimal cultivation path for each student, it all clicked for Gary, who immediately started wondering if he was some kind of all-rounder genius. Ray's expression said, "Don't count on it." Then the second trial, the scorching hell, kicked off. The examiner cast a spell right on Gary's forehead. The poor guy managed to hang on for 57 seconds. Ray gave him props for lasting that long. Though Gary looked like he thought he'd bombed it, Ray set him straight inside that mage's illusion. 1 hour equals just a minute out here. So yeah, he did just fine. Sylvia was up next. As the mage began his work, she steeled herself. It was all smoke and mirrors, and she wasn't going to let a nightmare break her. The mage spun his web of fire, but she held strong. 5 whole minutes ticked by, and the crowd started whispering about her insane talent. By the time the examiner told her she'd proven her worth, half the students were looking at Sylvia like she was a goddess descended to earth. The mage called Ray's name next. Sylvia wished him luck, but Ray was already calculating 20 seconds should be enough to pass without drawing attention. Or maybe he should just flop instantly. He braced himself as the mage wove the illusion spell. Out of nowhere, a massive red dragon materialized right in his face, unleashing a torrent of flames. Confused, Ray realized the dragon looked suspiciously like his past incarnation. Suddenly, the examiner shot up into the air, suspended by some unseen force that made everyone's eyes bug out. The mage started raving like a lunatic, screaming that Ray was cursed by the red dragon. And that's when the crowd turned, whispering that the red-headed kid was bad news, a walking curse. Winford rushed over to the old mage, who had collapsed unconscious. Ray stood there, playing the concerned student, asking if the old guy was all right. The knight waved him off, claiming it was just exhaustion and telling Ray to go take a breather. Internally, though, Winford was baffled. The old man's mana reserves were completely dry, which didn't make a lick of sense. Later, the elders convened to discuss the incident. Winford reported it as mana deviation caused by overexertion, assuring them the mage would recover with rest. The elders didn't look convinced by that explanation at all. They demanded to know how a seasoned mage from the prestigious Roland Academy could possibly drain his entire core just testing a single rookie, while some wondered if the cumulative load of testing students caused the burnout. Winford stated the mage was currently out cold, but he'd keep digging into the anomaly. He suggested bringing in a substitute mage to handle the remaining trials, and the head elder gave the green light. As Winford left, a masked elder beckoned an armored guard. He whispered a command, and the guard nodded grimly, promising to handle it immediately. The elder's gaze shifted, locking onto Ray Talon from a distance as the boy rejoined his friends, back with the group. Ray asked about mana deviation. Sylvia explained it's what happens when a mage runs on empty but tries to cast anyway. The spell backfires and wrecks their body. While Ray processed that, Gary shook his head at his friend's luck, muttering something about how geniuses always seem to attract trouble. While the boys joked around, the silver-haired girl wasn't laughing. It didn't sit right with her. A Roland Academy mage making such a rookie mistake, and that rambling about a curse. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the area. The ground started shaking violently, felt like an earthquake. Trees erupted from the earth, sprouting everywhere in seconds. The crowd panicked, realizing this was high-level magic as the entire exam grounds transformed into a dense forest. Gary looked completely lost, but Sylvia's eyes narrowed. "Someone," she announced, "is casting a massive spell." That was the moment the proctor materialized to announce the commencement of the third trial. Before the disciples could even process the sudden arrival, the instructor barked orders to shadow his movements and mimic his footwork. Without a countdown, the third phase was already underway. Gary blinked, looking utterly dumbfounded that the exam had actually begun. The proctor vanished in a blur of speed, leaving the students scrambling to keep up. Poor Jay was stuck in denial, whining about how freakishly fast his classmates were moving. Gary shot a competitive grin at his pal, swearing he wouldn't be the one eating dust today. Sylvia darted past, warning him not to lag since nobody was going to babysit him. Meanwhile, the instructor mused that perhaps he was pushing these fledglings a bit too hard, but a glance over his shoulder left him stunned. The brats were actually right on his tail. A smirk of approval crossed the proctor's face as he mentally signaled his colleague, Monk, warning him that the pack was closing in fast. Realizing he had underestimated their potential, he decided to drop the kid gloves. Let's see if they can handle his true speed. As the group surged forward, Jay grumbled that bipedal sprinting wasn't his forte, he was much more comfortable scrambling on all fours. Suddenly, a volley of projectiles shrieked through the air, prompting Jay to scream a warning to the group. It was the ambush examiner launching the assault. She chided her partner, insisting he stop holding back since the herd needed thinning, but he just laughed, assuring her that these disciples had some grit she was about to find out the hard way. The female instructor barked at the students to maintain their pace or get left in the dust, pointing them toward a rack of weapons. Grab a bow. Confusion rippled through the ranks until it clicked they weren't just running anymore. The fourth trial had overlapped with the third. Precision testing. While on the move, Gary panted. Sylvia nodded in agreement as the pack surged ahead. The new proctor announced that targets were scattered through the woods ahead. To pass, they needed 3 bullseyes while surviving her interference, and just like that, the fourth trial, the Eye of Precision, was officially active. Our protagonist mused that settling for a red sash would be acceptable, but finishing dead last was out of the question. Time to stop holding back. He decided to flex a little power and ignited his dragon's eye. The moment his vision heightened, he spotted a mana-infused arrow locking onto Gary. Jay sensed the lethality instantly and shoved his friend out of the kill zone. Jay realized he had left himself wide open with no time to evade. Miraculously, an intercepting shaft whistled past, shattering the incoming projectile mid-air. A cold sweat broke out. That shot carried genuine killing intent and way too much power for a mere entrance exam. It was a point-blank execution attempt. It was Marcia, a sharp-eyed classmate, who had bailed them out. She lowered her bow, asking if they were still in one piece. Gary heaped praises on her skills, but Marcia just murmured that she was lucky to be in range. Otherwise, that intercept would have been impossible. Jay's instincts screamed again. Incoming defensive positions, he roared. The group scattered, narrowly evading the volley. Meanwhile, our hero analyzed the situation. A pit forming in his stomach. These projectiles were cloaked in a dense aura completely distinct from the suppressing fire the proctor had been raining down earlier. This wasn't a test anymore. Someone was hunting them, or specifically hunting times him asterisk. Suddenly, another lethal shaft streaked toward the students. Jay tracked its trajectory, drawing his bowstring to its limit to intercept the death blow. The Stage 4 proctor sensed the bloodlust as well. Down below, our boy unleashed such force that his bow snapped into splinters upon release, leaving his peers gawking in disbelief. Sensing the anomaly, the examiner locked onto the intruder's position and gave chase immediately after the assailant launched a full-scale barrage. But she was left stunned. The shadow figure had evaded her strike with terrifying speed, vanishing without leaving a single footprint. Who in the 9 hells targets fledglings, she muttered, discarding the evidence from the tree line. Composing herself, she shouted down to the students that her arrow had simply gone astray, ordering them to resume the assessment immediately. Jay wasn't buying it. He knew that shot hadn't come from her, and she was clearly trying to prevent a panic. As the other disciples focused back on the exam, our protagonist's mind raced, calculating the odds of a high-level assassin infiltrating the grounds. Crossing the finish line, they found Monk and the Stage 3 instructor waiting for the arrivals. Gary and Jay pulled Sylvia aside to debrief her on the assassination attempt, leaving her visibly shaken by the revelation. She insisted they report it to the Knights immediately, but Jay shook his head, advising against it. Gary backed him up. The proctor lied to our faces. She might be trying to keep us calm, or she might be covering up a conspiracy. Gary grimly noted that whoever launched that attack had access to the exam grounds, meaning they walked right through the front door. The conclusion was chilling. The would-be killer was likely a fellow examiner or a Knight of the Order. The color drained from Sylvia's face, trembling slightly. She looked at the boys. So, what's our move? George signaled her to hold position and wait for the dust to settle. He was dying to know who the assassin was. But the intruder didn't stick around. The guy tossed his bow and tried to bolt, only to get intercepted by a female proctor who barked at him to freeze. As the intruder skidded to a halt, the proctor leveled her arrow straight at his heart, demanding to know why he was targeting the freshman. Keeping her aim steady, she made it crystal clear. One wrong twitch, and she'd put an arrow through him before he could blink. The assassin ignored the warning, inching his hand toward his blade. But the proctor tightened her grip on the bowstring, warning him she'd drop him the second he drew steel. He glared daggers at her, and in a split second, the standoff exploded into a full-blown clash. The scene shifts to the 5th and final trial, the Will of Truth. It was time to test the students' mental fortitude and their aptitude for manipulating chi. Dave held up a blade, explaining to the crowd that it was forged from the core of a phoenix, a supreme magical beast, and that the steel would erupt in flames the moment someone grasped it. He noted that while none of the kids had formally learned chi cultivation yet, they could still trigger the reaction through sheer willpower and mental focus. He called up the first volunteer, Ian, the beefy redhead. The kid looked nervous as he grabbed the hilt. And whoosh, a massive fireball exploded, leaving his face charred black like a cartoon character. Lindsay jumped back in shock at the explosion while the instructor waved for the next student to step up. Meanwhile, the perspective shifts to Elder Zeeby, who seems to be having a little chat with the assassin from earlier. The elder looked thoroughly unimpressed, scolding the guy for not only botching the mission but getting caught by a mere proctor to boot. As the henchman groveled, Zeeby admitted he never really expected to wipe out their target in one go anyway. Slipping on a disguise mask that altered his appearance, he muttered that, at least they'd sent a clear message. The Pure Blood Society was far from extinct. Back at the arena, Gary took the stage. The moment he gripped the sword, he controlled the flames with absolute perfection, while our protagonist watched from the sidelines. Sylvia turned to Gary, asking if Day was actually the real deal. Gary paused, thinking it over, then admitted Day was terrifyingly strong. The others looked skeptical, though it was hard to believe given how trash Day's scores were in the first 4 trials. That was when the blonde guy chimed in, recalling that Day had won their last spar without breaking a sweat. He recounted a memory from 10 years ago. A mid-tier demon wolf had cornered him, and Day was the one who stepped in and slaughtered the beast. The other classmates laughed it off, thinking he was exaggerating. They were only 5 years old back then. Surely it was just a big dog, not an intermediate monster. Sylvia couldn't shake the doubt. Is Day actually a powerhouse, and if so, why is he hiding his true level? It was finally our boy's turn. He grabbed the hilt, and instantly, the dragon system interface popped up. Supreme Beast Crystal detected. Absorb energy. To the onlookers, it looked like a total dud. No fire, no spark. The blade remained dormant, triggering a wave of murmurs among the students as they whispered that, of course, something would go wrong for him. The crowd gasped as the sword's ambient glow completely vanished. Day swung it back and forth a few times, playing dumb and wondering aloud if the thing was broken. Dave wasn't buying it. He stormed over and snatched the weapon right out of Day's hand. Seeing the blade completely inert, panic set in. Dave screamed, "This is a national treasure of the Anor Kingdom, forged from a supreme beast core. It doesn't just stop working." He grabbed Day by the collar, accusing him of sabotaging the artifact. Day put on his best innocent face, arguing that there was no way a student could damage a legendary weapon made from a supreme crystal. He added that Dave had been watching him like a hawk the whole time, so he wouldn't have dared to try anything funny anyway. The instructor looked ready to explode, but before he could unleash his fury, an armored knight cut in, signaling an urgent report. The knight whispered something into Dave's ear, and the color instantly drained from the instructor's face. Recovering quickly, he announced that the exams were officially over effective immediately and ordered all students to return to their dorms. The kids let out a collective sigh of relief, though they were reminded to show up for dinner later to receive their ranking belts. Buzzing with excitement about their rankings, the students chatted away. Day, for his part, was just hoping to snag a red belt. But something else caught his attention. He overheard the knights murmuring that the proctor from the 4th stage had been found dead. Winford, who was at the scene, was told she was already gone when they found her. The disturbing part, her body was still warm. That meant the kill was fresh. She'd been taken out moments ago. It left Day wondering who on earth had the skill to pull that off. The lead knight immediately ordered that the elders be informed. The scene cuts to the elders' council room, where the armored knights were delivering the grim news. They revealed that the proctor had been silenced with a single, precise strike. Whoever did this was a pro. The guards also noted a glaring anomaly despite the intrusion. Not a single perimeter alarm had been triggered. One of the elders grimly concluded that this had to be an inside job. Confirming the rumors about a traitorous faction operating from within, the head elder racked his brain, wondering if this was the handiwork of the Pure Bloods or the Dark Guild, while the rest of the council felt such speculation was crossing a line. A blue sash knight captain had been slaughtered during an exam, so getting to the bottom of this tragedy was mandatory. No more waiting around. The head elder voiced his concerns about their course of action, but the sect leader cut him off with a sharp warning. Not a single whisper of this incident was to leave the room. If word leaked beyond these doors, there would be hell to pay. He commanded the captains to keep digging and drag the culprit out into the light. Come dinner time, The atmosphere was thick with tension as the students gathered to receive their sashes, nerves frayed to the breaking point. Meanwhile, Gary and Sylvia struck up a conversation with a girl named Martha. The silver-haired beauty was just relieved to finally have a female roommate for a change. Something about her last name nagged at the blonde boy. So he couldn't help but ask Martha, "You wouldn't happen to know an Ann Woodwork, would you?" Small world, turns out. That is her mother. Ray, however, was miles away. His mind locked on the grim memory of the murdered proctor. No ordinary killer could pull that off. It had to be an inside job, someone high up. He reckoned it was likely the commanders or even the elders themselves. Our protagonist was pulled from his dark spiral when Gary chimed in, breaking his train of thought with a question. "Hey, remember that adventurer we ran into on the road to Renie a few years back?" Gary asked, launching into a story about the encounter. It turns out that woman was Martha's mom. Crazy coincidence. Right, but Ray, he wasn't catching a single word of the conversation. That started to really tick Gary off. He had noticed Ray had been spacing out a lot lately, his head constantly in the clouds. Sylvia wondered if he was still hung up on the mysterious archer. While Gary decided to pinch Ray's cheek as hard as humanly possible to wake him up, that did the trick. Ray mumbled something about the 5th trial specifically. Why the testing sword hadn't reacted to him at all. Our boy kept his mouth shut about the proctor's death, knowing that dragging them into the mess would only put targets on their backs. While Gary tormented Ray's face, the silver-haired girl watched the display, commenting on Ray's terrible luck. Just as she was about to bring up the incident during the second exam, the commanders marched onto the platform at Wilfred's location to announce the sash ceremony had begun. Wilfred barked out orders for students to step up as called. First name on the list, Gary. He strutted across the hall with supreme confidence, prompting whispers among the crowd that he was easily the top contender. Everyone expected him to snag a white sash, though a few dissenters argued that the title of best belonged to their goddess, Sylvia. Others figured they would both land white sashes, with the Sylvia fan club vocal about her superiority. The consensus was a double white victory. Then, Wilfred dropped the bomb. Gary was awarded a black sash. The blonde knight looked visibly deflated as he took the sash, and the gossip mill started turning immediately. Next up, Ian and Sylvia both secured white sashes. The crowd freaked out when the redhead received a white one. Then came the name everyone was waiting for, Ray Talon. The audience was betting the house on him getting a red sash. To their absolute shock, our boy walked away with a black sash. Ray was stunned silent, while Dan was practically bawling his eyes out, realizing he was the solitary soul stuck with a red sash. Even Martha had landed a black one. Basically, even the bottom of the barrel got black. The other students didn't hesitate to remind Dan of the harsh reality, telling him the results were set in stone. On the flip side, Ray was baffled. Why on earth did he get a black sash? He had tanked those tests on purpose. Was there a conspiracy at play here? Before he could spiral, the Knight Commander spoke up. He announced that training would now be segregated by sash color under different masters. Gary was left wondering what exactly the black sash curriculum entailed. A guy who looked like he would rather be anywhere else stood there, smoking a cigarette. Clutching the roster for the black sash group, he eyed the 2 redheads in his squad. Great, he thought, hoping they wouldn't be a pain, and mockingly dubbed the group the Future Dragon Knights. The next day, at the training grounds, most students were heading back to the dorms. However, not everyone was dismissed. The Black Sash squad was stuck waiting for their instructor. Ray took the opportunity to catch some sleep. While Kai was making a racket, their teacher just prayed the kid was somewhat normal. The redhead, on the other hand, was just hoping to survive the day. The instructor ghosted up behind them. "You guys gossiping about me?" he asked, nearly giving Kai a heart attack. The guy exuded that too cool to care vibe, cigarette dangling from his lip as he signaled them to follow. Ray, Gary, and Martha walked alongside them in an awkward silence. Kai whispered, asking if they thought the teacher even knew his name. Betting he didn't, Gary shrugged and told him to just ask. Without missing a beat, Kai bounded forward and enthusiastically asked how he should address the master. Ray blinked, surprised by Kai's complete lack of filter. The instructor didn't even turn around, just gave a lazy wave. "Just call me K." Ray raised an eyebrow at the weird moniker, while Kai immediately assumed that it was obviously an alias. Further down the path, they ran into Delbert, who approached with a smug greeting for Sir K. Already holding a grudge against our red-headed hero, Delbert offered fake sympathy to the Black Sash instructor for getting stuck with 2 red-headed brats. Then, he turned his sights on Ray Talon, snickering that he must be thrilled with a black sash. The arrogant knight wasn't done yet, adding, Delbert had made up his mind that someone like Ray shouldn't be setting foot in this academy. But our boy didn't hesitate to look him in the eye and say it was a real tragedy that Delbert wasn't the one calling the shots. That snapped the last thread of Delbert's patience. He looked ready to explode. But he knew his place, settling for a growled warning that he'd be watching Ray's every move. Just as the knight raised his hand to slap him, Kai cut in with his blade, coolly reminding Delbert that Ray, Talon was a member of the Black Sash Knights now, and it wouldn't look good if petty prejudice started a civil war in the ranks. With the steel still pressing him back, Delbert sneered, claiming it was only a matter of time before everyone realized their precious prophecy about Ray was garbage. Then Delbert stormed off in a huff, tossing back a sarcastic good luck while the other students stood there, totally confused. Immediately whispering about this prophecy the knight mentioned, trying to figure out if anyone actually knew what he was talking about. Kai glared daggers at Delbert's retreating back before rounding on the students. Follow me, he barked, marching them deep into the castle to the site of their new special training. When they finally reached their destination, the room turned out to be an absolute abyss, pitch black inside, with a creepy, ominous wind howling past them that made everyone jump, straining their eyes against the gloom. They could only make out warped shadows. The silence was heavy enough to crush a man. And Monk and Gary started panicking. Sir Kai was gone. He had vanished into thin air without making a sound. And nobody had even seen him move, while the others lost their cool. Ray activated his dragon eyes. But even with his enhanced vision, the instructor was ghosted. He couldn't pick up a single trace. Can you see him? Gary whispered. Ray shook his head. He couldn't detect the man at all. That's when Kai materialized right behind them, holding a flickering candle and grabbing them, nearly scaring the souls right out of their bodies. The instructor announced that this was their dojo now. They would be training in absolute darkness to sharpen their abilities and hone their senses to a razor's edge. He told them they weren't leaving until they became one with the shadows, until the darkness itself was their deadliest weapon. Gary looked uneasy at that. I heard rumors that the Black Sash Knights are basically tasked with assassinations, he stammered. Is that true? Sir, Ray noticed his friend's anxiety spiking, while the instructor just took a long, slow drag from his cigarette, exhaling smoke as he admitted that their unique skill sets made them the perfect candidates for wet work. He told Gary to suck it up. Like it or not, that was the reality of their position, and he had to accept it. Gary didn't like that one bit. Why can't we just fight fair and square like normal knights? He grumbled. Kai stepped closer, looming over him to make a point. They were chosen because they had gifts the others didn't. They weren't normal knights. He clapped a hand on Gary's shoulder. But hey, if you really want to fight honorably, be my guest. Nobody's stopping you. He tossed them their black sashes. From this day forward, Kai declared, the only rule is that you win. How you do it is up to you. The next morning, Ray checked his wrist. The magical display read 300. He figured this must be the live ranking system showing his current standing. Lying in bed, he ran through the mechanics in his head. The rankings reset every single day after the training sessions. It was open season. Students could challenge anyone they wanted. If a bottom feeder beat a top dog, they swapped ranks instantly. Simple math: the higher your rank, the more resources you got. Winner takes all. Ray hopped out of bed and looked at Gary. How many people are in our year again? A little over 300. Gary replied. Gary was moping, thinking he was dead last, until he glanced at Ray's wrist and his jaw dropped. Ray was rank 1. Everyone had been betting on who took the top spot. And here he was. Jan was absolutely losing it. He was practically vibrating with joy, realizing he was rooming with the number 1 and number 3 ranked students, cackling like a maniac about how he could get away with anything now. Gary snapped at him, annoyed that Jan was flexing a rank that wasn't even his. Over in the girls' section, Sylvia, currently holding rank 3, was chatting with Marcia. She watched Jan acting like a fool and sighed. Boys are such idiots. Meanwhile, Anne noticed Monk grinning like a loon and asked him what the big deal was. Monk stared at his watch. Rank 65. Not bad at all. He felt a surge of confidence that he could climb higher. But he just shrugged at Anne. Nothing special. 10 days rolled by. Ray was pacing the hallway, doing the math. He was agonizingly close to the 100 points needed for a basic beast crystal. But the hunting grounds had been dry lately. He snapped out of his thoughts as he reached his dorm door. There was a shouting match going on inside. The noise was deafening. It was Monk and Gary, going at each other's throats. Monk was shouting that the only reason his rank shot up was because of the special training regimen. Gary wasn't buying it. He was yelling back, claiming the whole training program was a total scam because it hadn't done a damn thing for him. Monk looked ready to punch him. The training isn't useless. You moron, you just suck at it. Gary, he scoffed, muttering that his ranking was secure, regardless of some extra practice. The heated exchange left our protagonist scratching his head in confusion. Jan, equally clueless about the sudden drama, noted that he'd never seen Mong this worked up before. He clarified the beef they were clashing over the effectiveness of the special training, then turned to ask Ray exactly what kind of drills they'd been running. As for the regimen, Ray felt it was self-explanatory. Gary was hopeless at stealth and assassination arts, whereas Mong had shown a terrifying natural aptitude for the shadows. As the shouting match escalated, our main character reasoned that Gary had a point. In terms of raw fundamentals and martial foundation, he was leagues ahead of Mong. Even with Mong's rapid growth, Gary still held the upper hand in overall combat power. Meanwhile, Mong roared that his blood and sweat shouldn't be dismissed so lightly. That snapped Gary's patience. He bellowed back that he was entitled to his own opinion, regardless of how it hurt Mong's feelings. Sensing violence was imminent, Sylvia threw herself between them to de-escalate the situation, frantically signaling Ray for backup, but our hero couldn't care less, waving her off and telling her to handle the domestic dispute herself. Jan, on the other hand, thought a brawl was a brilliant idea. Sylvia shot Jan a glare, telling him to stop fanning the flames, but it was too late. Mong demanded a ranking duel to settle the score once and for all. Gary accepted without hesitation, sneering that he'd happily test if those fancy new tricks of Mong's could actually hold up in a real fight. The scene shifts to the training grounds, where the gossip mill was already churning among the disciples. Word on the street was that someone had the guts to challenge the top ranker. The crowd wondered if the challenger was the blonde noble. Rumors suggested it was another elite from the Daiden clan who held a formidable rank. Catching wind of the duel, Sabon, revealed to be the youngest scion of the Daiden house, was piqued with curiosity, but a silver-haired youth scoffed, telling him not to waste his time watching a couple of hillbillies from Renie swing sticks at each other. Meanwhile, Kai, the red-headed buzzcut, had already turned the event into a gambling den, shaking a wooden box and soliciting bets on whether the top dog Gary or the dark horse Mong would reign supreme. Jan was the first to slap down a few silver coins on Gary, causing Sylvia to lose her composure and scream at him for betting against his own bunkmate. But what really threw her for a loop was when her own roommate, Martha, placed her wager on Mong, gambling on the chance of a massive upset. Poor Sylvia looked like she was about to have a stroke from the stress. Desperate, she turned to Ray and asked if Mong actually stood a ghost of a chance. Down in the arena, the atmosphere tightened. Gary and Mong gripped their wooden practice blades as Kai, acting as judge, shouted for the duel to commence. Ray casually asked Sylvia if her money was on Gary. Before she could answer, the two combatants lunged at each other. As the wood clashed violently, Sylvia analyzed the fight, admitting that Gary was a prodigy with superior technique that outshone everyone else. However, nobody had ground harder or suffered more during the special training than Mong, making him the only one capable of rivaling Gary right now. Mong unleashed a heavy strike that kicked up a cloud of dust, convinced that his hellish training was finally paying off. As the dust settled, it revealed Gary effortlessly blocking the blow. Their blades locked. Gary sneered and told Mong to yield, as victory was impossible for him. Ray observed from the sidelines, noting that while Mong had indeed leveled up significantly, forcing Gary to actually pay attention, the outcome was inevitable. Gary would win. Losing interest, our protagonist stifled a yawn and looked ready to take a nap. Sylvia remained glued to the action, lamenting that sheer effort couldn't bridge the massive gap in talent in such a short window. Martha, watching her investment crumble, looked visibly stressed as Mong began to lose ground. The crowd's prediction held true. With a decisive strike, Gary shattered Mong's weapon, sending wooden splinters flying across the arena. The duel was over. Mong stared blankly at his empty hands, muttering in disbelief. How could I still lose? He sank to his knees, utterly defeated. Gary offered a half-hearted apology, reminding him that the martial world is cruel and talent dictates reality. But Mong snapped. Unable to accept the humiliation, he snatched up a jagged shard of his broken blade, his eyes wild with rage, and charged at Gary's exposed back. Like a man possessed by a heart demon, Mong lunged forward with the makeshift shank, screaming that the fight wasn't finished yet. Seeing the lethal ambush unfolding, Sylvia screamed, a warning to Gary, while Martha shrieked at Mong to halt his madness. The jagged wood was inches from piercing Gary's neck when it stopped dead. Blood dripped onto the floor. Gary whipped around, and Sylvia gasped. Stunned. When did Ray move? Ray stood there, gripping the sharp wood with his bare hand. His voice cold as ice. That is enough. The shock snapped Mong out of his frenzy. Horrified, he dropped the weapon and stammered apologies. Sylvia, however, was reeling. Mong's strike had been so fast her eyes couldn't even track it, yet Ray had intercepted it in a fraction of a heartbeat. Just what kind of monster was he? Mong continued to grovel, guilt washing over him as he watched the blood drip from the hand Ray had used to save him from becoming a murderer. Monk wasn't having it, scolding him for being so reckless, even while our boy tried to brush off the injury as nothing but a flesh wound. If Monk hadn't stepped in when he did, we'd be looking at a massacre. But the crowd didn't care about near-death experiences. They only cared about their wagers on the duel. The students swarmed Kai, demanding a winner, anticipating a riot if he said Gary won. Kai raised his hands to settle the mob and announced that due to outside interference, the match was a void. No winner, no loser. Everyone would get a full refund on their bets. That wasn't what the bloodthirsty crowd wanted to hear. The mood turned ugly fast, with curses flying and fingers pointing straight at the redhead for ruining their payday, assuming he staged the intervention to save his skin. Verbal abuse quickly escalated to physical assault as debris started flying, while the poor guy tried desperately to promise that nobody would lose a single copper, hoping to de-escalate the tension. It was useless. The arena descended into absolute bedlam as the insults shifted to trash and the projectiles turned into jagged rocks. The students weren't just jeering anymore. They were trying to drive them out of the academy grounds entirely. Screaming freak at the top of their lungs, the redhead became the sole target of their hate. Branded a monster and pelted with stones, a sharp rock slammed into Ray's skull. Monk instantly threw himself into the line of fire, trying to shield his friend from the onslaught. But one of the agitators shoved him back, telling him to shut up and get lost. To the side, Gary checked on Ray, alarmed by the stream of crimson running down his face. Sylvia and Martha tried to intervene, but the mob was beyond reason. Amidst the chaos, Sebastian, the silver-haired noble, hefted a heavy brick, aiming to crack the redhead's skull open. Monk spotted the lethal intent and launched a stone of his own, knocking the brick from Sebastian's grip. Monk stepped up, demanding he stand down and insisting that Ray had nothing to do with the botched bet. But the silver-haired elite just glared, vowing to make Monk pay for the interruption. Being talked down to like a child clearly struck a nerve, and Sebastian began to lose his composure entirely. Meanwhile, the verbal barrage against Ray intensified, the crowd chanting red-haired freak simply because bad luck seemed to follow him like a shadow. They called him Refuse, wishing he'd never been born, labeling him a walking calamity and demanding his expulsion. The vicious taunts cut deeper than any blade, echoing relentlessly in Ray's mind. He wondered why the universe singled him out, why these filth-ridden hypocrites refused to ever give him a moment of peace. Their voices drilled into his skull, cursing his crimson hair, grinding his spirit into dust with every hate-filled syllable. Something snapped. Ray's veins pulsed with adrenaline, rage boiling over as he decided that if he was a monster, then they were the ones who deserved to die. Just as he was about to lose it, Sir Winford arrived, bringing the chaotic scene to a sudden halt. He signaled to a subordinate that Ray was losing too much blood and needed immediate medical attention. Winford then turned to coordinate aid for the other injured students. Ray tried to play tough, claiming he was fine and asking if the Knight Commander needed him for something specific. With a heavy sigh, Winford broke the news Ray's mother had arrived at the academy. While Scarlet waited anxiously, Ray emerged, calling out to her. She offered a warm, albeit tired smile, noting how long it had been since she last saw her boy. She marveled at his growth spurt. Ray, bubbling with sudden excitement, took her hands and immediately asked about his father, assuming he must be doing better if she could visit. But her expression darkened. She revealed that his father was gone. Ray's heart stopped, fearing the worst. But Scarlet quickly clarified. He wasn't dead. He had simply vanished from their village home. Ray was bewildered, repeatedly asking how that was physically possible. His father had been bedridden since the infection took hold, The idea that he could suddenly get up and walk was inconceivable. Outside the room, Winford overheard the exchange. Burdened by the heavy secret, he couldn't bring himself to tell Ray. The truth about the shadow plague was grim. Victims usually perished within a year. Jack's resilience was an anomaly, but even the strongest who managed to survive eventually lost their humanity to the darkness, becoming mindless thralls that served only to spread the infection further. Even worse. Really, there had never been a single exception in history. Back inside, Scarlet explained that Jack had been fighting the Fermalit shadow plague for 10 long years. She recounted the night it happened. She heard a noise and found Jack sitting upright in his chair. He was awake, mobile. She rushed to embrace him, but Jack's skin was already darkening, consumed by the corruption. He muttered that his willpower was fading and begged Scarlet to end his life right there. Horrified, Scarlet broke down, telling Jack she couldn't possibly do it. Suddenly, the plague surged, seizing total control of his body, and Jack seemed to ignite with dark energy, screaming for her to kill him before he fully transformed into a living shadow. In the present, she admitted she didn't have the strength to strike him down. She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, a letter Jack had left specifically for Ray. Ray unfolded the note. His father apologized for being absent during his childhood, expressing immense pride that Ray had been accepted into the Academy. He thanked Ray simply for being his son, signing off with a final declaration of love. Overwhelmed by the heartfelt words, Ray broke down, realizing his father wrote this as a suicide note, believing these would be the last words he ever shared. But through the tears, a steely resolve formed. He would find a way to save him. Left alone in his room, Ray collapsed onto his bed, replaying every word in his mind. It started with his mother. She made a vow she wasn't coming back until she found his father, no matter the cost. He tried to follow her, of course, but Scarlet shut that down immediately. Walk your own path, she told him. It was what his father would have wanted. She pulled him into a crushing hug, savoring the moment. Don't waste time worrying about us, she whispered. Focus on your mission. Do what needs to be done. Back in his bunk, Ray stared at the ceiling. 10 years. It had been 10 long years, and he was still empty-handed. 0 leads. The stagnation was suffocating. He felt weak, pathetically human. He hadn't avenged his dragonkin. And worse, he couldn't even protect the people standing right in front of him. Just as he was spiraling into self-loathing, the door creaked open. Gary strolled in, casual as ever. So, you see, your mom. What's the word on your dad? Ray was crumbling on the inside, but he put on his mask. He's fine, he lied smoothly, brushing past Gary to leave the room. Gary knew that was bull, but before he could press it, something caught his eye. A piece of paper had slipped from Ray's pocket as he left. He bent down to grab it, but Jan was faster, swiping the note. Jan grinned like an idiot. Oh ho, staring at it so intensely. Gotta be a love letter. Right, give it back, Gary panicked, lunging for the note. He wasn't trying to snoop, and he definitely didn't want Jan broadcasting Ray's business. Jan dodged, wearing a devilish smirk. Oh, come on, Gary, don't be shy. Let's hear this steamy confession. As they wrestled over the scrap of paper, the rest of the squad walked in, staring at the chaotic scene with total confusion. It's Ray's, Gary finally shouted. The wrestling stopped. They read it. Silence fell over the room as they processed the truth. Ray's father had the shadow plague. The smirk vanished from Jan's face. Damn, he muttered. Kids had it rough. We need to cut him some slack. Mon nodded solemnly, his heart going out to their quiet friend. It explained a lot. Cut to the cafeteria. The place was packed, buzzing with noise, but Ray was drifting through the crowd in his own bubble of isolation. Suddenly, Martha and Sylvia flanked him. They acted like it was total coincidence, terrible acting. Really, and dragged him over to their table. Later, back at the dorms, Ray stopped dead in the doorway. His usually messy bunk was pristine, made up, spotless. Who did this? Jan and Ian exchanged nervous glances before blurting out. Sylvia, yeah. Sylvia did it. Because she's, super nice. Their acting was atrocious. Ray narrowed his eyes. Something was up with these guys, and he was going to figure it out. The next morning, there was a vase of fresh lilies on his nightstand. Gary rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Thought, you know, they might brighten up the place a bit. Ray stared at the flowers. then at Gary, his face twisting into pure confusion. "Gary?" he asked deadpan. "Are you hitting on me, Gary?" Practically choked. "What, no dude? Gross, it's not like that." Ray dropped the act. "Okay? Seriously. What is wrong with you guys lately? You're acting weird." Gary sighed. Defeated. He couldn't keep it up. "Look. I saw the letter. About your dad. I didn't mean to snoop," he stammered. "It just fell out. And then Jan grabbed it. And, well, pretty much everyone knows now. Sorry." Gary braced himself for Ray's anger, apologizing profusely. Instead, Ray just smiled, a genuine one. "You idiots," he said softly. "You guys really are the best." Gary let out a breath he'd been holding for days. He wasn't mad, thank God. Suddenly, a commotion outside the door shattered the moment. "Make way," someone screamed. Jan and Ian burst in, supporting a limp figure between them. It was Mon, and he was covered in blood. Gary's face went pale. What the hell happened? "Seaton." Jan spat the name out. "He baited Mon into a ranking match, just to beat him into a pulp." Ray stepped forward, eyes cold. Ranking matches stop when someone yields. How did he end up looking like times that asterisk? He was out cold, Jan said, his voice trembling with rage. Mon got knocked out early. He couldn't tap out. And Seaton just kept going. He knew Mon was unconscious. And he kept hitting him. He enjoyed it. Mon groaned, his eyes fluttering open to look at Ray. "Sorry. Ray. Can't make your bed tomorrow." Sylvia rushed to his side, checking his pulse. "Stop talking, his arm is broken. We need a healer." Ian didn't hesitate. He bolted out the door to find help. Ray turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" Gary asked. Ray didn't stop. The air around him felt heavy. "To pay a visit. Seaton owes a debt for what he did to Mon." Gary grabbed his shoulder, trying to hold him back. "Ray. Wait, don't be stupid. Think about this." Ray shook him off, his expression stony. "I'm going. The only question is, are you coming with me?" Gary bit his lip. He was furious about Mon. "Sure. But attacking a noble I want to smash his face in too." "But..." Ray cut him off. "No buts. This is Retribution. Ray." "Stop!" Sylvia cried out. "You don't understand. Seaton is a Debet." Gary nodded frantically. "He's Lord Debet's youngest son. You touch him, you bring the whole noble house down on us. It's suicide." Ray didn't even flinch. "He started it. I'm just going to finish it." He turned and walked away. "Damn it." Gary shouted at his retreating back. "You're not listening. This isn't the first time he's done this. And he always gets away with it." The guy kept rambling on, warning Ray that messing with the academy was a one-way ticket to expulsion. But Ray, our favorite reckless redhead, didn't care. He told the guy to relax, he wasn't an idiot. He had a plan. If he issued an official ranking challenge, he could exact his revenge legally. No rules broken. Just pure payback. Later, Ray spotted the Debus faction training on the grounds. He walked right up and crashed their party. 2 of the night cadets stepped in immediately. They clocked Ray as an outsider and blocked his path. They told him to wait his turn. They were in the middle of intense drills and didn't have a single second to waste. When Ray asked for their leader, the knights looked confused. They didn't recall ever chatting with some random redhead before. Ray told them to move aside. That's when a silver-haired guy looked like Sebastian's right-hand man stood up to check the commotion. As Eric, the silver-haired lackey, strutted over. His teammates filled him in. Apparently, this intruder was looking for Sebastian. Eric stepped up, sneering. He claimed Sebastian didn't associate with red-headed weirdos and snapped at Ray for interrupting the session. He got personal, tossing out insults. "Did your parents ever teach you any manners, kid, or were you raised in a barn?" Ray didn't flinch. He got right in Eric's face. "If you aren't the guy I'm looking for, what does this have to do with you? Get lost." Eric ground his teeth, furious. Just then, Sebastian strolled onto the scene, asking the redhead if he had business with him. The young Debus heir smirked. He guessed Ray was there for his friend, assuming he was another one of those black belts. Ray didn't feel like explaining himself. He cut the small talk and got straight to the point. Without hesitation, he tapped his watch and issued a formal challenge against Sebastian. The opponent admitted it was bold, but Sebastian rejected it instantly. He saw Ray's rank 280 and told him to forget it. Ray wondered if the guy was scared, but the Debus heir just scoffed, saying there was no point fighting someone so low-ranked. Sebastian burst out laughing. I thought that other black belt was weak. But you seem even worse. He offered a mock apology, assuring Ray he didn't mean to hurt his feelings. But facts were facts. It's just the natural order. He sneered, calling the black belts peasants and saying he was tired of dealing with trash. He turned to leave. But Ray lunged at the arrogant jerk. Eric stepped in, blocking his path immediately. Eric insisted that Sebastian shouldn't lower himself to fight common rabble. He'd handle the trash himself. The silver-haired lackey revealed his own rank 9th. If Ray could hang with him, maybe others would take interest. Sebastian, amused, gave the nod. Does that work for you? Boss Eric asked. Sebastian happily told him to go ahead. Ray looked past the lackey to the leader. If I beat this guy, you accept my challenge. Deal. While Eric fumed at being ignored, Sebastian agreed. Sure. We'll talk after the match if you're still standing. The Deba students cheered, excited to see a live beatdown. They felt lucky to be in a squad where fools came to get crushed daily. They just hoped it would last longer than a few seconds. Ray stood calm, telling Eric to bring it on. Eric gripped his wooden sword, puffing his chest out with pride. He looked ready to teach this kid a lesson. He called Ray arrogant and warned, "Don't go crying for someone to avenge you when I'm done." The crowd noticed Ray hadn't even drawn a weapon. Eric took it as an insult and a perfect opening to show off. He planned to use the techniques Sebastian taught him. Sebastian watched from the side, smirking like a proud mentor. Look at him, bullying the weak again. Sebastian chuckled. The match started. Ray stood completely still, unarmed. Eric lunged. He swung his sword with vicious intent, aiming a heavy thrust right at Ray to end it instantly. But to his shock, Ray sidestepped it like he was taking a morning stroll. Eric's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe Ray dodged such a fast strike. "I'm not done yet," he yelled, resetting his stance. Eric launched another assault. The fight continued. But Ray weaved through every swing effortlessly. It was like the redhead was friends with the wind. He leaped into the air, graceful and untouchable. Eric started to panic. He was swinging as fast as he could, but he was hitting nothing but air. Just as Eric's guard faltered, Ray saw his opening. He drove a brutal punch straight into Eric's gut, dropping him. Eric crumpled to the ground, trembling in agony. The silver-haired bully passed out cold, and the students rushed him to the infirmary. Ray looked at the young Debus heir. "Am I qualified to fight you now?" Sebastian still hesitated, asking what was in it for him. That's when Ray played his ace to force the issue. Ray tossed 2 intermediate beast crystals onto the ground. "Win. And you keep these." Sebastian froze. Sebastian eyed the crystals with suspicion, demanding to know their origin. He made it crystal clear he had no intention of catching heat for handling stolen goods. The boy didn't flinch, claiming the gems were an inheritance left behind by his adventurer parents. Ray sweetened the pot, teasing that the crystals were still up for grabs since he hadn't wasted them on upgrading his gear just yet. Young Delbert took the bait. The prize was too tempting to ignore, so he accepted the challenge, but not without attaching a few strings. He insisted on making their rank battle a public spectacle. He claimed it was about honor, not wanting rumors spreading that he had bullied a helpless kid into handing over the beast cores. The boy didn't even hesitate. He agreed instantly, admitting a public stage was exactly what he was after. The scene shifts to the arena, where the student body is already screaming for Sebastian to crush the red-headed freak. Meanwhile, Kai tagged along, looking like a nervous wreck as he asked if Ray was actually insane enough to go through with this. He pointed out that Sebastian was a ranked fighter, and challenging him wasn't just bold, it was practically a death wish. Kai started panicking, assuming Ray was trying to make a quick buck by throwing the match. He warned him that even if he planned to take a dive, the opponent wouldn't pull his punches, but Ray just brushed him off. He told Kai to chill out and put his money where his mouth is, bet on the win. After all, who could possibly stop him? Resigned to the madness, Kai made one demand: make that bastard bleed. Ray grinned and sealed the promise with a high five. As Kai started placing wagers on Ray, the dark horse, against the white-clad Sebastian, Ian asked the group how long the redhead would survive. Anne just prayed he wouldn't end up in the infirmary. However, Sylvia had a completely different take on the situation. She predicted a messy fight, not a slaughter. Ian immediately jumped on that, teasing her that love was blinding her judgment. Sylvia scoffed, fiercely denying any feelings for the guy. But she stuck to her guns. She snapped back at Ian, calling him the blind one for failing to see the raw power Ray was hiding. Gary stood apart, brooding. He wasn't worried about the match's outcome. He was terrified that Lord Delbert would unleash his wrath on him for letting this fiasco happen. On the stage, Sebastian was in full peacock mode. He sneered at Ray, launching into a tirade about social standing. He spat out his philosophy: knights breed knights, peasants breed peasants. In his world, trash could never ascend beyond its station. Raising his blade, the young noble declared that Ray's luck had run out. Beating a small fry like Eric gave him confidence. But Sebastian was a completely different beast. A student referee stepped in, ordering them to their starting positions. Our hero just smirked, advising Sebastian to save the lectures for his lackeys. As the duel commenced, Ray tied a black cloth over his face, leaving only his eyes exposed. Sebastian didn't wait, he lunged, bringing his sword down in a vicious overhead smash. Ray sidestepped the blow with casual grace. The noble scoffed, remarking that few people survive his opening strike and calling it pure dumb luck. Luck, Ray retorted. My luck is usually terrible. In a blur of motion, he managed to land a shallow cut right on the noble's cheek. Sebastian wiped the blood away, unimpressed by the scratch. He sneered that if that was the extent of Ray's power, the match was already over. Mid-stance, our boy sighed. He asked why Sebastian loved the sound of his own voice so much, wondering if the noble thought he could talk his way to victory. That struck a nerve. Flustered and enraged, young Delbert charged forward with blinding speed, shouting that Ray's little winning streak ended now. Ray evaded the charge effortlessly. With a deceptive feint, he slipped past the guard, slicing across Sebastian's face and shoulder in one fluid motion. Blood sprayed. The crowd went dead silent. Ian couldn't believe his eyes. The favorite was bleeding first. Anne watched in stunned silence at the impossible unfolding. Gary narrowed his eyes, analyzing the footwork. He realized Ray hadn't just gotten lucky. He was mimicking the high-level evasion techniques of Cyrus. The young noble had seen enough. He channeled mana into his blade, the steel glowing with dangerous energy, and dared Ray to dodge what was coming next. He practically roared the challenge, confident that no trickery could stop raw power. The spectators erupted as energy swirled around the weapon. They screamed their support, hungry to see the chi-infused blade tear the redhead apart. Ray slipped the first strike, but the noble smirked. He had anticipated the evasion pattern this time. Knowing exactly where Ray would retreat, Sebastian unleashed a frenzy of steel. The blade was everywhere at once, a storm of slashes designed to cut off every possible escape route. He hammered away relentlessly. The students cheered for their white knight, mesmerized by the flashy display and screaming for him to put the upstart in his place. Ian watched the barrage with a grimace. Ray had been dancing on the edge for too long. Surely, one of those strikes was about to connect. Thinking Sebastian was going overboard, the crowd flinched, but Sylvia remained calm. Look closer, she ordered. Ray isn't in trouble. She pointed out the grim reality. Ray wasn't being overwhelmed. It was the young noble who was covered in fresh cuts, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Ian's jaw hit the floor. He had assumed Ray was desperately defending himself this whole time. Even Gary looked rattled as the truth sank in. Ray hadn't been dodging. He had been on the offensive from the very first second. Sylvia breaks it down every time Day dodges Sebastian. He lands a counterstrike. She notes that Day is tanking hits just to drain Sebastian's stamina and wear him down, looking like a scratched-up mess. Sebastian loses it, screaming that even his own father never beat him like this, and swearing he'll kill Day. The noble rushes in to launch another assault, but Day cuts him off, slashing him with his blade. Watching these textbook moves from our protagonist, Garen rubs his eyes, doubting that is actually Day fighting. Sylvia, however, realizes that Day has plenty of openings to end the match instantly, and wonders why he keeps dragging the fight out. She realizes it is intentional. Day is torturing his opponent piece by piece, toying with him like a predator playing with a trapped mouse. We see Sebastian's face is now a ruin of fresh cuts and bruises. The poor wretch sobs in pain, spitting out insults, calling Day a filthy peasant. But our red-headed avenger finally exacts his price for Mong, smashing a final blow right into the noble's nose. Even as he trembles, Sebastian threatens Day, claiming his father will ensure Day doesn't get away with this and ends up a corpse. Our boy raises his sword again, deciding that wasting breath on trash like this is pointless. On the verge of collapse, Sebastian tries to forfeit. However, just as the words are leaving his mouth, our boy strikes him again. He is dishing out exactly what Sebastian did to Mong, blinded by a need for vengeance for his classmate. Day is ready to do whatever it takes to pay the blonde noble back for every grievance. He is not letting him off the hook that easily. Meanwhile, Sylvia and Garen realize the situation has turned critical. If this continues, Sebastian could die. Suddenly, a voice shouts for them to stop. It is Mong, stumbling in to restrain Day, leaving our protagonist confused about why he is interfering. Meanwhile, the battered opponent forfeits the match, and Day is declared the winner. Immediately, students swarm the arena to rush Sebastian to the infirmary. As Garen checks on his friend, the bruised white belt flies into a rage, ordering everyone to back off and warning the redhead that he will have the last laugh. The scene shifts to the central tower, the top floor of the Aryan Knight Academy, where Delbert is raising hell about what happened to his son. Kay attempts to de-escalate, insisting that from a knight's perspective, Day did not violate a single rule. Instructor Dedon mentions protocol, but Delbert isn't hearing it. Slamming his hand on the table in a fury, the knight roars that if he were ignoring rules, he would have slaughtered the red-headed brat on the spot. He demands Kay look at his son, claiming the boy is permanently disfigured. Delbert insists the attack was malicious because Day was born a monster. The moment those words leave his lips, one of the elders interrupts, agreeing with the assessment. If the prophecy holds true, that red-headed boy is destined to bring ruin to the kingdom. Elder Vaughn counters, reminding them the prophecy also names the redhead as a potential savior of the world. But Vaughn is cut off by a mumble claiming the child already shows signs of being a calamity. Another elder suggests the simplest solution: expel the redhead, and perhaps that will trigger the beginning of the end. The head elder silences the pointless debate. He proposes a vote to settle the divide, asking those in favor of expulsion to raise their hands to exile Day. Delbert, Elder Zuby, and Knight Roth vote to kick Day out. However, Elder Vaughn, the head elder, Elder Humphrey, Winford, Bernardo, and Instructor K oppose it. The final count is 3 votes in favor of expulsion against 6 opposing it. Consequently, the head elder rejects the motion to expel the red-haired boy. Later, Day is resting on the dormitory roof with his eyes shut. When he hears footsteps approaching, he wonders who it is. It is Sylvia. She couldn't find him in the Yabber dorm, so she guessed he would be up on the roof. Our boy tells her he needs space. For a moment, she presses on, asking if Mong is on his mind. He is startled, looking at her as if she just read his thoughts. She suggests that maybe he is just shy with normal people, bad with words, and worse at reading emotions. But our protagonist cuts her off cold, stating that he does not care. Flustered, Sylvia scrambles to explain that was not what she meant. Sylvia makes it clear she knows Day is not a bad person. Whenever she sees him struggling or angry, she wishes she could help somehow. She just hopes he can learn to trust them a little more after all. They are friends, muttering about whether they really are friends. Day suddenly pins her against the wall, shocking her. With his dragon eyes flaring to life, he tilts her head up and asks, "Are you afraid of him?" If she were being honest, yes. Sometimes he terrified her, but she refused to label him a villain. Sylvia offered him a gentle smile, gazing into his crimson eyes. "Those eyes suit you," she said softly. "Stop treating yourself like some sort of monster." The moment the words left her lips, the madness in Ray's gaze evaporated, leaving his eyes clear. He turned away, falling into deep thought. Just when he believed he had the human heart figured out, the script flipped on him again. Clearly, his cultivation of human understanding still had a long way to go. Elsewhere, Delbert stormed out of the building, practically vibrating with rage. Prophecy be damned, he swore he would slaughter that red-haired abomination himself. Elder Zibby intercepted him, knowing exactly which strings to pull. "I know what you're thinking," the elder murmured. "You believe true knighthood is a privilege reserved solely for the nobility. An intriguing philosophy," Zibby mused, hooking the boy's interest. "You certainly have my attention now." Back at the dorms, Sylvia was descending the stairs when a blonde student, a fellow white belt, blocked her path. He politely asked for Ray Talent's location. She pointed up, telling him Ray was on the roof. As the handsome stranger climbed the steps, Sylvia paused, realizing she'd never seen anyone with his bearing in their entire year. Ray, still brooding on the roof, heard footsteps. "Back already?" "Sylvia," he called out, wondering what she had forgotten. But the presence that greeted him wasn't hers. It was the blonde stranger. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else," the intruder said smoothly. "Harry Delbert. Second year." He introduced himself. Ray's face soured immediately. "Another Delbert great. I heard you put my little brother in the dirt," Harry stated flatly. Ray braced himself, expecting a vendetta, but Harry waved it off, muttering, "Relax. You've got me wrong. I'm not here for anything that petty. I actually came to thank you." Ray blinked, completely stunned. "Thank him for beating up his own kin. Sibone is arrogant," Harry explained. "He's never taken his training seriously a day in his life. He needed a wake-up call. It was only a matter of time before someone humbled him." Conversation over. Ray turned to leave, but Harry stepped into his path. "We can't have an official ranked duel since we're in different grades," Harry said, eyes gleaming. "But I still want to teach you a lesson." He tossed a wooden practice sword to Ray. Ray gripped it, sneering. "So, it is revenge after all." "Not at all," Harry assured him, raising his own blade. "I just want to measure the strength of the rookie who crushed my brother. Show me what you've got." Ray shifted into his stance. This guy felt different. His pressure was heavy, unlike the others. Ray decided to mix up his rhythm. Lunging forward, Harry parried the strike with effortless precision, the impact sending Ray stumbling backward. Seeing Ray recoil to absorb the shock, the senior nodded in approval. "Good instincts. You made the right call." Ray was reeling, a strange sensation numbing his arm. He realized with horror that his wooden sword had cracked from a single clash. Ray analyzed the situation rapidly. "If I keep attacking head-on, my weapon will shatter first." Harry watched him, deducing the problem immediately. "You don't know how to use aura yet, do you?" Realizing brute force was suicide, Ray switched tactics, employing the advanced black belt forms he had memorized. They traded blows, but Harry danced around the strikes like smoke. "Is this really all you have?" he taunted. Ray was panting now, sweat stinging his eyes. Harry's expression hardened. With a single, decisive motion, Harry brought his wooden blade down. Crack. Ray's weapon disintegrated. Blood trickled down Ray's forehead. Harry lowered his weapon. The spar was over. Harry turned to leave. Ray, battered and barely standing, forced himself up. "Wait. Are you the top-ranked second year?" "Rank 1, Harry laughed. "I'm ranked 50th. Ray froze. 50th. With that kind of monstrous skill, Harry waved over his shoulder. "Let's fight again once you've actually learned to control your aura properly." Ray stared at his trembling hands. Aura. Was that the missing key to true power? The scene shifts to the Elders' Council. Knight Winford paced nervously. "The border situation is critical. More knights are vanishing every day. The rot isn't just external." He pressed. "The Shadow Guild. Rumors say they've already breached the academy walls." The head elder's voice was grave. "That is no longer a mere rumor. Then we must warn the students immediately," Winford urged. "Agreed." The head elder nodded. "But first, bring me the red-haired boy. Destiny is calling him." Back on the rooftop, Ray sat in the lotus position, trying to commune with his energy. He strained to gather the aura into his core. But as always, nothing happened. With the heavens opening up like that, our boy decided it was high time to pack it in for the night. But just as he turned to leave, he spotted a few shady figures prowling around the academy grounds. It was clearly an ambush. They locked eyes on their prey, one of the school elders, and began closing the net. Ray flared his dragon eyes, instantly recognizing the aura. These weren't just thugs, they were beings of pure shadow. Annoyed, he ripped off his black sash. Could these creeps be connected to his father somehow? Down below, the masked assassins cut off the elder's escape route, making it crystal clear that tonight would be his last. The old man muttered something about the rumors being true. The Shadow Guild, really had times infiltrated the academy. One assassin sneered. The realization had come far too late. He boasted that the entire academy would soon fall into the guild's grasp, and not a single soul could stop them. Just as the elder braced himself to take on all four at once, a new player jumped into the fray. It was Ray. He landed beside the old man, announcing that 2 against 4 sounded like much better odds. Face concealed and sword drawn, Ray stood ready. The elder realized his savior was just a student and apologized for dragging a kid into a death match. One assassin seemed rattled by the kid appearing out of thin air, but his partner scoffed. It didn't matter, they were both dead meat anyway. As the elder began channeling his magic, he barked an order to Ray keep 2 of them busy while he handled the rest. Ray clashed with his opponents, noting the Elder's unique key signature. He also realized these shadow beasts weren't mindless drones, they still had their wits about them. He sidestepped a strike, aiming to slash one from the blind spot. But the second assassin intercepted the blow. As one enemy unleashed a spell, Ray bent backward to dodge. The assassins noticed his lack of key reinforcement and immediately pegged him as a total amateur. Figuring they had him pegged, Ray switched it up, clamping his blade between his teeth. The assassins paused, visibly confused by the bizarre stance, deciding to end the farce. They lunged for the kill, but Ray danced around every single strike. The shadow assassin was baffled by the kid's erratic movements. He was too slippery, vanishing from their sight whenever they tried to land a hit. While scanning for the redhead, they watched in horror as the powerful Elder annihilated their two comrades. The Elder signaled for the remaining assassins to keep fighting. He wanted to see exactly what this boy was capable of. Cornered, the assassins considered unleashing their secret technique, but decided to deal with the annoying red-headed brat first. Ray watched from a high vantage point, realizing the old man never actually needed his help to begin with. Still, seeing an opening, he dove down to strike the shadows from the rear. Ray was running circles around them, but eventually, one of them managed to get a grip on him. Just as it looked like the end for our hero, the Elder shouted a command, "Grab his arm and pull him this way." He instructed Ray to pivot and use the enemy's own momentum against him. The redhead obeyed, hurling the assassin straight at the Elder. The Elder unleashed a devastating key-infused punch, blowing the shadow assassin to smithereens. Watching the explosion, Ray couldn't help but wonder just how monstrously strong this old man was. That was when the knights finally showed up on the scene. The last assassin tried to flee. Ray started to give chase, but the Elder held him back, saying there was no point, the wretch was already on death's door. As the knights secured the area, Ray realized he had unlocked a new ability for the first time in years. The knights fussed over the Elder, but he waved them off. He mentioned one rat had escaped, suggesting they hunt him down if they felt like it. The knights immediately took off in hot pursuit of the fugitive. The Elder commended Ray for the assist, calling him a promising talent. Ray tried to pry into why the guild attacked him, but the old man neatly sidestepped the question. Instead, he clapped a hand on Ray's shoulder and asked if the boy had learned to manipulate ki yet, and then suggested no. Insisted that Ray join the martial arts club once he hit his second year. With that, the Elder wrapped himself in ki and vanished like a breeze. Ray stood there, stunned, thinking, what a weird old geezer. Cut to the headmaster's office. Winford was waiting. As soon as Ray arrived, Winford broke the news the Elder had summoned him personally. Ray broke into a cold sweat. Had he been busted already? Was his cover blown? Turns out, he wasn't special, at least not in that way. Winford had rounded up every redhead on campus, including An, Kai, Scott, Berger, and Z. The boys were restless, whispering about secret missions. The head Elder didn't waste time. Cutting straight to the chase, they were here because of an ancient prophecy. He revealed that 10 years ago, a decree came down from the heavens. It stated that when the land stood on the brink of ruin, a red-haired boy would rise to save them all. Hearing this, Kai puffed out his chest, assuming he must be the chosen one. But the Elder quickly humbled them. They weren't unique. The Academy had identified 10 candidates who fit the description perfectly. That threw Ray for a loop. He asked about the other 5. The Elder explained that since the others had a natural affinity for magic, they were currently training over at Duel Academy. As soon as Day heard that, his mind drifted to her. She was a student here too, wasn't she? He figured she probably already knew the deal with these people. Meanwhile, Kai and the other redheads were buzzing with excitement about playing hero. But the head Elder just kept droning on about the prophecy. He spun a yarn about how, back in the day, 5 legendary dragon knights saved the realm. They crushed the encroaching darkness, secured the land, and founded Avron Academy as their lasting legacy. Now, the head Elder was dumping that massive responsibility onto their shoulders, promising them advanced training that went way beyond the basic curriculum. The kicker was that these 5 red-haired kids were predicted to be the next generation of dragon knights for Avron. Walking out of the office, Kai and one of the twins were practically glowing, stoked to be the chosen saviors. Day, however, just turned to An. "Hey, have you always been a ginger?" And shot back, "Yeah, born with it. Made growing up a total pain in the neck." Actually, Day paused. He'd assumed everyone else was born this way. But his hair had shifted from black to red recently. It made him wonder if he even counted as a legitimate dragon knight or if he was just an imposter. The whole situation smelled fishy. The head elder was definitely holding back the full story from them. Cut to the elder's office, where Winford was grilling the old man, demanding to know why he didn't drop the whole truth on the kids. The head elder stood his ground. Those kids carry enough weight already. We'll spill the rest when they're ready to handle it. The reluctant knight sighed, but eventually nodded in agreement. Later, the scene shifted to Day, who was hitting the library to dig up dirt on the dragon knights. Public opinion was a mess. Some folks still thought dragons were symbols of evil, while others thought the beasts were just fairy tales that never existed. Only a handful still believed the creatures were guardians that kept the darkness at bay in the ancient times. As he flipped through the texts, one book caught his eye. It mentioned something about divine guidance. But since books about the gods were strictly off-limits to regular humans, Day hit a dead end. He decided to track down a priest to get some real answers. We see that on top of the special sessions with Sekai, they were also getting hammered by Winford with extra training to prep them for the Dragon Knight role. As the grueling schedule dragged on, Day mused that if he wasn't so busy training at night, he'd march right up to God and demand to know why he was stuck in a human body. Just like that, a year flew by. Between the brutal training regime, he still managed to squeeze in time for hunting trips. Now, the second year of their training was about to kick off tomorrow. Back in the present, Day was drifting off when a noise snapped him awake. He saw Gary thrashing around, shivering like a leaf in the middle of a nightmare. When Gary's eyes flew open and he saw Day looming over him, he looked terrified. "Chill out," Day muttered. "Go back to sleep. We've got a ceremony in the morning." Once he made sure the guy was okay, Day couldn't help but wonder what kind of dream could shake a guy up that badly. The next morning, Gary looked like a zombie from the lack of sleep. Day was actually worried about him. But then Sylvia bounced up, asking if they'd picked their clubs yet. Day gave her a blank stare. He clearly had no clue what she was talking about. "Are you serious?" Sylvia sighed, annoyed. "Pay attention. All second years have to join a club for extra training. It's mandatory." She announced she was heading to the medical club, while Gary decided to sign up for the swordsmanship club. Day felt a bit like the odd man out, until a memory clicked. Someone had mentioned a specific club to him before. He recalled that old geezer suggesting he join the martial arts club. With no better options, Day decided to give it a shot. He figured if it was a snooze fest, he'd just use the time to sneak off and hunt beasts. Here's the kicker: even with his new abilities, Day realized he had 0 mana. That explained why he'd flunked those assessments years ago. He was banking on intermediate beast crystals to turn the tide, hoping absorption would change his luck. But ever since he trounced Caston, he couldn't move freely. Too many eyes were watching his every move. He was currently sitting at rank 10, and he figured he'd need to throw a few matches to fly under the radar. Day trekked out to the martial arts club, surprised to find it in the middle of nowhere. The place looked abandoned. Seeing nobody at the gate, he wandered in, wondering if a club could actually exist in this dump. He called out to see if anyone was home and spotted a figure sitting inside. He walked up to the guy, no reaction. He couldn't even sense the man's presence. Day actually thought he might be a corpse, but the second Day tapped his shoulder, the old man's hand snapped out, grabbed him, and slammed him into the floorboards with crushing force. "The hell do you think you're doing here?" the old man roared. Day wheezed. "I'm just here to join the martial arts club. You're the one who invited me. Remember?" The old man froze, then relaxed. He realized this was the red-headed student who had helped him out that one time. Turns out, it was the elder. He started patting Day on the back like nothing happened. The poor kid just stared at him. "Seriously, you just attack strangers for fun without asking questions. You nearly killed me back there." The old geezer looked apologetic. "Sorry about the jitters. Kid, we've had a lot of strange faces passing through lately, got me a bit on edge." When Ray actually took the bait and agreed to join, the old man lit up like a Christmas tree. Then came the plot twist. He revealed that Ray would technically be his time's disciple. Ray blinked, realizing he'd been absolutely bamboozled into joining a club with 0 members. Cornered and feeling like he just signed a deal with the devil, Ray started calculating his odds of a prison break. Since it was just the two of them, the old-timer insisted on starting from square one. Apparently, during their first meeting, Ray looked like a total amateur who couldn't channel ki to save his life. While the master droned on about ki strikes and energy flow, Ray looked around the dusty room. This wasn't a club, it was clearly a graveyard for losers. No wonder nobody signed up. "Don't give me that look," the old man scoffed, reading his mind. "Those idiots don't understand true power. Stick with me." And I'll teach you that your bare hands are deadlier than any sword. Ray cut the sales pitch short. Fine. But what about those guys who jumped you earlier? The Shadow Guild. The elder replied, his voice dropping an octave. But don't worry your pretty little head about them until your second year. He spilled the tea. The Shadow Guild wasn't just a street gang. They were revolutionaries trying to topple the Allure Kingdom. And the kicker, their boss used to be a big shot right here at Avrion Knight Academy. Classic villain origin story. They got expelled, held a grudge, and formed a terrorist organization to settle the score. Ray frowned. Their aura felt familiar. Nasty. Like the Shadow Plague. So, how dangerous are we talking? Scale of 1 to 10. I owe you one for the save. So I'll shoot you straight. The old man sighed. They want my head on a pike. Why? Because I'm one of the 6 elders of this academy. Elder Vaughn then ripped off his shirt like a wrestler in his prime. I might be ancient, kid, but check out the gun show. I'm confident in these muscles. Figuring the old man already knew about the prophecy, Ray decided to drop the act. Time to show a fraction of what a real monster could do. Hit me, Vaughn commanded. Show me what you've got. So Ray didn't hold back. He wound up and threw a punch with enough force to crack stone. Asterisk, clang. Asterisk. It didn't feel like hitting flesh. Ray felt like he'd just punched a solid steel bulkhead, while Ray nursed his hand, which felt like it had been through a meat grinder. Vaughn looked impressed. Nice impact. Did you weave any ki into that? Nope. The old man's eyes went wide with excitement. By the gods, you're stronger than a raging bull without even trying. Once you master ki, kid, the sky's the limit. Ray narrowed his eyes at the excessive praise. Was this geezer for real? Or just buttering him up for another scam? Right then. Let's get to work. Vaughn slapped Ray's shoulder. Assuming the deal was sealed, Ray panicked. He hadn't actually said yes yet. But it felt like the trap had already snapped shut. Cut to the training montage. Vaughn started lecturing on the basics. Ki is everywhere. It starts with the breath. To demonstrate, he placed a hand on Ray to transfer a little jumpstart energy. Focus, the elder muttered, pushing his own energy into Ray. Feel it moving. Follow the flow through your body. It felt like liquid fire spreading through his veins. Warm. Soothing. Ray was genuinely surprised the energy current was actually tangible. Asterisk thud. Asterisk. Suddenly, Vaughn face planted into the floor. Ray froze as he realized his mana absorption had kicked in automatically. Hey, wake up, Ray shook him. Heart pounding. Don't you dare die on me. He checked for a pulse. Asterisk thump thump. Asterisk, still ticking. Ray let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Just a faint. Ray pieced it together quickly. His system was a glutton. When Vaughn tried to share a little ki, Ray's body treated it like an all-you-can-eat buffet and drained the old man dry of his mana. On the bright side, his mana bar was nearly topped off. Ray nudged the unconscious elder with his foot. Some master you are. One touch, and you're out cold weak. But Ray wasn't known for his saintly virtues. As a dragon, his patience meter maxed out at exactly 10 minutes. Whatever. He's not dead, Ray muttered. Might as well use the downtime. He activated dragon eyes his vision shifting to reveal the raw energy coursing through his own limbs. He tried to wrangle the scattered energy, mentally herding it toward his solar plexus, the dantian. Surprisingly, it obeyed, but keeping it there was the hard part. The moment he tried to circulate it through his meridians, the energy evaporated like steam. Focus. Gather. Fail. The energy kept slipping through his mental grasp. Unstable garbage. Ray growled. Fine. If finesse won't work, I'll just brute force it. Bad idea. The surge of ki tore through him like jagged glass. Pain exploded in his chest. And suddenly, he wasn't driving the bus anymore. The energy was spinning out of control. Vaughn groggily opened one eye just in time to see Ray turning into a ticking time bomb. The kid was leaking massive amounts of power like a broken reactor. Don't move, Vaughn roared, adrenaline snapping him awake. He lunged forward, placing his hands on Ray to siphon the lethal buildup before the kid exploded. Boom. The backlash blew out the windows and cracked the walls. Panting, the elder stared at the devastation. You maniac, he wheezed. You nearly nuked yourself with that stunt. Before Ray could process the lecture, his lights went out. When he rebooted, the sterile smell of antiseptic hit him first. Hospital ceiling, voices buzzing nearby. It was Sylvia and Kyle. They were huddled nearby, whispering theories about mana deficiency, and how Ray pushed himself too hard. The silver-haired girl noticed he was awake. "An old man brought you in," she explained softly. He was frantic. Only calmed down after the principal personally guaranteed you'd make a full recovery. Kyle, however, looked like he smelled a rat. He was deep in thought, trying to solve a puzzle. "Who was that guy?" Kyle muttered. He had enough pull to get the head of the hospital times the principal down here instantly. "That's not normal." Ray winced at Kyle's screechy voice. The elder was being too flashy, needing to kill the suspicion. Ray lied smoothly. "He's just the instructor for the martial arts club." Intense guy. Shifting gears, Ray looked around. "And what's your excuse?" "Gary, why are you lurking in a hospital?" "Medical club." "Bro." Gary shrugged. "Always had a thing for healing. Figured I'd sign up." Suddenly, Gary popped out from behind the curtain like a jump scare. "Man, I'm glad you're up, the silence was killing me." Literally. Ray just stared at the guy looming over his bed. Weirdo. Ray felt like they might as well just officially move their dorm room to the infirmary. Gary was sitting there, muttering to himself and looking like absolute death. Apparently, he hadn't slept a wink. Burned himself out completely during training, and decided the hospital bed was the only place he could catch a break. While Gary got an earful from Kai for being a slacker, Ray couldn't help but wonder what kind of demons were haunting his friend's nightmares. The second Ray got discharged, he headed straight back to the dojo. Elder Vaughn didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. He screamed at Ray for returning so soon, calling him a complete moron. Seeing the kid freeze up, the old master grumbled an explanation if he hadn't stepped in. Ray wouldn't just be injured, he'd be dead. Or worse. His ability to channel ki would be gone forever. Then, causing absolute whiplash, Vaughn offered a begrudging compliment, revealing that gathering that much energy on the very first day was practically unheard of. Just as Ray started feeling like a martial arts prodigy, the elder immediately checked his ego. "Don't get cocky," he snapped, proceeding to drill Ray on control, teaching him to condense the energy until it was no larger than a fist. Mastering the flow took time, but after drilling the basics just like the old man ordered, Ray found he could channel ki to reinforce any part of his body at will. 5 days flew by. Ray spent every waking moment training to circulate his energy, focusing on snapping it to the right spot instantly. It was brutal, grinding work, but the payoff was undeniable. The scene shifts to Avrian City's South Gate, where Lancey announced that this would be their inaugural hunt as official second-year cadets. "Listen up," Lancey barked. He laid out the map, indicating 3 designated safety zones where they could harvest beast crystals without getting slaughtered. He warned them sternly stray from the path, and you're dead meat. He explained that the 3 squads would split up, each heading to a different zone to gain experience against a variety of magical beasts. As they marched out, it became clear Martha's team drew the short straw, the insect forest. Kai looked like he wanted to vomit. He absolutely despised bugs. Ray glanced over at Gary. Something was definitely wrong. The guy looked completely washed out. A bug skittered into view. "Heads up," Sylvia called out. But Dan waved it off. "Relax, guys. It's just a garden variety bug. No need to wet yourselves." That confidence evaporated instantly. As the creature came into focus, a monstrosity the size of a human head, Dan and Kai looked ready to soil their armor. Martha wasted no time, pinning the creatures down with her arrows. "Stay sharp," Sylvia yelled. "They're weak individually, but they never travel alone." Right on cue, the swarm descended. It was chaos as everyone scrambled to defend themselves. Kai swung wildly at the disgusting critters, while Dan struggled to track their speed. Sylvia shouted a warning to Ray, but he was already moving, channeling his ki and unleashing his signature strikes. He crushed the insects with his bare hands. No steel required. Kai watched, a grin spreading across his face, clearly impressed that Ray had mastered the energy flow. Dan checked his own handiwork, then rolled his eyes at Ray. "Quit showing off and draw your weapon, man." Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the fighting. Monk and Ray spun around to see a bug latch onto Gary's arm. Drawing blood, Dan smashed the bug and checked on Gary. "You good?" Meanwhile, Sylvia was already inspecting the damage. "It's shallow," she announced. "Dan, help me get his gauntlet off," she ordered. "I need to patch this up." Ray watched, his brow furrowed. Gary had been off his game for days, but getting tagged by a low-tier trash mob, that wasn't like him. Ray resolved to grill him about it once they were back in safety. Sylvia placed her hand over the wound, channeling ki. The skin knit together before their eyes. Whoa. Dan blinked. Did you pick that up in the medical club? Kai chimed in. Ki accelerates cell regeneration. It's pretty standard for basic field triage. Seeing this, Ray realized he wasn't the only one leveling up. If he wanted to stay ahead, he'd have to push himself even harder. Dan snagged a basic beast crystal from the ground. Looks like we're safe from the taxman today. Boys. Tax Ray asked. Dan sighed. Explaining the Academy's greedy policy. If you bag more than 10 crystals in a single run, the Academy takes a cut. It's a mandatory contribution. Dan shrugged, explaining that was just how the system worked. But Ray narrowed his eyes. He wasn't about to let them fleece him. Back at the entrance, Lancey was collecting the loot. He eyed Ray suspiciously, convinced the kid had hauled in a massive bounty. Ray coolly checked his dragon system interface. When Ray dropped only 5 crystals into the bin, Lancey's face turned red. Don't play games with me. Cadet, I know you're holding out. Strip down. Now, Lancey commanded. To everyone's surprise, Ray grinned and started removing his gear without hesitation. Lancey tore through the equipment but came up empty. He stood there, fuming and confused, muttering, That's impossible. You stashed them back on the mountain. Didn't you, the knight accused? Ray leaned in, his tone dripping with arrogance. Check all you want, Sir Knight. You won't find a thing. As they walked away, Monk leaned in. Okay. Seriously. I know you had more than 5. How'd you pull that off? Ray just winked. Trade secret. It turned out Ray had discovered a critical flaw in how his powers worked. If he let the system fully process the stored beast crystals, they would be drained of power and turn into worthless rocks in the real world. The dragon system automatically looted the crystals the moment a beast died, a huge advantage over digging through carcasses like everyone else. To keep his cover and his profits, he had commanded the system to pause the extraction process, keeping the loot hidden in his digital inventory but physically intact. Listen up, these are for your use only. And once you store them inside, there's no taking them back out. It's a one-way trip. Jay realized he still had 5 beast crystals tucked away. No way was he handing those over. Tax evasion it was. But he knew the risks. If Lancey caught wind of him holding out, he'd be dead meat. Suddenly, Jay spun around to flag down Gary, figuring he'd left some gear behind. He reached out to tap him on the shoulder, but Gary was zoned out, rambling incoherently about a red door. The second Jay made contact, Gary violently flinched, clamping his hands over his ears and letting out a blood-curdling scream. Jay scrambled to calm him down, while Mong watched from a few paces back, his expression darkening with concern as he trailed behind them. Mong told Sylvia and Jian he was heading to the hunting grounds to scout ahead. In reality, he tracked down the source of the commotion, Jay and the panic-stricken Gary. What's going on here? Mong asked, noting that the rest of the group had already moved on without them. Jay explained that Gary was losing it, rambling about a red door and hearing voices summoning him. The blonde kid looked absolutely terrified, convinced he had to go to the door immediately. Mong's eyes narrowed as he pieced it together. The red door. He's talking about the entrance to Avon Prison. It clicked for Jay. He'd heard that voice too, an entity claiming it had been waiting for him, whispering forgotten history and the dark secrets of this realm. That mysterious voice always emanated from a massive crimson gate, and it would vanish the moment those heavy doors slammed shut. Wait, Jay jolted awake, shouting into the void. The dream had felt too real. Beside him, Gary was tossing and turning, still muttering about that cursed door in his sleep. Jay stared at his friend. It wasn't a coincidence. The door haunting Gary's nightmares was the exact same one calling out to him. Flashback to the hunting grounds, Jay pinned Gary down with a question, demanding to know exactly what kind of nightmares he was dealing with. Trembling, Gary confessed. I walked past Avon Prison just once. I only glanced at those red gates for a split second. Since then, it's every single night. And the worst part, when I wake up, the memories are wiped clean, leaving only the dread. The poor guy looked broken. It's just infinite fear, Gary whispered. Something behind those doors. It won't stop calling my name. Gary resolved to go back there to end it. Mong immediately shut it down. Are you insane? That place is strictly off limits. We get caught, we're expelled, or worse. I don't have a choice, Gary snapped. He had to face it, or those voices in his head would eventually torture him to death. I'm in, Jay said. He looked at Mong. You coming? Mong hesitated, his face pale. It's not just expulsion. Jay, We could actually die in there. Jay didn't flinch. We've been training for this. Our skills are built for the shadows. We have to take the risk. Seeing Mong's refusal, Gary hung his head in guilt. Forget it. I shouldn't have dragged you guys into my mess. He looked at Jay. Don't push him. Honestly, I'm just grateful you're willing to walk into hell with me. No. Jay countered. We need him. Mong's stealth techniques are leagues above ours. We won't make it inside without his help. Cornered. Mong sighed heavily. Fine. But I'm only doing this to settle the score for what you did for me during our duel. Consider my debt paid. Later that night, Jay lay awake. Was the Avron Gate really the source of Gary's torment? It had to be, because Jay was seeing the exact same vision. Could the deepest secrets of this martial world really be buried in the Academy's underground dungeon? The scene shifts to Avron Prison. The atmosphere was heavy, with armored knights standing vigilant watch over the massive entrance. Under the cover of darkness, the trio infiltrated the perimeter, crouching low behind the dense shrubbery. Are we clear? Mong whispered nervously. Relax, Gary replied. I've been staking this place out. Every Tuesday, the elite black armor knights swap shifts with the standard white armor guards. Why the rotation? Jay asked. Probably a mandatory weekly assembly. Gary theorized. It's our window. Jay activated his dragon eyes to scan the structure. His brows furrowed. Something was off. The interior was an endless void of pitch black. The entire prison is subterranean. Jay muttered. That's definitely suspicious. Just then, the movement started. The guards began filing out, heading toward the assembly hall for the shift change. As the last black armor knight vanished, Jay signaled the move. But before they could launch, a hand clamped down on Gary's shoulder. And what do you think you're doing? It was Molly, a third-year black belt senior. I was training nearby and saw you three skittering around like rats, she said, hands on her hips, trying to break into the prison. Huh, she smirked. Gary turned pale, stammering. We were just strategizing. She wasn't buying it. Crash. Suddenly, a stack of barrels toppled over in the distance, instantly drawing the guards' attention. While the guards scrambled to investigate the noise, Jay snapped into focus. That's Mong's signal. He's initiated the distraction. We have to move. Now. Mong is part of this. Molly's eyes went wide. Are you idiots trying to get expelled? This is a massive violation of school code. You're insane. She wouldn't stop lecturing. Gary looked at Jay. Desperate. Senior. What do we do? She's going to blow our cover. She's practically killing us here. We're supposed to be fellow students who car thwack. Gary didn't hesitate. He delivered a swift chop to her neck, and Molly crumpled to the ground. Out cold. I couldn't help it. Gary panted. She just wouldn't. Shut up. We can't leave her, Jay decided, hoisting her over his shoulder. If she wakes up and talks, we're finished. They sprinted toward the entrance, where Mong was already prying the massive red gate open, with the guards still bickering over the fallen barrels. The group slipped into the shadows of the prison. Undetected, while they were busy securing the crates, they remained completely oblivious to the eyes tracking their every move. Deep within the prison, someone was watching the very same man who had murdered the fourth-stage examiner. His gaze locked onto them with malicious intent, whispering under his breath that Elder Zai was going to be very pleased with this development. Meanwhile, the trio managed to slip inside, only to be struck by the complete absence of windows. It was essentially a solid stone box. Gary pulled out a luminous stone to light the dark corridor, startling Mon. It turned out Molly was there too, Gary explained. She'd caught them sneaking around, so they had to drag her along to keep her quiet. Molly finally came to, and Mon rushed to check on her. But judging by the dark look on her face, she was in a foul mood. She immediately lashed out at them for manhandling a senior student, threatening to report the whole lot of them to the academy administration. While Gary tried to stammer out an excuse, Ray cut in without a shred of fear. Go ahead. Report us. Scream your lungs out so we all get expelled right now. That just poured oil on the fire of her rage. Poor Mon jumped in to do damage control, begging Molly to ignore Ray. As Ray walked off, Gary calmly suggested that since they were already inside, they might as well take a look around, still fuming at Ray's attitude. The girl made it crystal clear if they got caught or hurt, it wasn't on her head. Snatching the lightstone from Gary's hand, Molly took the lead, insisting that as the senior student, she should be the one in front. As they descended, Mon realized this wasn't just a basement, it was a full-blown dungeon. Even Gary was clueless, admitting the area was always restricted and he'd never heard of any criminals being transferred here. That was when the girl cleared her throat, dropping a rumor she'd heard the academy used this prison to bury things they didn't want anyone to see. She added that if whatever was down here ever saw the light of day, it would cause a massive scandal. Hearing this, Ray pointed out she didn't actually know what Times was hidden. Molly shot back that it was just hearsay, calling him a brat. She revealed that supposedly, only the 3 knights and 6 elders had ever set foot in this place. Suddenly, the wind picked up, carrying a foul, rotting stench that filled the corridor. Ray's ears pricked up at a strange sound. Mon immediately suggested retreating, and a terrified Molly was quick to agree with him, but Gary refused to budge. He was determined to find the source of his recurring dreams. Reluctantly, the group continued their descent until they reached the bottom level. To their surprise, a massive gate blocked their path. Molly stared at the ancient structure, wondering what strange metal it was forged from given its age. Gary didn't care about the architecture, he just wanted in. He began channeling his chi to force the heavy gates open, but the giant door didn't budge an inch. Straining, Gary called out for Mon to lend a hand. Meanwhile, Ray activated his dragon eyes. Even with his enhanced vision, he couldn't peer through the barrier, suggesting a high-level sealing spell was at work. Molly, annoyed by the racket Ray was making, scoffed that if he was so confident, maybe he should try opening it himself instead of just standing there. Mon, convinced the door was sealed shut, stammered that whatever lay behind it was terrifyingly powerful, and they needed to leave immediately. Gary made it clear he wasn't turning back now. Desperate, he turned to Ray for assistance. The moment the boy placed his hand on the gate, the dragon system interface flashed. "Do you wish to open the gate?" Ray confirmed the command, and in an instant, the massive doors creaked open. Mon's jaw dropped. "How did you do that?" Ray shrugged. "I just gave it a push." The sound of ancient gears grinding echoed deep into the darkness, while their magic crystal provided only a dim radius of light, barely cutting through the gloom. As they ventured further into the abyss, a creeping dread began to settle in their hearts. A sickening crunch broke the silence as Gary stepped on something. Mon trembled, his voice quivering as he asked what it was. Molly, terrified out of her wits, shrieked and latched onto Ray. Ray awkwardly peeled her off, while Gary lowered the light to investigate the source of the noise. It was a pile of massive bones. Gary stared at the remains, speculating they belonged to a high-tier magical beast, or perhaps even a dragon. How could a creature this powerful just perish down here? Ray shook his head, noting that dragons don't die easily. Molly theorized that perhaps the knights had slain the beast long ago. They pushed deeper into the void until Ray sensed the path ending. Molly breathed a sigh of relief, hoping this meant they could finally leave this wretched place. At the end of the tunnel, Gary pointed out a vast underground chamber. Molly noted the cells looked abandoned, but Mon was more concerned by the sheer number of them. Realizing the cages were empty, panic set in for Mon. "They're gone," he whispered. "Whatever monsters were in here, they've escaped." He begged the group to leave, insisting they'd seen enough. Molly agreed, her face pale. If the academy had to lock them down here, they must be monsters of unimaginable power. If they're loose, we're sitting ducks. Ray turned to Gary, reasoning that if they turned back now, they could slip out before the night guard rotation changed. But Gary wasn't listening. His eyes looked manic, muttering that the truth was just a few steps further. As the blonde knight marched forward, Ray shouted a warning, but Gary was gone, lost in a trance, drawn toward the cells by voices only he could hear. Seeing him heading straight for a dead end, Ray lunged to grab him. Just then, a violent gust of wind blasted through the chamber, and Gary tumbled into a hidden abyss. Our protagonist sensed a sudden, lethal spike in the atmosphere. Sword drawn, he stood his ground as a massive behemoth with towering horns crashed out of the dungeon. It was a monarch-rank minotaur, and the sheer pressure left Molly trembling in fear. The beast let out a roar so potent the shockwave instantly flattened everyone to the floor. Molly tried to scramble away, but her ankle gave out. She was a sitting duck. The monster's claw descended to crush her, but Mong intercepted at the last second, his blade biting into the creature's arm to force a stalemate. Molly hit the dirt again from the shock. Mong stood over her, eyes locked on the enemy. "Can you stand?" he barked. He yanked her up roughly. The Minotaur began charging a massive magic blast, Panic flashed in Mong's eyes. Move it. Or we all die right here. The spell fired. A look of absolute terror washed over Mong as he glanced back at the destruction. Scene shift to Gary. He had tumbled into a deep pit, his mind racing with worry for Mong and the rest of the squad, wondering if that nightmare he just saw was actually real. Back on the surface, Day deflected the blast with his blade. His tamed spirit wolf jumped into the fray, shielding Mong and Molly from the fallout. Mong stared at the creature, totally confused. Why is a beast helping us? Day, struggling against the minotaur's weight, gritted his teeth. No time for a lecture. Just know the wolf is on our side. It's watching your six. Get her out of here, Day commanded. The wolf scooped up Molly, leaving Mong stunned that a feral beast would follow orders. As the wolf retreated, Day shouted to Mong, "Mask your presence, I'll pin it down, you strike when I give the signal. One hit. Make it count." The dark-haired disciple hesitated, realizing the plan was borderline suicidal. "It's too risky. That thing's hide is too thick for a one-hit kill. Trust me," Day insisted. Beginning to channel his chi, Mong vanished into the shadows while Day drew the monster's total aggro. The minotaur swatted Day's weapon aside like a twig. Unarmed, our hero lunged forward, grappling the massive horns in a contest of strength. Bad move. The beast overpowered him instantly, dragging him like a ragdoll and slamming him against the dungeon wall. But Day refused to let go, burning every ounce of strength to keep the head pinned. Now, Day roared. Mong materialized behind the creature, dual blades flashing as he executed a pincer strike. Mong put his full weight into the stab, but his eyes went wide, the blades bounced off. The beast's skin was like iron plating. Just then, Gary scrambled onto the scene, screaming his lungs out. "Dodge it." He took a swing at the beast, but his sword shattered on impact. The minotaur unleashed a magical pulse, blasting Gary backward. Day flared his aura, using every drop of chi to keep the monster immobilized so it couldn't pursue his friends. Activating a new mana technique, he finally released the horns to absorb the energy. Hands charged with lightning, he delivered a vertical chop, slicing into the minotaur's spine. A grin crossed his face. Asterisk. That crazy old man's training actually paid off. "Watch out," Gary cried. Too late, the beast backhanded Day, sending him crashing into the earth. Lights out. He had bitten off more than he could chew. His body was too frail to handle the sudden influx of absorbed mana. His meridians were overloaded. As the monster loomed over him for the kill, Day scrambled for a plan B. Then, he sensed a familiar presence. Senior brother stepped out of the shadows, casual as ever, puffing on a cigarette. "You kids really know how to piss off the big ones," he drawled. He waved the students aside. Mong's face lit up with relief. The cavalry had arrived. "Save the praise," the senior snapped. "I'll deal with you lot later." He blurred into motion, targeting the beast's horn. Asterisk, crack. Asterisk. With a casual flick, he snapped one of the minotaur's massive horns clean off. The beast tried to grab his leg, but the senior was faster. A flash of silver, and the monster's fingers hit the floor. Enraged, the minotaur charged, but the senior brother vanished into thin air. Moving like a phantom, he reappeared instantly on the creature's back. One clean slash through the skull, and the colossus slumped over, dead on the spot. Mong hoisted Gary up, awestruck. The power gap was immense. The senior handled a monarch-tier beast like it was a warm-up exercise. The instructor whistled for his wolf to return. As the beast obeyed, our protagonist felt a surge in his core, wondering if he had unlocked a new lightning attribute from the earlier attack. The senior threw the unconscious Molly over his shoulder. "Lucky for you, that beast was running on fumes. If it had full mana, you'd all be paced. Move it," he ordered. "Let's go before something worse shows up." As they marched, the interrogation began. "Start talking," the senior demanded. Molly wisely decided to stay unconscious to avoid the heat. Are we getting expelled?" Mong stammered. The senior smirked. "Be grateful you're still alive to worry about expulsion, kid." After retracing their steps to see how they infiltrated the place, it was nothing short of a divine miracle they hadn't been slaughtered. Monk and Gary were busy groveling, begging for forgiveness, but Sir Kay just turned around, shooting his students a sly wink. He muttered that kicking them out now would be a massive waste of potential. Rookies who could square up against a king-tier beast and live to brag about it were rare. He agreed to sweep this under the rug, provided they kept their mouths shut. Officially, he never saw any of them down there. A wave of pure euphoria washed over the trio as the weight of expulsion lifted off their shoulders. Back at the entrance, Sir Kay's curiosity piqued. He demanded to know how they bypassed the seal. Ray, cool as a cucumber, lied through his teeth and claimed the gate was already ajar. Gary immediately backed up the story. While the instructor pondered the absurdity of a randomly opened dungeon gate, a voice echoed inside Ray's skull. It told him it would remain there, waiting. It dared him to return once he had actually cultivated some real power. Unfazed, our boy recognized the tone. It was the same presence that had haunted his dreams. And with that final mental exchange, the heavy doors slammed shut behind them. Later that night in the academy infirmary, Sir Kay was getting patched up. The dean stood by, looking absolutely flabbergasted by the extent of the damage, seeing his top instructor looking like hamburger meat. The dean assumed that juggling 4 disciples at once was finally taking its toll. While the dean chewed the instructor out, the 3 troublemakers were resting in nearby beds. Gary noted that Sir Kay was actually terrifying, especially when he was acting all meek and mild. Ray hopped out of bed, cutting to the chase. He asked Gary what possessed him to keep pushing deeper into the cave. Even when they tried to physically restrain him, he wouldn't stop. Gary admitted he felt an overwhelming pull, like his body and mind were hijacked by something else. Hearing this, Monk chimed in with a confession. He'd been hitting the library and stumbled upon a text that explained everything. Aside from wielding the lightning element, the Minotaur possessed a sinister passive skill called the Maze of the Heart. It all made sense now. Legend says this abomination was the offspring of a human queen and a divine white bull that was supposed to be a sacrificial offering. When the king discovered the betrayal, he went ballistic. He commissioned a massive, inescapable labyrinth at the edge of the world to hide his shame. It was placed under maximum security. But even locked away, the beast retained the divine strength inherited from its celestial sire. As the creature matured, its desperate obsession with escaping the maze evolved into a psychic ability to twist and manipulate the hearts of those nearby. Victims would lose all rational thought, becoming slaves to their most intense, volatile emotions until they completely lost control. Ray sat there, rolling his eyes. He thought the whole backstory was ludicrous, a human and a bull. The biology alone was a nightmare to imagine. Gary asked how the story ended, but Monk shrugged. The pages were missing, leading him to believe the beast eventually broke out. Otherwise, they wouldn't have just fought one in the dungeon. The blonde boy realized he'd finally found the source of his recurring night terrors. It made sense. The original monster must have spawned offspring. Meanwhile, Ray was preoccupied with the mysterious telepathic voice he'd heard. He wondered if that beast was truly the root cause of Gary's trauma. Before he could dwell on it, Sir Kay barged into the recovery room. The instructor ordered them to stay put and rest for a few days. Thinking a lecture was coming, Ray braced himself. But then he looked closer at their teacher. He realized the man was actually worried about them. Ray waved it off, assuring him it was nothing major, just a couple of cracked ribs. Standard stuff. But Ray's sentimental side vanished instantly. He looked Sir Kay in the eye and asked the real question. Did you get the king-tier beast crystal? And are we splitting the loot? Sir Kay nearly popped a vein. He made it crystal clear that they weren't seeing a dime of that money. That crystal was his hazard pay. He didn't get beaten to a pulp just to share the spoils with a bunch of rookies. Our boy Ray looked visibly disappointed. Having said his piece, Sir Kay turned to leave, mentioning a follow-up checkup in the morning. But Ray wasn't done digging. How did you know we were down there? Ray asked. Gary nodded in agreement. They were the only ones who knew, and they hadn't told a soul. Even Monk hadn't had a chance to snitch. Sir Kay sighed. Calling them nosy brats, who were digging into things above their pay grade, he revealed that the snoopers had tipped him off. The realization hit Ray like a truck. They had been under surveillance the entire time. Monk perked up, recalling a specific rumor circulating around campus. Legend had it that powerful figures disguised as ordinary students and staff were planted to protect the academy's assets from lethal harm. Gary tried to ask what kind of secret ops they ran, but the instructor cut him off. He wasn't about to dox the secret security detail. He told them to focus on their own survival instead. As the door clicked shut, Ray sank into deep contemplation. The more he learned, the more he realized this academy was a labyrinth of secrets, not just a school. Eventually, sleep claimed him. As he drifted off, he analyzed his new ability. He could absorb a target's mana and amplify elemental spells. It seemed situational at best. He glanced over at Gary, who was sawing logs, and remembered he still needed to ensure his noir wolf remained a secret. It seemed Sir Kay hadn't noticed the summon. Also, Gary's nightmares seemed to have vanished. He wasn't sure if killing the beast fixed it, but he'd take the win. The scene shifts, bringing us to the hustle and bustle of the martial arts club. Ray was in the middle of a spar with Elder Vogan. The old master complimented the boy's ferocious, unorthodox attack patterns, but seeing the kid fight with a blade clamped between his teeth, Vogan couldn't help but look at him with a mix of awe and suspicion. Our boy realized his sword style was becoming too passive, all defense, zero offense, but relying solely on his bare knuckles wouldn't cut it either. Elder Vogan nodded, agreeing with the logic, and his face lit up. He told Day he had just the thing stashed away. As the old man rummaged through his closet, Day wondered what kind of treasure could be hidden in a place like this. Finally, Vogan pulled them out, the dragon turtle gauntlets. Just hearing the name got our hero's blood pumping. The dragon-scaled hands looked massive and heavy, but the moment Day slipped them on, he realized there was magic at work. Vogan explained they auto-adjust to the wearer. As the gauntlets shrank down to mold perfectly against Day's forearms, Day asked if they were forged from beast cores. The old man confirmed it specifically. Mid-grade dragon turtle cores. He admitted high-grade cores would have packed a bigger punch, but that kind of power would be overkill. Vogan wanted to give him the best gear possible, but handing over a super weapon wouldn't be fair to the other competitors. Day looked confused, so Vogan asked if he was even aware of the academy tournament. Clearly, the kid was out of the loop. The elder explained that, every year, second-year students and up compete in a massive one-on-one duel bracket. The goal is to identify the top 5 fighters in the entire academy. Vogan added that these elite 5 become the face of the school. They go on to represent the academy in the World Combat Tournament, facing off against monsters from every corner of the globe. Vogan handed the gauntlets over with a challenge: secure at least 10th place. If Day could pull that off, he'd get to keep the gloves permanently. With the bar set high, our boy accepted the challenge with a grin. He thanked the elder, finally armed. Vogan added one last tip: go buy a chestplate or shield. Defense is crucial for missions. Taking the advice, Day headed to the weapon shop, only to nearly have a heart attack when he saw the price tags. The clerk was stone cold, stating prices were fixed. Forging defensive gear from mid-grade cores wasn't cheap. The demand was steep: 10 primary beast cores or 1,000 gold coins. Take it or leave it. Then the shady merchant got greedy. He demanded 10 times extra times cores as hush money, implying he knew Day's source wasn't exactly official. He didn't care where the crystals came from, as long as he got his cut. Day was fuming, but he did the math. If he refused, the academy might investigate his stash, and they'd find no proof of purchase. That would be a disaster. If he got flagged, his solo hunting days were over. Reluctantly, our boy agreed to the blackmail and tossed the bag over. Smirking, the merchant assured him the gear was top tier and snatched the payment. Day just glared at him. He walked away thinking that no matter the job, some humans are just rotten to the core. Just then, Sylvia spotted him. She was beaming, happy to run into Day, and asked if he was shopping for gear since classes were cancelled. Day leaned in and whispered the situation to her, explaining how the greaseball behind the counter had shaken him down. Sylvia didn't hesitate. Furious, she stormed up to the counter, demanding to speak to the owner immediately. The merchant's attitude flipped the second he saw the silver hair. He bowed and scraped, greeting the lady of House Hess. Sylvia demanded the real price for her friend. Day watched from the side, noting how quickly the guy called her lady. It made him realize Sylvia wasn't just rich, she was from a serious power player family. After a brief scolding, she walked back and handed Day the extra crystals the shopkeeper had stolen. Day thanked her, but the moment felt heavy. He couldn't shake the bitterness of how differently people were treated based on their status. It was like night and day. It reminded him of that arrogant Baron Delbert, claiming knights breed knights and peasants breed peasants. Day sighed, concluding that as much as he hated it, that might just be the ugly truth of this world. Wanting to repay her kindness, he pulled out a mid-grade wyvern core. Sylvia tried to refuse, saying it was worth way more than 10 basic cores, but our boy insisted, forcing the crystal into her hand. He assured her he didn't need it now that he was fully geared up. He waved goodbye and walked off. Sylvia stood there, clutching the gift, her face turning a deep shade of red. She held the crystal close, clearly smitten. Meanwhile, Day went back to finish his transaction with the merchant. The shopkeeper was sweating bullets now, apologizing profusely for not knowing Day had VIP friends in high places. Day ignored the sycophant, just happy to feel his chi training paying off. He was buzzing with excitement. With the new armor and Vogan's gauntlets, he was ready to hunt some high-level beasts. The scene then shifts to Elder Jebi, who looked like he was about to explode. He had just heard the kids survived the prison trap. His henchmen reported that spies had tipped off Sir Kay. Kay was the one who swooped in to save the students. Jebi hadn't expected Kay to actually be useful. The henchman added that Kay brought 3 night-knights. And now they were causing trouble. Attacking head-on would be a nightmare right now. He suggests vetting Sir Dave next. But Elder Zepp tells him to cool his jets. Dave is a prime candidate, perfectly suited for the role. The Elder adds a caveat. Though as a knight, Dave's loyalty needs to be absolute. He orders the subordinate to cut him loose for the time being to see what he does, pointing out a different target. He instructs the lackey to deliver a message, pull this off, and the Pure Blood Society will have a shiny new seat waiting for him. Scene change. We cut to the mountainous hunting grounds, where the whole squad is buzzing with energy. Gary is already hyping them up, saying they need to stack that gold so they can upgrade their gear. Mark drops a sincere thank you to Ray, and Ian chimes in, promising to pay him back with interest. Our boy Ray just blinks, playing dumb. You guys talking to me? Ian grabs him from behind in a playful chokehold, teasing that he knows Ray is just being shy. But seriously, they really appreciate it. Ray connects the dots and shoots a glance at Sylvia. This has something to do with you, doesn't it? Martha reads the room instantly, stepping back to give them space. That's when Sylvia spills the beans she sold that intermediate owlbear crystal Ray gave her and distributed the gold to the team under his name. Since she was already rocking a high-tier shield, she tells him, the loot wasn't much use to her personally. She apologizes profusely for making the call without consulting him first. Sylvia braces herself, thinking he is about to blow a fuse. Instead, Ray flashes a grin, pats her shoulder, and praises her leadership instincts. Why so serious all of a sudden, he asks. The sudden proximity short-circuits her brain. She turns beet red and frantically pushes him away. Lo and behold, Mark, Ian, and Martha are lurking in the bushes, spying on the private moment with zero shame. Gary sidles up to Ray, asking if there's a spark between him and Sylvia. Of course, our dense protagonist has absolutely no clue what he is implying. Gary lets out a long, defeated sigh and makes Ray promise not to lead her on. Before Ray can answer, the ground rumbles, bugs are swarming towards them. Battle stations. Ray activates his dragon eyes for a quick scan. Just basic tier critters. He figures they can handle this with their eyes closed. Ian tears through the swarm with ease, looking almost bored. He starts wondering aloud if there is anything around here that can actually put up a fight. Gary notes that Ian's combat skills have leveled up, while Mark carves through the beetles with some seriously impressive swordsmanship. Suddenly, Gary shouts a warning. That is no ordinary bug, it is a Hercules beetle. Mark barely dodges in time, stunned to see a mid-tier monster in the mix. Ian, thinking a bug is a bug, confidently charges the massive creature. His attack bounces right off the thing, is built like a tank. Ray chimes in with bad news. Heads up. We have got more incoming. They are instantly surrounded by a horde. Gary strikes one with his greatsword, but the recoil nearly jars his bones. Their exoskeletons are like steel. The tide turns against them. Martha's arrows are snapping uselessly against the thick carapaces, and Sylvia is losing ground, her shield barely absorbing the heavy impacts as she gets knocked back. Mark, Ian, and Gary are back to back, completely encircled and looking like they are about to be overrun. Boom. A giant beetle drops dead. Ray steps in, rocking vintage gauntlets infused with ki. He is punching through the Hercules beetles like wet paper. Total pro moves. The squad stands there with their jaws on the floor, stunned to see their weakest member dominating the battlefield. Ian's eyes immediately lock onto the weapon. He is drooling over those gauntlets, which are putting out insane damage. Mark explains that the martial arts club advisor must have lent them to Ray. Poor Ian starts wailing in regret, feeling like he definitely signed up for the wrong extracurriculars. Meanwhile, Ray is pulverizing beetles but reminds himself to tone it down, make it look too easy, and his cover is blown. He calls out for backup to sell the act. The team snaps out of it. Martha rains down arrows while Sylvia moves in for the kill with sword and shield. Mark, Ian, and Gary find their rhythm, unleashing a devastating combo of attacks with renewed confidence. Dust settles. Bug's dead. Ian is practically vibrating with excitement. They just farmed a ton of mid-tier magic beast crystals. They are going to be rich. Mark picks one up to inspect. Ray gets ready, to absorb the beast cores. But stops. Birds are fleeing the canopy in panic. He triggers his dragon eyes and spots a massive wildfire raging through the forest. Ray sounds the alarm. Martha vaults up a tree to scout and confirms the bad news. Ray is right. She can see the smoke and flames. Gary presses his ear to the dirt. He hears heavy vibrations, a stampede. The monsters are running for their lives. Ian starts hyperventilating, asking why they are still standing there. Ray shuts him down. We won't make it. We are already boxed in. Panic sets in. Martha screams at Sylvia to send up a distress signal, using the rescue crystal. But Sylvia shakes her head grimly. It is a dud. She tried activating it earlier with 0 luck. Ian looks ready to faint. Suddenly, Gary spots movement and yells. Who goes there? 3 figures step out of the shadows, wearing masks that scream assassin. Mark hopefully suggests they are the rescue squad. But Ray shuts that down immediately. Look at their vibe. Those aren't heroes. Gary bellows, asking if they started the fire. In response, the lead-masked figure simply raises a hand and signals the others to slaughter the kids, while 2 of them jumped Monk and Gary. The guy in the red armor went straight for Ray. The kid managed to deflect the blow with his gauntlets. Mind racing. Who were these creeps? And why? Were they targeting him? Ray got a good look at the masked freak's blade. Definitely not your average piece of steel. Normal weapons didn't glow like that. Over by the others, Dan caught Monk as he fell, and Anne tried to rush to Ray's aid. But a wall of scorching fire cut them off. Anne screamed out for Gary and Ray. But Ray was already scanning the perimeter. Realizing the setup, these masked assassins had split the party on purpose. Ray had to wonder, were he and Gary the primary targets here? Looks like he'd have to take on 2 at once, since Gary was tied up. Ray barked an order at Anne. Get out of here, go find the knights. Anne tried to argue. But Dan grabbed Monk, signaling Sylvia and Martha to retreat. Meanwhile, Ray shouted over to Gary. You good to go? The blonde warrior grinned, assuring him he could handle one of them. Ray analyzed the enemy. These guys were fast. As long as he kept his guard up, they wouldn't land a killing blow. Gary engaged one of the hostiles, buying Ray precious seconds. That was all the time he got. 2 masked assailants lunged at Ray, one swinging a wicked chain weapon. Ray read the trajectory, grabbing the chain midair to pivot out of the way. But the second he stabilized, the other one came in hot, swinging a flaming sword. Ray leaped backward, realizing the pattern the moment he focused on one target. The other would flank him. It was a classic pincer attack. Suddenly, the heavy hitter slammed his weapon into Ray, catching him completely off balance. He smashed into the dirt, but thankfully his armor absorbed the brunt of the impact. Their teamwork was tighter than he expected. Ray realized he needed a new strategy. Then he noticed Gary was favoring his arm. He'd taken a hit. Ray shouted that he had it covered, but the blonde knight refused to back down, insisting he could still take one of the masked creeps. As the assassin wound up for a strike, Gary vowed to make the kill slow and painful. Realizing these guys were out for blood, Ray decided the kid gloves were coming off. He absorbed 5 basic tier beast crystals in a flash. Energy surged through him, triggering his Dragon Knight transformation. Horns sprouted from his head as he summoned Noir. The wolf materialized, undergoing its own evolution into a horned beast. Growling low, it's hunting time. Seeing Ray cast magic, one assassin panicked. Their intel never mentioned the target was a mage. The leader barked to press the attack, and they lunged. Ray recognized the setup immediately. It was the same move as before. He wasn't falling for that twice. Ray caught the scythe blade barehanded and signaled Noir to flank. He tried to bind them with the chain, but they slipped the trap effortlessly. Ray didn't look surprised, though. He sicked the wolf on Scythe Boy and dashed forward to handle the other one himself. As he engaged, the second assassin tried to blindside him, but Noir intercepted just in time. Ray scoffed. I eat monsters like you for breakfast. The assassin barely evaded Noir's fangs. Meanwhile, Ray was weaving through a flurry of strikes, confused why the guy kept using the same pattern. Ray noted the blade's razor edge but decided to catch it anyway. The masked fighter was clearly avoiding close quarters without his chain support. Ray wondered what the game plan was, so he launched a sudden offensive to rattle him. Just as Ray predicted, the masked coward refused to engage, and retreated. Ray had found the weakness. He glanced over at Gary, who seemed to be giving his opponent hell. Gary shouted, "We're students of Avrion," as he drove his sword into the assassin, demanding to know who sent them. As the blonde pinned him down, Ray screamed, a warning. The other assassin had launched a fireball directly at them. But the blast didn't hit Gary, it incinerated the assassin he was holding. The man erupted into flames. Screaming in agony, Gary watched in horror. They were willing to torch their own teammate just to get a shot. He stumbled toward Ray to regroup, adrenaline fading. Gary shook from the pain and collapsed. Ray told him to stay down. His voice cold. "I'm going to tear these bastards apart." Ray clenched his sword between his teeth. "Scum like you don't deserve to breathe. Discarding a comrade's life like trash." That was the one thing Ray couldn't forgive. He unleashed a devastating strike on the remaining masked man. But somehow, the assassin tanked it. He'd managed to dodge the fatal blow. Ray realized these weren't street thugs. Their gear and weapons were top-tier military grade. Ray looked down, his gauntlets were cracking. He needed an opening fast, or his gear would shatter before the enemy did. To buy time, Ray commanded Noir to intercept. The assassin braced himself, expecting a high-level beast, but realized it was only intermediate tier. He sneered. "Your pet is going to die before you do." Noir ignored the taunt, circling the masked fighter in a blur of speed, doing his best to disorient the enemy, gripping the chains. He demanded the assassin stop looking down on him. The killer had snared the wolf, but Gary wasn't about to stand by and watch his beast get slaughtered. Without wasting a heartbeat, the assassin leveled his weapon to execute the wolf. But Gary flashed in, intercepting the blow just in time, assuming the kid was suicidal for trying to save a monster. The assassin shifted his fury to Gary, hammering him until he could barely stay on his feet. He slammed Gary into the earth so hard the sword jarred loose from his grip, but the blonde fighter locked onto the killer's leg like a vice, screaming at the wolf to grab the steel and fight with the same ferocity as its master. Ray, the beast, understood perfectly, snatching the blade between its jaws. Just as the masked freak prepared to end Gary's persistence, the wolf moved a clean, brutal slash that severed the assassin's head from his shoulders, while the remaining masked thug stood frozen, staring at his headless partner. Ray seized the opening and launched a full power strike. The hit didn't do much physical damage, but it shattered the mask. The face revealed underneath left them paralyzed with shock. It was Sir Lance. As the fragments fell away, Gary stared in disbelief, stamina failing him as he stammered. "You bastard. How can you call yourself a teacher?" Lance didn't even blink, coldly informing him that dead men don't need answers. He lunged at Gary, blade raised. But the wolf threw itself into the path of the attack. Taking the hit meant for the boy. Ray immediately recalled the beast, dissolving it into mist before it was destroyed, leaving Gary collapsed and totally defenseless on the ground. Furious, Lance stalked toward Ray, muttering dark promises about slaughtering them one by one. As the traitor approached, his sword engulfed in flames, Ray wondered how such trash existed, people who thrived on inflicting pain on the weak. Deciding it was time to collect the debt, Ray didn't dodge. He caught the burning blade directly with his gauntlet. Lance smirked, thinking the kid was just delaying the inevitable. "Fool. Enjoy burning to ash. I'm not the one dying today," Ray retorted coldly, while Lance just scoffed, waiting for the heat to melt him. The knight had no idea Ray was draining the fire essence straight from the sword until he watched his own flames flicker and die. Irritated, Lance spat, "Clingy piece of trash," and buried his boot in Ray's gut, forcing him to release the weapon. The force of the kick sent them both skidding backward, putting distance between them. With ribs cracked and aching, Ray knew he had one shot. He had to use the fire essence he had just stolen. As it was the only magic left in his tank, he fused his internal ki with the stolen flames, forging a unique energy weapon and focusing every last drop of power he had. Ray's aura exploded, the ki fueled flames making him look like a legendary dragon knight descending for judgment. Lance froze, speechless. "You're a monster," he whispered, concluding they should have put this demon down years ago. Ray looked at him with pity, as Lance swung his sword in desperation. Our boy moved faster, slicing cleanly through the knight's arm. The limb still clutching the sword went spinning through the air. Lance stared at the stump, mind unable to process why his fire defense failed, until the blood sprayed and a scream ripped from his throat. Ray didn't hesitate. He clamped his burning gauntlet onto Lance's face, channeling the heat directly into his skull. It was a brutal execution, and as the life faded, Ray muttered that the traitor got exactly what he earned. Just then, Sir Kay and the cavalry arrived. Taking one look at the masks and realizing these were agents of the Pure Blood Society, Winford had to know. Kay shouted for Ray to stay with them, but the adrenaline crash hit hard. Ray collapsed, Succumbing to his injuries, the scene shifts to the infirmary, where Ray is laid up, wrapped head to toe in bandages like a mummy. When he finally blinked his eyes open, Sylvia was right there, looking relieved enough to cry. "How long was I out?" he croaked. And she told him softly that 3 days had passed. She helped him sit up, assuring him the healers had done their job. He vaguely remembered the searing pain in his mouth, but the magic had knit him back together. Sylvia waved. The others in the whole squad had been waiting for him to wake up. Sir Kay stepped in with the students and immediately cast a soundproofing barrier around the room to ensure total privacy. "What's with the secrecy?" Ray asked. Scanning the faces of his classmates, Kay got straight to the point, revealing to the group that the attack on Ray and Gary wasn't random. They had nearly been killed. Kay explained he had already briefed Winford, but he needed Ray to confirm the identity of the assailants. Ray took a breath and prepared to drop the bombshell. They were masked assassins. I couldn't identify 2 of them, but the third one, it was Sir Lance. The room went dead silent. Kay didn't look surprised, but Sylvia gasped. "Are they with the Shadow Guild?" Kay shook his head grimly. "No. If it were the Shadow Guild, our problems would be simple. This is much worse." Then he dropped the bomb. The Pure Blood Society was the one behind the ambush. Unlike the Shadow Guild, these guys have deep roots and plenty of supporters right inside the academy. Word on the street is they've even got one of the elders in their pocket. That terrified the students. The idea that a revered elder would greenlight such a thing, it was unthinkable. We're talking about cold-blooded murder here. The instructor tried to keep a lid on the panic, but he didn't sugarcoat the situation. It wasn't resolved yet. Jay asked the obvious question, "What's their endgame?" Skay figured. Jay had already connected the dots. "I summoned the redheads," he said. "You lot fit the victim profile." That's when our boy cut to the chase. "So, they want to wipe us out." The twins looked bored, but On was shaking. Kai, looking just as rattled, couldn't make sense of it. "That doesn't add up," he said. "The prophecy says one of us is destined to save the world. What good does killing us do?" The instructor sighed. "You're missing the second half of the prediction." Then the master dropped the history lesson 11 years ago. The prophecy claimed the red-haired child would either be the world's savior or the cause of its total destruction. With a double-edged prophecy like that, the bloodline purists went nuts. They couldn't stomach the idea of commoners inheriting the legacy they'd guarded for generations, and unfortunately, plenty of people share that toxic mindset. He went on about the ongoing war at the Allure border. "We're fighting off the darkness and rival nations," he explained. "We need the Academy standing strong. However, we can't just expose the Pure Blood Society. If the Allure Kingdom fractures from the inside, our fragile peace crumbles." Hearing that, Kai frowned. "So what, we just sit here and let them take shots at us?" Jay, on the other hand, let out a breath. He seemed relieved that this didn't involve the others, since they weren't the chosen ones. Skay snapped at him for that attitude. "Don't be selfish," he clarified. "We're all in this mess together." He warned the students to keep their heads on a swivel. The society was getting bolder by the day. Then Skay reassured them, mentioning he'd stationed watchers nearby and that the knights would be keeping an eye on things. But he added a grim reminder, the list of people you can trust is short. In the end, you have to rely on yourselves. Gary muttered under his breath. "Guess there's no choice but to train hard and get stronger." Patting poor Gary's broken arm, Skay tried to lighten the mood with some dark humor. "Usually, the victims who wait for a savior are the first to die." While the students tried to figure out if that was actually supposed to be comforting, the instructor decided he'd had enough chit-chat. He shooed them away, needing a private word with Jay. 1 week later, Jay finally walked out of the infirmary. He was ecstatic. Staying in that hospital bed had nearly driven him insane. He mulled over the recent battle. The gloves the old man gave him were trashed. He'd need to get those repaired as soon as possible. He also thought about his little wolf. The poor thing got hurt, and healing it cost him a chunk of intermediate beast crystals. Conclusion, he needed to go hunting to restock. But then Skay's warning popped into his head. And just like that, the boy couldn't relax. We cut back to a flashback in the hospital room, where Jay looked visibly shaken. The realization hit him he was likely the child mentioned in the prophecy. Skay had laid it out clearly. Jay possessed qualities that set him apart from everyone else. Specifically, his body's ability to bounce back at unnatural speeds. Even from death's door, Jay tried to play it cool, but the teacher wasn't buying it. He guessed that Jay had managed to use magic, too. As the instructor eyed him with suspicion, our boy started sweating bullets. Frantically thinking up a plausible excuse, he considered just coming clean. "Hey, I used to be a dragon in a past life. It would explain the black hair he had as a kid and his lingering draconic traits. Meanwhile, our protagonist got lost in thought about that weird dragon system. Skay clarified the danger. The Pure Blood Society believes you can wield magic. That puts a massive target on your back. Snapping out of the flashback, he reflected on the fight. Laney had been a handful, which meant the next assassin they sent would be an absolute monster. The scene shifts to Elder Jebi, who looked ready to explode after the mission's failure. He couldn't believe how useless Lonnie turned out to be. The Elder was beyond disappointed, ranting that the fool couldn't even handle a single brat, despite being decked out in top-tier equipment, while Jay was just glad Laney died standing so he couldn't spill any secrets. The villain's assistant reported that Kai and Winford had located their targets, but the assistant added a caveat: they wouldn't be able to touch Jay for a while. Elder Jebi assured him that a delay was acceptable. In the meantime, he ordered, "Summon Debus. We've ignored him for too long." The Elder planned to have Debus rip out a few fingernails to prove his loyalty before storming off. Later, Jay arrived at the academy. Gary greeted him with a shake of his head, asking, "Dude, why are you always injured?" Jay mentioned he'd thrown hands with some old-timer back at the martial arts club. It got Ray thinking, what kind of sketchy fight club were they running over there? Just then, Martha and Sylvia burst into the dorms with news for Gary. He had mail. Sylvia was beaming. But Martha, she just hinted that he really needed to do something about that bird's nest on his head. Dan chimed in, telling him to rock a half-shaved look like his. Our main man wasn't having it, though looking like Dan was the last thing on his bucket list. Then Kai jumps in with his 2 cents, telling him to just go full chrome dome, like him. Ray finally clocks Kai standing there in their room and asks what on earth he's doing in their quarters. Monk explained that Kai had been begging for a transfer. Since there was an empty bunk, Sir K signed off on it, figuring it'd be better for the squad to stick together. Ray tried to protest, warning everyone that the guy never shuts up. But then he glanced over at Gary and realized the mood had shifted completely. Gary suddenly bolted out the door without a word. Sylvia figured it had to be whatever was in that letter. Dan cracked a joke about him getting dumped, but Ray wasn't laughing. He chased after him, activating his Dragon Eyes skill to track Gary heading straight for the roof. Ray sprinted up the stairs and found his friend just sitting there on the edge, lost in thought. When asked what was wrong, Gary's voice broke. He'd gotten news about his little sister, Amy. Ray asked what happened. Dreading the answer, Gary dropped the bombshell: she was gone. Memories of Amy flooded Ray's mind, and the guilt hit him hard. He never even got to say thank you. The reality sank in. She was really gone. Ray felt himself crumbling inside as tears started streaming down his face. Then Gary spoke up, his voice hollow, saying he couldn't escape the images in his head. The nightmares were eating him alive. He kept seeing Amy being ripped to shreds by a beast at the Roland Magic Academy. She was just lying there, helpless, while a crowd of highborn nobles stood by and watched her die like it was entertainment. Gary broke down sobbing, insisting it wasn't just a bad dream, it was a vision. He knew it was real. His blood boiled as he explained the rest of the letter. The nobles had sent his parents a fat stack of cash as compensation for their loss. Gary snapped, trembling with rage. To those elites, his sister was just some replaceable peasant girl from the sticks. Ray stayed silent, letting him vent. The blonde knight screamed to the heavens, swearing he'd never forgive them. He was going to hunt down whoever was responsible. Through the tears, his resolve hardened. He stated it plain and simple: he was going to kill them all. Hearing that, Ray didn't hesitate. He looked his friend in the eye and told him, "Count me in." Overwhelmed, Gary grabbed Ray's shoulders. He knew Ray's secret, that he had awakened magic, could command fire, and even summon a beast. He urged Ray to show the elders his power so they'd transfer him to the Magic Academy. But Ray hesitated, explaining that his human potential was actually painfully average. If he revealed his true strength now, they wouldn't promote him. They'd put him under a microscope and watch his every move. Ray placed a hand on Gary's shoulder, reassuring him that he wasn't about to let him fight this battle alone. He proposed they find a way to leave Avrion together. Gary shook his head. Though it was impossible, they were locked into the academy system. Even after graduation, they were bound by a mandatory 2-year service contract. That's when Ray played his ace. The academy tournament was coming up. If they secured the top rankings, they'd be selected to represent the school in the All-Kingdom Combat Tournament. That was their ticket to cross paths with the people from Roland. Gary wiped his eyes and nodded fiercely. He was in. The scene shifts to the third-year dorms, where Harry, the blonde senior, was asking where the rest of the crew was. The lone guy in the room told him everyone was out grinding for the tournament. It was that time of year. After all, Harry asked if there were any heavy hitters this year. The guy shrugged it off, saying he was pinning his hopes on some interesting rookies from the second-year class instead. Back at the training grounds, Kai watched Gary, who had been pushing himself to the breaking point lately. Monk leaned over to Ray, asking what was up with Gary. Ray just shook his head and told him to give the guy some space. Gary was fighting his own demons, convinced he was too weak. In a fit of frustration, he slammed his blade into the dirt. Suddenly, Sir Kay materialized behind them. He told the squad to follow him. He had a surprise for them. The instructor led them to a stash of repaired gear and told them to take their pick. The students were wide-eyed. This was high-tier loot recovered from the hunting grounds. They didn't waste a second before grabbing weapons. Monk was drooling over a chest piece, but Kai hesitated. He asked if he was allowed to grab one, pointing out that he'd be useless if they got ambushed without gear. Sir Kay gave him the green light, explaining that the upcoming tournament was open to all second years, so they needed to be ready. He dropped some knowledge on them. Rich noble families always attended these events. If they put on a good show, there was a solid chance they'd get scouted. Secure a spot as a guard for a noble house after graduation, and you're set for life. It was a pretty sweet deal. Gary's ears perked up. He realized that if he played his cards right, he could infiltrate a noble family as a guard. With a smirk, Ray reached for a familiar blade, Lancelot's sword. Sir Kay warned him that while the steel was intact, its ability to channel fire magic was toast. It's basically trash-tier equipment now, only good for a total rookie. Someone told him to swap it out for something decent. But then it clicked. He realized he'd already drained every ounce of fire essence from the blade. Turns out, elemental engraving was way more broken than he expected. He headed out to the hunting grounds and stumbled upon a zone completely frosted over. Stepping into the frozen wasteland, he noticed beasts patrolling the perimeter, channeling his internal energy and igniting his flames. He obliterated the creatures. Spotting a horde of ice golems, Jay grinned. Jackpot. Totally worth the trip. He commanded his summon to wipe out the left flank. Fast forward 3 weeks. It's game day at Avian Knight Academy, and the place is swarming with rivals from every school on the map. Inside the chaotic waiting room, Martha gathered her crew to drop a bombshell. The tournament rules had been rewritten this year. Jan looked totally lost, having assumed they were sticking to standard one-on-one duels. Before Martha could set him straight, the official knights marched into the hall. Amidst the buzzing excitement, an instructor barked out the names of the top 5 rankers from the second and third years. Maz, Ensign, Sylvia, and Gary stepped up to the plate. Whispers broke out among the crowd. Turns out, that whole squad shared the same dorm. Meanwhile, Jan figured he wouldn't even be standing there if Jay hadn't forfeited his spot. The head knight moved on to the third years. Cherry, the third-ranked fighter, mentioned Jay was out on a mission, but then the name Jay was called, and a massive hulk of a guy stepped forward. He introduced himself as Jay Gray, flashing a wild grin and announcing he was itching for a fight. The fifth-ranked girl just side-eyed him and muttered, "What a moron." Seeing the Academy's #1 ace in the flesh sent the crowd into a frenzy. Nobody expected the top dog to actually bother with this tournament. Maz looked nervous, leaning over to ask Gary if they were seriously expected to throw hands with the third years. Jan was already spiraling, convinced they had zero chance against a lineup of the top-ranked seniors and sophomores. The head knight cut through the noise to announce that those 10 elites would be skipping the first preliminary round entirely. The crowd gasped. Kai, who'd been sweating about facing the seniors, suddenly realized the alternative wasn't much better. He'd be fighting his own roommates. The instructor continued, revealing the first round's format, a massive battle royale, mixing both second and third-year students. Only 5 survivors from each heat would advance to the next stage. Singling out Ian, a burly guy, the knight aimed an arrow at him to demonstrate. The rule was simple. Everyone gets a wooden weapon and starts with 100 health points. Then, without hesitation, she fired the wooden bolt straight at Ian, explaining that taking a hit drains your HP gauge. She noted that reinforcing your defense with chi reduces the damage taken. Hit 0, and you're instantly disqualified and warped out of the arena. Orders were barked for the second years to gear up and select their weapons from the armory. Seaton was spotted whispering to Eric, plotting to make sure Jay didn't get a single breathing room once they stepped into the ring. Jay grabbed a simple wooden sword. It felt right in his hands, while Kai opted for a metal chain. The announcer roared, kicking off the first match of the Avian Academy tournament and welcoming the fighters. Matt looked around at the packed stadium, looking a bit green around the gills. While the knights and elders took their VIP seats, Elder V watched Jay from the stands, swelling with pride. It was finally time for the kid to show the world what he was made of. Let the games begin.